In a bustling bar within the royal capital of Albert, patrons gossip about a monster whose power defies all logic. Rumors claim this unbelievably strong beast commands the legendary Fenrir, a former servant of the Demon King, and the patrons murmur that it single-handedly wiped out a notorious band of thieves. The tension breaks into laughter when someone mentions the terrifying entity supposedly looks like a black-haired child, causing the confused drinkers to scoff at the ridiculous image. The ridiculous rumor goes even further, claiming the fearsome child travels with a tiny puppy by its side, as disbelief sweeps through the tavern at the absurd mental picture. Suddenly, a patron realizes a figure matching that exact description was just sitting beside them at the counter, while outside, the mysterious individual slips away. Quietly relieved to have escaped the spotlight, the black-haired child sighs, lamenting the struggles of being an adult while walking alongside his fluffy, mystical companion, and mutters in disbelief that his infamous reputation has already reached the capital. In a violent flash of a past life, a massive speeding truck careens dangerously toward unsuspecting pedestrians. Kanzaki Yuuki, a completely ordinary 33-year-old corporate worker, is sent flying through the air, and as his consciousness fades, he morbidly reflects that he never expected to die this way. A devastated young woman weeps over Yuuki's broken body, apologizing that he sacrificed himself to save her, but despite the tragedy, Yuuki feels a strange sense of peace about his final act. As his life flashes before his eyes, he remembers helping his father raise his younger siblings after his mother's early passing, feeling immense pride knowing they have both recently achieved their own success. Hearing his siblings' past gratitude echoes in his mind, affirming that his sacrifices were truly appreciated, and though cut tragically short, Yuki embraces his demise with a smile, knowing he lived a genuinely fulfilling life. Content with his fate, Yuki boldly declares that he has absolutely no regrets, until a mysterious voice suddenly breaks the silence to congratulate him on being chosen. Yuki snaps his eyes open in utter bewilderment as a tiny pair of bare feet unceremoniously rests atop his head. Sitting in an ethereal void, a deeply confused Yuki questions his own death while staring at a childlike figure, and the mysterious entity casually confirms his demise before Yuki demands to know her identity. The small figure proudly declares that this realm is the sacred space of a god, leading Yuki to immediately piece the puzzle together, realizing exactly what kind of supernatural encounter this is. The lively goddess announces that out of countless deceased souls, Yuki has been handpicked to be reborn in a magical new world, gleefully congratulating him for his selfless act of saving another person's life. Yuki stoically accepts the absurd situation, calmly asking if he is about to experience a standard reincarnation, leaving the goddess smirking and impressed by his quick understanding of his new reality. Because he died saving a complete stranger, the goddess promises to resurrect him as a highly powerful being loaded with virtue points, but despite her generous offer, Yuki narrows his eyes, finding the entire system incredibly suspicious. Throwing her arms wide, the enthusiastic deity offers to grant him absolutely any ability he desires, translating the concept to his earthly logic while excitedly hyping up the possibilities. She enthusiastically pitches the classic fantasy dream, promising that with a cheat skill, he can become a legendary hero and easily win over women. Yuki stares back with an unimpressed, deadpan expression and instantly rejects the goddess's extravagant offer, causing the deity to freeze, utterly baffled by his immediate and blunt refusal. Smiling warmly at the memory of his family, Yuki insists that living honestly and laughing with loved ones is his only desire, firmly telling the stunned goddess that he has no need for overpowered cheat abilities. Flustered by his extreme humility, the goddess argues that sending him into a new world with absolutely nothing would be fundamentally unfair, stroking her chin as she becomes determined to bless him with something practical. After a moment of thought, the goddess confidently decides to bestow upon him resilient, powerful Yuki watches in mild confusion as the goddess suddenly pivots her attention and mechanically prepares for the transfer. Extending her hand like a gun, the deity initiates a dramatic countdown as the magical coordinates and power output lock into place. Wielding a massive bazooka, she casually mentions she added a hidden language skill, but admits she cannot control his starting age or location, prompting a terrified Yuki to scream in panic, realizing he is literally being blasted into his next life. Firing the weapon, the goddess cheerfully shouts that his accumulated virtue points will unlock mystery abilities for him to discover later. Waving an energetic goodbye and wishing Kanzaki Yuki a fulfilling new life, Yuki is violently sucked into a swirling, chaotic vortex, his body twisting through the dimensional rift, but despite the turbulent ride, he clings to the hope of a normal life and wonders what his virtue points will bring. Embracing the unknown, he quietly accepts his fate and closes his eyes as the chaotic transition comes to an end. A small glowing bundle drops into a snowy landscape, and a tiny baby opens its wide, bewildered eyes. The reincarnated Yuki looks around in horror, realizing the goddess dropped him straight onto a freezing, perilous snow mountain, and curses his luck as he remembers her warning about the randomized spawn location. Examining his tiny infant hands, Yuki is shocked to discover that the biting cold isn't actually harming him, quickly deducing that this unnatural resilience is the strong body the goddess promised. Grateful for his enhanced physical state, the infant contemplates using his mobility to crawl toward safety and find shelter. His survival plans are instantly shattered when a menacing pack of glowing, crystalline horned wolves surrounds his tiny body. Squeezing his eyes shut in absolute terror, the helpless infant braces for the agony of being eaten alive, lamenting the cruel irony of dying mere minutes after being reincarnated. As the ferocious wolves lunge toward their prey, Yuuki tightly guards his face and prays the impending death as painless, just before a heavy booted foot kicks off the snowy ground at blinding speed. Descending from the sky like a thunderbolt, a mysterious cloaked warrior violently slashes through the pack with a gleaming dagger. The fierce rescuer glares at the surviving beasts with murderous intent and commands them to begone. Still alive against all odds, the infant Yuuki stares up in complete awe and confusion at his unexpected savior. The cloaked figure floats in the air, and Yuuki watches in absolute disbelief as this impossibly strong human blows away the entire wolf pack with a single devastating strike. As the surviving wolves whimper and flee, the rescuer lands gracefully, and Yuuki silently laments just how incredibly harsh this new world is. Staring up at the snowy sky, the tiny infant genuinely questions if he even has what it takes to survive in such a brutal environment. The mysterious warrior crouches down in the snow, gently checking on the shivering child to ask if he is all right. Gazing up at his savior's scarred but gentle face, Yuuki is deeply moved by the stranger's kindness as the warrior softly reassures him that he doesn't have to worry anymore. The kind-hearted warrior cradles the freezing baby in his arms, wondering aloud why a child was left in such a desolate place, while Yuuki happily reflects that good people still exist in this world. Standing up with the infant secured in his grasp, the rescuer notes that there is absolutely no point in leaving the vulnerable baby out in the deadly cold. Letting out a heavy sigh, the warrior steels himself and makes a swift decision about their next move. Holding the child tight to his chest, he firmly declares that he will take the infant to a specific safe place. Merging from the harsh wilderness, they soon arrive at a beautiful, secluded cottage nestled peacefully by a tranquil lake. The warrior carries the baby up to the charming home and calls out for Olympia, leaving Yuuki in utter awe as he wonders if he has just been brought to paradise. A lovely, ethereal woman gracefully floats down from the sky to greet them, her gentle voice singing out as she approaches the blooming garden. Clasping her hands together in sheer delight, the beautiful spirit beams down at the tiny infant and cheerfully welcomes the adorable little traveler. Yuuki stares up wide-eyed at her sparkling, unearthly beauty, instantly realizing that this gorgeous woman must be something entirely other than human. The warrior interjects, slightly confused by her choice of words as he questions why she referred to the child as a traveler. Smiling warmly, she explains that occasionally wandering souls from distant, unknown worlds simply appear in their room. Looking down at Yuuki with deep understanding, she gently notes that his otherworldly origin explains why he was found abandoned in such a dangerous place. Bending down with a radiant smile, she sweetly introduces herself and kindly asks the tiny boy for his name. Yuuki attempts to state his full name, but his infantile vocal cords fail him, causing the spirit to tilt her head in confusion. Frustrated by his own tiny body, Yuuki stammers and mentally curses the fact that he cannot even speak properly yet. Despite his broken pronunciation, the spirit warmly accepts his attempt and brightly compliments what she considers to be a lovely name. Wrapping her arm affectionately around her companion, she introduces herself as Olympia the Spirit and proudly presents the scarred warrior as Lucy the Hunter. Yuuki adorably thanks them both for saving him, his heart melting with gratitude as he realizes that their profound kindness outshines the beauty of the world itself. Vowing to someday repay their immense generosity, Yuuki suddenly remembers his physical limitations and awkwardly accepts that he is still just a helpless 3-year-old toddler. Snapping back to the harsh reality of the situation, Lucy points out the most pressing issue, noting that the child still lacks a proper home. Olympia's eyes sparkle with sudden inspiration, and she dramatically claps her hands together to announce that she has made a final decision. Lunging forward with explosive affection, Olympia sweeps the tiny, bewildered child into a massive hug and joyfully declares that they will raise him together. She argues that since the boy has no parents in this world, it is their duty to protect him, leaving a flustered Lucy to question how she jumped to that massive conclusion so quickly. Cradling Yuuki gently, Olympia solemnly explains that the world has been utterly messed up ever since the Demon King released his miasma upon death. Pointing a stern finger at Lucy, she fiercely insists that their secluded home is the absolute safest place for a vulnerable child to grow up. Yuuki listens intently from Olympia's arms, silently agreeing that he would die instantly if abandoned and acknowledging that Lucy's incredible power is exactly what it takes to survive here. Touched by the child's plight and knowing the dangers of the outside world, Lucy closes his eyes, sighs in defeat, and finally agrees for the boy's sake. Overjoyed by his protector's acceptance, the toddler looks up at the hunter with wide, grateful eyes and softly calls his name. Olympia playfully tosses the giggling toddler into the air, teasing Lucy for his soft heart while the rugged hunter rubs his head with an embarrassed smile. Leaning in close with a comforting, motherly gaze, Olympia promises the reincarnated soul that he is safe now and perfectly welcome to stay with them forever. Leaning his cheek into her soft hand, Yuuki beams with a bright, innocent smile, overwhelmingly glad that he met these two wonderful people. Bringing the joyous moment back down to earth, Lucy's practical mind takes over as he suggests they finally get the starving child something to eat. Sitting at the rustic wooden table, Yuuki watches his new guardians prepare a meal, quietly reflecting on how he never allowed himself to lean on anyone in his past life. Surrounded by the comforting warmth of a loving home, Yuuki silently vows that he will grow strong and absolutely repay them for their kindness someday. A peaceful year passes in the blink of an eye, and a much more energetic Yuuki happily waves goodbye to his new mother as he heads out into the world. Bounding gracefully across jagged rocks, the energetic young boy performs a series of nimble, acrobatic flips. Sticking a perfect landing, the reincarnated toddler notes with satisfaction that his new body is growing steadily. Clenching his tiny fists in excitement, he marvels at the incredible physical capabilities of his 4-year-old form. Scaling a steep ledge with all his might, the boy pushes through his struggles, realizing he needs more training to stop relying entirely on his guardians. His intense solo workout is abruptly interrupted when a stern Lucy catches him by the collar, demanding to know what he is doing while mentioning that Olympia is worried. Standing alongside the ethereal spirit, the boy notes that he playfully refers to Olympia as mom and the rugged hunter Lucy as mother. Staring down at the adventurous toddler, Lucy frowns slightly and asks why the boy was attempting to climb the dangerous cliff. Glancing toward the sky, the young boy confesses that he simply wanted to see the miasma-filled world for himself. Lucy gently explains that while Olympia's barrier keeps them safe, the outside world constantly spawns new miasma that drives fierce monsters completely berserk. Determined to understand his new reality, the curious boy questions what lies beyond their sanctuary, wanting to know more about the world he lives in. Charmed by the child's fierce curiosity, Lucy flashes a warm smile and agrees to show him the truth just for today. With the boy tucked safely under her arm, the powerful hunter leaps effortlessly toward the sky. Clinging tightly to his guardian, the child is left utterly amazed by the sheer speed and agility of the person he lovingly calls mother. Reaching the summit in mere seconds, Lucy announces their arrival while the poor boy hangs limply from her grasp, dizzy from the explosive ascent. Shaking off the disorientation, the young boy's eyes instantly widen in absolute shock at the scene unfolding before him. Lucy solemnly explains that this mountain, once known as the Holy Peak of Athos, used to be a vibrant land overflowing with the pure power of spirits. Staring out at a desolate landscape swarming with dark creatures, Lucy reveals that the corrupted realm is now known as the Demon Mountain. The horrifying transformation leaves the tiny boy completely speechless as he gazes over the devastated, monstrous terrain. Lucy fondly recalls the original Athos as a breathtakingly beautiful place teeming with gentle animals, admitting she desperately wanted him to see the home Olympia once loved. Seeing the deep sorrow etched on Lucy's scarred face, the child finally understands the immense grief his adoptive mothers carry. Struck by a sudden, brilliant idea, the young boy realizes exactly how he can repay their boundless kindness. With bright, hopeful eyes, he eagerly asks if growing up and restoring the mountain to its original beautiful form would make his mothers happy. Touched by the child's pure-hearted resolve, Lucy's hardened expression softens into a deeply affectionate smile as she quietly agrees. Gently patting the toddler's head, the seasoned hunter admits she has no idea how he will achieve such a monumental task, but she believes he just might be able to pull it off. Standing on the edge of the ruined peak, the young boy reflects that he had never possessed a true dream for the future in his entire past life. Gazing out at the daunting, miasma-choked horizon together, he silently acknowledges the impossible odds but vows to make it happen someday. Clenching his fists with fiery determination, he loudly declares his ultimate dream to completely purify the mountain, deciding that having such a grand ambition actually feels amazing. Grounding himself in reality, the pragmatic boy knows that before saving the mountain, he must first train hard enough to simply survive in this brutal world. Meanwhile, deep within the frozen forest, a vicious pack of glowing wolves aggressively charges toward the sanctuary. With a sudden, violent impact, a shimmering hexagonal shield shatters into pieces as the perimeter defenses are brutally breached. Standing peacefully in her garden, Olympia abruptly halts and looks toward the sky, sensing the catastrophic disruption in her magic. As a massive, terrifying wolf throws its head back and howls, the horrified spirit realizes her protective barrier has completely fallen. A young boy named Yuuki enthusiastically swings a wooden sword, practicing his strikes in front of a stone building while an observer watches in the background. A woman's voice calls out from the house, announcing that it is mealtime and prompting Yuuki to cheerfully acknowledge her. Warm bowls of hearty stew and a woven basket of fresh bread are gently placed onto the wooden dining table. Sitting at the table with his adoptive mothers, Yuuki excitedly thanks Lucy, who praises his vastly improved movements during training. Yuuki reflects internally that even after reincarnating into this strange and dangerous world, he has finally found a true, meaningful goal. Looking affectionately at the two women who raised him, he vows to repay their kindness by cutting off the world's miasma and restoring Athos to its beautiful state. Out on the rocky terrain, Lucy explains that merely subjugating the monsters born from the miasma is only a temporary symptomatic treatment. She poses a hypothetical challenge, suggesting that defeating 10 hyper-nimble Shimafury pseudodrakes in a single night might actually thin out the miasma. Puffing out his chest with determination, Yuuki eagerly accepts the challenge and promises to do his best, prompting Lucy to smirk and declare that she expects nothing less from her disciple. Yuuki thinks about how safe he is inside Olympia's barrier, knowing full well that without combat skills matching Lucy's, he would instantly die against the rampant beasts outside. Inside the house, Olympia tearfully scolds Lucy for being way too strict with the young boy, while Yuuki proudly notes that he trains under his master every single day. Floating in midair, a frustrated Olympia reminds the seasoned hunter that Yuuki is still just a little kid who got a nasty scrape on his leg yesterday. Unbothered by the fuss, Yuuki smiles brightly and reassures his mothers that the painful scrape has already completely healed. Lucy and Olympia stare in stunned silence at the boy's flawless skin, entirely surprised by his incredibly fast recovery. Flexing his small arms, Yuuki happily attributes his instant healing to a potential perk granted by the goddess who reincarnated him. Flashing a reassuring, innocent smile, he warmly tells Olympia not to worry about his safety anymore. Still looking deeply concerned, Olympia sighs and admits that a dangerous pack of ice wolves has settled nearby, making her anxious about him wandering too close to the barrier's edge. Lucy crosses her arms with a grim expression, noting that if the surrounding miasma thickens, the barrier's overall effectiveness will severely weaken. Cracking her knuckles with a fierce glint in her eye, Lucy stands up from the table and announces she is going out to make a perimeter circuit. Olympia clasps her hands together and earnestly begs Lucy to be careful, trusting the highly skilled hunter to protect their secluded home. With eyes sparkling full of curiosity, little Yuuki eagerly asks his master if he can tag along on the dangerous patrol. Lucy immediately and firmly rejects his request, bluntly stating that actual combat against ice wolves is still way too advanced for him. Patting his head to soften the blow, Olympia gently reminds a disappointed Yuuki to stick to his usual routine of subduing weak beasts inside the barrier and gathering herbs. Yuuki reluctantly agrees to stay behind, listening carefully as Lucy strictly forbids him from stepping outside the protective ward. He mentally reviews what he knows, recalling that Olympia's barrier is clad in a strong holy aura that naturally repels powerful beings. However, he also remembers learning that beasts heavily saturated with overwhelmingly strong miasma can occasionally breach the defenses. Yuuki deduces that since humans possess a slight holy aura of their own, standard humans and regular animals cannot pass through the barrier either. Jogging through the rocky terrain within the safe zone, he effortlessly dispatches a weak monster while acknowledging his total ignorance regarding the true strength of outside beasts. Leaving the defeated creature behind, Yuuki sprints toward the perimeter, mentally apologizing to his master for blatantly disobeying her strict orders. Unable to suppress his burning desire to learn, the young boy justifies his risky excursion by blaming his overflowing, childlike curiosity. Suddenly, he freezes in sheer terror and gasps his master's name as he witnesses a horrific sight just beyond the barrier's edge. Yuuki's eyes widen into huge, trembling saucers as a cold sweat breaks out across his pale, panicked face. Standing majestically in the snowy wasteland is a massive multi-eyed ice wolf, prompting Lucy to sharply sense its highly dangerous presence. The colossal beast stares menacingly through the falling snow, and a terrified Yuuki stammers that it looks like an ice wolf but is far too large. Crouching in the brush, Yuuki nervously wonders if this monstrous creature is the exact anomaly causing the barrier's recent weakening. Lucy steps fearlessly into the beast's path with her dagger drawn, fiercely commanding the dangerous creatures to begone from her territory. Watching from a safe distance, Yuuki suddenly notices a bizarre, chilling detail about the tense confrontation. As Lucy gracefully dodges a sweeping attack from the smaller wolves, she locks her intense gaze onto the massive alpha towering above the rest. Colossal Clawpaw slams violently into the snowy earth, instantly cracking the very ground beneath its immense, terrifying weight. The gigantic ice wolf rears back and unleashes a ferocious, blood-curdling roar as it lunges aggressively toward the lone hunter. Lucy bows her head, her face marked with a somber, determined expression. Surging forward with blinding speed, Lucy fiercely slashes her dagger across the massive ice wolf's chest. Watching the intense battle unfold, a terrified Yuuki falls back and lets out a quiet gasp of shock. Holding her ground, Lucy confidently tells the giant beast that it has no reason to fight anymore since its master, the Demon King, is gone. Lowering her weapon slightly, the fierce hunter firmly commands the creature to turn around and go home quietly. Trembling in the background, Yuuki realizes just how terrifying the outside world is now that he knows this monster was merely the Demon King's pet. Despite his fear, the young boy senses something tragic about the situation and hesitates, feeling a sudden pang of sympathy. The massive ice wolf stands alone in the desolate wasteland, its aggressive posture giving way to a profound, heartbreaking loneliness. Gathering his courage, Yuuki steps out from his hiding spot and softly calls out to the giant beast. Leaning forward with genuine concern, the brave toddler asks the fearsome monster if it is all by itself. Approaching the resting wolf, Yuuki kindly offers it a handful of food and a bamboo flask, asking if it wants some water. The giant beast stares suspiciously at the offering, prompting Yuuki to nervously smile and assure the creature that there is absolutely no poison in it. The wolf's eyes widen in surprise before it gently takes the food, leaving Yuuki relieved that the monster actually accepted his peace offering. The previously intimidating alpha wolf happily chomps down on the meal, eating right out of the tiny boy's open palm. Watching the creature regain its strength by the second, Yuuki happily attributes its rapid recovery to the fresh food and water. As the wolf playfully licks its chops, Yuuki smiles and remarks that the terrifying beast surprisingly feels quite human. Reaching out to gently stroke the creature's soft fur, Yuuki cheerfully expresses how glad he is to see the wolf feeling better. Feeling a strange connection, Yuuki tells the beast that it feels different from the others, reminding him of a stray dog he once failed to rescue. A vivid memory surfaces of his past life, showing a younger Yuuki standing in the pouring rain while a helpless puppy barks from a soggy cardboard box. Remembering the deep regret of walking away because his household couldn't keep a pet, Yuuki feels the familiar sting of guilt. The memory fades with the image of him walking away under an umbrella, having only hoped that a kind stranger would pick the puppy up. Staring at the giant wolf, Yuuki softly admits that he had already picked out a name for that stray dog just in case he could have kept it. The giant ice wolf suddenly perks its ears and stares intently at the boy, fully captivated by his heartfelt story. Clasping his tiny hands together in a burst of excitement, Yuuki confidently decides on the perfect name for his new companion. He points brightly at the massive beast and declares that from now on its name will be Pachi, causing the wolf to let out an approving bark. Glowing system window suddenly appears confirming the Fenrir has been successfully tamed, leaving a bewildered Yuuki reeling as new memories instantly flood his mind. Closing his eyes as the creature's tragic past flows into him, Yuuki realizes the wolf lost its purpose and suffered deeply from the miasma after the Demon King died. Through the mystical connection, Yuuki witnesses a vision of the solitary wolf wandering the snowy forest, acknowledging that the beast even lost its own pack. The vision continues, showing the lonely ice wolf howling mournfully into the cold, empty sky as it searches for a place to belong. Opening his eyes, Yuuki looks sympathetically at the towering monster and concludes that it only tried to breach the barrier because it was desperately seeking a safe haven. The young boy's eyes widen with profound clarity as he fully understands the misunderstood creature's innocent intentions. Yuuki smiles softly, realizing that despite its terrifying appearance, the monster simply wanted to run free and peacefully through the forest. In a beautiful display of trust, the tiny boy leans forward and presses his forehead gently against the giant wolf's cold snout. Cradling the beast's face, Yuuki promises his new companion that they will work together to completely restore the mountain to its beautiful, natural form. Pulling back slightly, Yuuki's determined expression shifts into sudden panic as he remembers the most pressing, immediate problem he must deal with. The tiny toddler stands awkwardly in front of the colossal, multi-eyed monster, painfully aware of the absurd size difference between them. Sweating nervously, Yuuki mutters that the creature is way too blatantly beastly, terrified that Master Lucy will instantly kill it if she sees them together. In a magical puff of smoke, the giant beast suddenly shrinks down with a cheerful bark, while Yuuki shields his eyes from the blinding flash. Yuuki stares in absolute disbelief at the now puppy-sized creature, excitedly shouting and asking if this tiny fluffball is actually the massive Pachi. The miniature Pachi playfully tackles Yuuki to the ground, eagerly licking his face while the laughing toddler happily calls his new pet incredibly cute. With a confident smirk, Yuuki commands the tiny Fenrir pup to sit, and the obedient creature instantly plops down with a soft bark. Seeing the fearsome monster act like a well-trained pet, Yuuki realizes that keeping the beast hidden might actually be possible. Bursting with excitement, the young boy sprints back toward the safety of the cottage to enthusiastically call for his adoptive mothers. Olympia warmly welcomes him back, while a highly confused Lucy stares at the tiny, fluffy companion and demands to know what is up with the little mutt. Sensing the hunter's intense scrutiny, the miniature Fenrir glares back and unleashes a surprisingly fierce growl to defend its new master. Sweating nervously, Yuuki quickly steps in to defuse the rising tension, desperately assuring his master that the tiny creature is completely harmless. Looking up with big, pleading eyes, the boy begs to keep the mysterious pup, firmly promising that he will take excellent care of his new friend. Lucy narrows her scarred eyes at the suspicious creature, crossing her arms as she mutters that taming such a beast might be incredibly difficult. A gentle smile crosses Olympia's face as she softly reassures the skeptical hunter that the magical creature will be perfectly fine as long as Yuuki is by its side. Flooded with immense relief, Yuuki beams down at the happily barking pup and whispers that he somehow managed to pull off the impossible disguise. The heartwarming moment is abruptly cut short when Lucy's sharp, authoritative voice suddenly calls out his name. Glaring down with terrifying intensity, the strict hunter corners the trembling boy and demands to know if he deliberately disobeyed her orders to stay inside the barrier. Hanging his head in absolute shame, the terrified toddler shrinks under her fierce gaze and quietly apologizes for his dangerous stunt. Instead of punishing him, Lucy issues a rigorous new mandate, declaring that from now on he will undergo proper combat training alongside his new canine companion. Eagerly accepting the grueling challenge, Yuuki salutes his master alongside the barking pup, kicking off a relentless cycle of daily, intense training. Time passes, and an older, fiercely determined Yuuki steps before his adoptive mothers to make a sudden, monumental announcement. Standing tall with his loyal Fenrir by his side, the young boy confidently declares his ultimate intention to leave the safety of the mountain and venture into the dangerous world. Approaching a waiting carriage, a fully equipped Yuuki politely asks the driver if the transport is heading to Toonai. The rugged driver confirms the destination but narrows his eyes, suspiciously asking the small kid if he is traveling all alone. With Pacha cheerfully barking at his side, Yuuki confirms it is just the two of them and eagerly asks for a ride. Figuring a paying fare is a fare regardless of age or species, the driver tells them to hop in as Yuuki raises his arms in celebration. The carriage's beast of burden glares back with a bored, heavily unamused expression. From the ground, Pacha locks eyes with the large beast and initiates an intense, silent staring contest. The pack animal instantly flinches in fear from the tiny Fenrir's aura, prompting a flustered Yuuki to quickly scold his pup and call him back. Finally settled into his seat next to his oversized backpack, the young adventurer leans back with a heavy sigh of relief while Pacha faithfully guards his side. Staring out into the horizon, Yuuki quietly reflects on the surreal fact that his grand journey is finally beginning. Gripping a small photograph of himself, the young traveler steels his resolve and promises to do his absolute best. In a flashback to a few days earlier, a determined Yuuki stands outside the cottage and boldly announces that he wants to leave the mountain. The sudden declaration completely blindsides his mothers, causing Lucy to drop her polishing cloth and Olympia to spill her watering can in sheer shock. Trembling with panic, a deeply unsettled Olympia stammers and questions if her beloved child truly wants to abandon their home. Recovering from her initial surprise, a stern Lucy narrows her eyes and remarks that his decision is awfully sudden. As heavy rain pours down outside the cottage, Lucy stares thoughtfully out the window while a tense silence fills the room. Desperately trying to change his mind, Olympia pleads with Yuuki to wait until he is older, reminding him that he is still just a small child. Standing firm alongside Pacha, Yuuki confidently counters that their rigorous training has paid off and he can now easily defeat Shimafury pseudodrakes. He gently explains that while their magically protected home is wonderful, the outside world is ravaged by miasma and completely different. Olympia listens with a pained, worried expression, struggling to accept the harsh reality of her son's words. Sensing her rising distress, Yuuki quickly clarifies that he is not leaving because he wants to part ways with his beloved mothers. Flashing a warm, reassuring smile, he firmly declares that it is the exact opposite and that he loves them both dearly. Stepping closer, the young boy passionately explains that he wants to learn about the world faster, so he can find a way to completely eliminate the deadly miasma. Touched by his noble intentions, Olympia clutches her chest but still hesitates, her maternal instincts fighting against his dangerous ambition. Lucy closes her eyes and silently listens, deeply understanding the unyielding resolve burning within her disciple's heart. Yuuki passionately insists that he wants to forge his own path, refusing to sit back and wait for someone else to save the world. Staring out at the snowy peaks, the young boy vows to cleanse the mountains of Athos and restore the land his mothers once loved to its beautiful state. Placing a hand over his heart, Yuuki proudly declares that restoring their home is his ultimate dream. Tears well up in Olympia's eyes as she softly calls his name, deeply moved by his heartfelt promise to bring back the beautiful Athos. Overwhelmed with emotion, the loving spirit drops to her knees and pulls her brave son into a fiercely protective hug. Lucy turns her back to give them a tender moment, silently accepting that the boy's mind is made up. Glancing over her shoulder, the seasoned hunter finally yields to his decision, but sternly warns him not to overdo it. Acknowledging his own youth, Yuuki excitedly admits that he is going to experience a lot of challenging firsts on this upcoming journey. Walking towards his mothers with Pacha in tow, he promises that whenever he hits a wall, he will gladly rely on trusted adults and his master. Marching forward with unwavering determination, he accepts that he might fail and feel like giving up along the way. Stopping before his proud parents, the young boy looks up with fierce, shining eyes and confidently declares that he still wants to go. A rare, tender smile softens Lucy's scarred face as she proudly admits her disciple has grown up splendidly without her even noticing. Beaming with pure joy, Yuuki reassures them both that even when they are miles apart, they will always remain a family. Flashing his brightest smile, he warms their hearts by promising that he will forever be their child. In a fleeting, heartwarming memory from his infancy, a gentle Olympia cradles him and officially welcomes him into their lives. Basking in the golden light of their home, Lucy, Olympia, Yuuki, and Pacha share a deeply emotional group hug, forever bonded as a truly precious family. A hand elegantly writes out a letter of introduction, and Lucy explains she is writing it so she can confidently entrust Yuuki to an old acquaintance. Looking up from her desk, Lucy clarifies that since Yuuki knows absolutely nothing beyond their isolated mountain, she wants him to have a reliable contact. Sitting beside her, a curious Yuuki excitedly asks if this mysterious person is an old friend of his master. Pausing her writing, Lucy confirms he is a helpful contact named Peter, who runs a local helping hand business in the bustling mining city of Toonali. Intrigued by the idea, Yuuki excitedly repeats the concept of working at a helping hand shop, to which Lucy suggests he can learn many new things by working there. Sparking with sudden hope, Yuuki asks if he can bring his beloved Pacha along on the grand adventure, and the tiny pup barks in eager agreement. Watching the pup excitedly jump into Yuuki's arms, Lucy softly smiles and agrees to include Pacha in the letter since the Fenrir only ever follows him anyway. Handing over the finished letter, Lucy warmly tells Yuuki that once Peter sends a reply, they will officially set a departure date for his journey. In a brief montage, a slightly older Yuuki remembers the grueling 2 years he spent training under Lucy, learning everything from hunting beasts to harvesting valuable pelts and livers. Packing his massive travel bag with precision, Yuuki confidently reflects that all the rigorous survival skills he learned will undoubtedly serve him well in his new life. Standing at the threshold of his home, the young boy feels a sudden, overwhelming rush of both deep anxiety and thrilling excitement. The memory abruptly shifts to a younger, crying Yuuki being playfully spun around by a laughing Olympia, while a deadpan Lucy watches the chaotic scene. Watching his adoptive mother laugh, Yuuki solemnly recalls how in his past life, he always held back his true desires for the sake of his younger siblings. Patting his cheeks to snap out of his nostalgic thoughts, a revitalized Yuuki focuses on the thrilling prospect of finally testing his hard-earned abilities in the wide world. Pachet barks enthusiastically beside him, and Yuuki smiles down at his loyal companion, admitting that the unknown journey ahead is undeniably exciting. The peaceful cottage stands beautifully under a bright sky, marking the monumental day of Yuuki's highly anticipated departure. Standing by the door fully packed, a tearful Olympia desperately clings to Yuuki, begging him to reconsider while the boy playfully complains that she is squishing him. Unable to hold back her tears, Olympia buries her face in her hands and weakly apologizes for her sudden emotional outburst. Stepping in to calm the situation, a stern but caring Lucy firmly reminds Yuuki to keep a close eye on his map, money, and luggage, warning him to never let them out of his sight. Wiping her tears, Olympia presses a fresh piece of fruit into his hands, gently pleading with him to accept her final parting gift. Still openly weeping, the heartbroken spirit dramatically cries out that she absolutely hates her ethereal body because it physically prevents her from traveling with him. Lucy steps closer and kneels down to his eye level, her scarred face turning deadly serious as she prepares to impart her final, most crucial piece of advice. Looking directly into his eyes, the seasoned hunter issues a strict command, absolutely forbidding him from fighting seriously even if he is attacked. Utterly baffled by the bizarre instruction, Yuuki stares back at his master with a comical look of pure, unadulterated confusion. Lucy grimly clarifies that if a small child like him were ever seen effortlessly overpowering a grown adult, it would draw extremely dangerous attention. Finally understanding her logic, Yuuki raises his hand with a bright smile, promising to just run away instead of fighting, to which Lucy nods in approval. Reaching into his pocket, Yuuki pulls out the small, cherished photograph of himself, holding it tightly as a symbol of his unbreakable resolve. Lucy carefully presents a sheathed dagger, awkwardly explaining that she had to borrow it from her father's drawer since he didn't own a sword meant for a woman. Gazing down at the weapon in awe, Yuuki fondly recalls that this is the exact same dagger he used while adventuring alongside his beloved master. With a soft, nostalgic smile, Lucy proudly hands over the blade, and a deeply moved Yuuki respectfully thanks her for the precious gift. Placing her hands firmly on his small shoulders, Lucy gently pushes him forward, softly commanding her young disciple to finally go on his way. Adjusting his heavy backpack, a determined Yuuki turns his back to his mothers and sincerely thanks them for everything they have done. Waving cheerfully over his shoulder, a smiling Yuuki calls out his final goodbye, while Pachet barks a joyful farewell right beside him. Standing side by side, Lucy and a tearful Olympia wave back at their beloved son, watching him step out from the safety of their magical barrier. The young traveler and his faithful pup confidently march away from the cottage, stepping boldly into the vast, unknown world. Glancing back one last time, Yuuki admits that parting from his loving family feels incredibly lonely, but since he chose this path himself, he promises to give it his absolute all. Sitting safely in the back of the bumpy carriage, Yuuki smiles down at Pachet, reassuring himself that as long as his loyal friend is with him, everything will be perfectly fine. The carriage wheels rumble loudly across the dirt path, officially marking the beginning of Yuuki's grand journey to Toonalite. Peering excitedly out the back window of the moving carriage, Yuuki cheers as the vehicle picks up speed, with Pachet barking happily right beside him. The gruff driver calls back from the front, warning the boy not to lean out too far because if they run into a pack of black wolves, he will violently floor the carriage. The boy asks if the carriage is reserved, but the driver notes it's empty besides them. The driver explains that out in the boondocks, it's just them or Lord Granada's until the next big station. Puzzled, the boy asks about Lord Granada's, and the driver reveals he is the great hero who defeated the Demon King and sometimes uses this stagecoach. He describes the hero as a mysterious masked warrior who appeared out of nowhere to take down the Demon King, acting as a one-man army strong enough to scatter beasts alone. Cradling his pup, the boy marvels at how super strong this legendary hero must be. Smiling fondly, he recalls that his master was also incredibly strong, realizing there are truly amazing people out in the world. Squishing his fluffy companion, he happily steels himself to become a strong adult as the pup lets out a soft woof. Staring out at the road ahead, the boy brims with excitement over what kind of encounters lie waiting for him. He excitedly points out the window at the glowing lights of a massive, magical city approaching in the distance. The carriage suddenly fills up with a densely packed group of rugged, muscular travelers. The boy and his pup sleep peacefully, completely unfazed while tightly squeezed between the imposing adults. The stagecoach rolls into Toonalite, surrounded by the bustling sounds of a lively city. The driver gently wakes the boy, announcing their arrival as the pup barks eagerly. Rubbing his sleepy eyes, the boy yawns out a good morning while his puppy licks his face. When asked how the ride was, he cheerfully replies that sleeping the whole way made it pretty comfortable. The driver expresses relief, noting that strangely even the black wolf pack didn't show up, and jokes that he wishes the boy would ride with them forever. Puffing his chest out proudly, the boy smiles as his pup barks in agreement with the driver's praise. Hopping off the carriage with his massive backpack, the boy's eyes widen with awe at his surroundings. Throwing his arms open, he marvels at the sheer scale of the big city and its busy marketplace. He stands frozen amidst the bustling crowd and towering stalls, looking entirely overwhelmed. Several glamorous women notice him, cooing over how cute he looks like a little walking bag. One of the beautiful older women leans in and playfully asks if he wants to play with his big sis, causing him to flinch. Shouting that he shouldn't go with strangers, the boy dramatically sprints away down the cobblestone street. Crouching in a quiet alley, he nervously checks his documents to find the meeting place for Mr. Peter. After digging into the darkness of his giant pack, he victoriously pulls out the map. Realizing he is completely lost, he mutters to his pup Mighty that this situation is really bad before suddenly spotting a sign for the Good Kids Hall. He curiously asks someone who they are as a surprised gasp escapes his lips. He screams in utter shock upon discovering an elegantly dressed young girl, collapsed unconscious on the stone path. The quiet cobblestone alleyway remains undisturbed in the heart of the bustling city. Yuki shrieks in absolute shock as he stumbles upon two grown men looming suspiciously over the unconscious girl. The bald man snaps his head toward the noise, angrily recognizing the intruder. He points accusingly, identifying Yuki and his pup as the annoying passengers from their stagecoach ride. Realizing these are the shady figures his puppy was wary of, Yuki cautiously asks what they are doing. As Yuki glares suspiciously, the bald man yells at his partner for being scared, while the partner desperately explains he was just trying to stop a robbery. Insulted by the accusation, the bald man asks if they really look like muggers, completely ignoring Yuki as he checks the girl and sighs in relief that she is breathing. Losing his temper, the thug declares that a single hit will easily shut the mouthy brat up. The massive man winds up and throws a vicious full-force punch straight at the tiny boy. The brute freezes in pure confusion, completely baffled when his powerful strike entirely misses its mark. Furious at his failure, he orders his partner to grab the slippery brat and hold him down. His partner awkwardly refuses but apologizes to Yuki, half-heartedly asking the kid to stay still. Unfazed by the danger, Yuki effortlessly weaves and dodges as the two grown men try to snatch him. The thugs hilariously crash into each other as Yuki flips over their heads, leaving them completely disoriented. Leaping playfully through the air, Yuki remarks that dodging them feels like a leisurely stroll compared to playing tag with his powerful master. The exhausted thugs scowl in deep frustration, unable to lay a single finger on the nimble child. Landing flawlessly, the young boy confidently realizes that he can easily handle opponents of this caliber. Before the fight can escalate, a sudden voice echoes down the alley, commanding the thugs to stop. A cloaked figure named Abel emerges from the shadows, sharply questioning his subordinate's actions. Stinky hastily apologizes as Abel steps forward, sternly ordering his men to never lay hands on a child. Yuki recognizes the newcomer immediately, remembering the cloaked man from their shared stagecoach ride. Abel casually assesses the collapsed girl, calmly concluding that she is simply suffering from hunger or mana depletion and will wake up soon. Realizing his men just panicked over a fainting girl, Abel apologizes to Yuki for the unnecessary trouble they caused. Thoroughly bewildered by the chaotic interaction, Yuki watches silently as the strange trio abruptly announces their departure and leaves the alley. The puppy barks gently as the unconscious girl finally lets out a weak groan. Kneeling carefully beside her, Yuki peers down and asks if she is all right. The girl slowly opens her eyes and sits up, softly asking where she is. Yuki gently informs her that she collapsed in an alleyway within Toonale. Without warning, the sick girl violently throws up right there on the cobblestones. She apologizes profusely for the horrific mess, but Yuki quickly pats her back and reassures her that it is perfectly fine. Trying to figure out how to help, Yuki wonders if her symptoms are genuinely caused by severe mana depletion. Taking her hand in his, he gently asks if she can stand while she groans in misery. The girl gasps in sudden realization, recognizing that he is actively using an advanced healer's technique to share his mana with her. Gripping his hands tightly, she stares in awe at how someone so incredibly young can already perform such magic. Introducing himself simply as Kanzaki Yuki, he humbly claims to just be a kid while secretly wondering if this immense power is a perk from the goddess. Her eyes sparkling with overwhelming gratitude, the girl introduces herself as Sakura Halcyon and enthusiastically calls him Lord Yuki. Sakura bows deeply, thanking him for saving her life and eagerly asking if there is any way she can repay his kindness. As she waits with bated breath, Yuki hesitates for a moment before deciding to take her up on the offer. Blushing furiously with embarrassment, the overpowered child admits he is entirely lost and asks her to guide him to the Peter statue. Smiling warmly at his cute request, Sakura notes how admirable it is that such a small boy traveled from the deep mountains, and they set off together. Walking through the city, Sakura sulks about being a useless piece of trash compared to Yuuki. She explains that Toonalite used to be a completely barren wasteland where not even grass would grow. However, she notes that Sir Peter from Hero Granada's party changed everything by discovering massive underground deposits of a precious mineral. Pointing to a glowing crystal, she explains that Evanium is a spirit stone formed from the accumulated power of ancient spirits. Praising Sir Peter as a great legend, she notes his discovery provided a vital new energy source after the spirit's power weakened. Suddenly glowing with holy light, Sakura dramatically throws her arms open and begins preaching to the nearby townsfolk. As a crowd gathers and starts tossing coins, Yuuki hilariously points out that this isn't supposed to be a spectacle. Returning to normal, Sakura gestures ahead and reiterates that Toonalite was built by the amazing Sir Peter. The pair looks up in awe at a grand, impressive statue dedicated to the famous hero. Yuuki freezes in absolute bewilderment, realizing an ordinary-looking uncle standing right beside them looks exactly like the statue. The cheerful man simply smiles and waves casually at the stunned child. Approaching warmly, the man extends a hand and guesses that he must be Lord Yuuki. Sakura stammers in pure shock as she finally recognizes the man, while Yuuki stares in absolute confusion. Snapping out of her daze, Sakura screams in disbelief, demanding to know why Sir Peter himself is casually hanging out in the street. Laughing it off, Peter explains he heard about Yuuki from Lady Lucy and warmly welcomes him to the city. Looking around at the oblivious crowd, Yuuki wonders if the famous man is actively hiding his presence. Gazing up at the legendary hero, the young boy marvels at how incredible the adults in this world truly are. Peter turns his attention to the flustered girl, prompting her to nervously introduce herself as Sakura Halcyon. Without warning, the hero smoothly scoops the stunned girl up into his arm, politely excusing himself. He effortlessly lifts Yuuki into his other arm, carrying both children with ridiculous ease. Completely ignoring Sakura's panicked confusion, Peter cheerfully invites her to stop by his home as well. Smiling gently, he decides he should at least serve tea to the kind benefactor who safely guided Lord Yuuki. Hanging from the man's arm, the little boy silently marvels at how incredibly smooth and capable the older hero is. Carrying the two kids, Peter walks casually through the bustling cobblestone streets without drawing any attention. Approaching a building, Yuuki is thrilled to realize his hidden goddess perk lets him perfectly read the sign for Peter's helping hand shop. Pushing the wooden door open, the smiling man warmly invites his guests inside. The trio steps into the building, with Yuuki politely excusing their sudden intrusion. Setting them down near a table, Peter warmly welcomes them after their long, tiring journey. Sakura bows in gratitude as their host invites them to help themselves to the fresh bread. Munching happily on his snack, Yuuki realizes just how incredibly hungry he actually was. Peter calmly prepares some drinks, asking his guests if the tea leaves he chose are acceptable. Suddenly, an angry young woman bursts into the room, yelling at her dad for not waking her up before their guests arrived. She freezes dead in her tracks, staring intensely at Sakura in her novice saintess uniform. Flustered, the girl hastily apologizes, claiming she just remembered something urgent, and wildly sprints away. Deeply confused by the abrupt exit, Yuuki looks up and asks Peter what is suddenly wrong. Sighing tiredly, Peter explains that the Musean Order Sakura belongs to has various complicated issues, promising to elaborate later. Squishing Mighty in his arms, Yuuki nods obediently, accepting that the grown-up world is just way too complicated. Clapping his hands together, Peter cheerfully shifts the mood to move the conversation forward. He officially introduces his energetic daughter Akino, who smiles brightly and greets them. Akino warmly welcomes them, finding comfort in the cute kid and dog, while Mighty barks happily in agreement. Smiling warmly at the group, Akino cheerfully announces that she will go prepare some tea. Sitting at the table, Peter admits he was worried when Lady Lucy claimed the boy was too much for her, but expresses relief that he seems perfectly normal. As Yuuki realizes his master truly thought of his future, Peter explains she sent him away because living isolated in the deep mountains restricted what she could teach him. Curious about the business, Yuuki asks what they do, prompting Peter to explain that their helping hand shop accepts all kinds of requests. Listing off their odd jobs, the older man mentions everything from repairing roofs to mediating marital disputes and guiding mine tour. Leaning in eagerly, Akino adds that they also handle dangerous tasks like cleaning up Holiora pools and clearing away miasma. A spark of hope ignites in Yuuki's eyes, as he realizes that helping out here might teach him how to cleanse the deadly miasma back in the Athos reign. Bursting with sudden enthusiasm, the small boy leans forward and eagerly volunteers to lend them a hand. Promising to work incredibly hard, he earnestly asks the father and daughter to let him learn everything they can teach. Smiling warmly, Peter reaches out to shake the boy's hand, officially welcoming him to the team. The veteran hero gazes down at the tiny, determined child with a look of deep, fond appreciation. Breaking the comfortable silence, Peter mentions he finally figured out why his two old friends suddenly grew close again, leaving Yuuki completely confused. He explains that the two women had drifted apart after the miasma scattered, but their letters became incredibly affectionate again right around the time Yuuki was born. As realization dawns on the boy, Peter confidently praises him for being the sole reason those two heroes reconnected. Glancing down at his fluffy pup, Yuuki feels a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion regarding his family. Beaming with genuine pride, he declares that the two women who raised him are incredibly special to him. Looking up at his new friends, the young boy swears he wants to find a way to eliminate the miasma completely for his mother's sake. Clasping his tiny hands together, he smiles brightly and notes how happy and proud his mothers will be when he finally succeeds. Deeply moved by his pure motivation, Peter agrees with a soft smile and promises they will work hard together. Shifting back into a professional mindset, the shop owner prepares to assign their very first task. Suddenly, the shop door violently slams open as a panicked, sweating man bursts inside shouting about a massive emergency. Peter, Akino, and Yuuki all stare in absolute bewilderment at the frantic, suit-wearing customer. Trembling with terror, the desperate man screams that his manor has been overrun by monsters and violently begs to hire their immediate help. A large, creepy mansion stands silently as the dark air around it grows visibly stagnant. Staring up at the eerie estate, Yuuki realizes this must be the monster-infested manor they need to clean for Mr. Hilk's sake. Back inside the shop, a panicked Mr. Hilk begs for their help, explaining that his home has inexplicably turned into a monster mansion. Yuuki repeats the terrifying phrase in pure disbelief, wondering what kind of horrors lurk inside. Peter steps up to his frantic customer, calmly urging Mr. Hilk to settle down and explain what on earth happened. Trembling with lingering fear, the man reveals that the manor he manages has completely devolved into a deadly miasma pool. Peter explains to a confused Yuuki that a miasma pool forms when negative energy released by the Demon King heavily accumulates in a closed space. Mr. Hilk confirms the grim reality, adding that the situation grew so dire the previous tenant fled in the dead of night. The frantic man tearfully explains he tried cleaning between jobs, but beasts soon invaded and the very furniture mutated into actual monsters. Hilk admits they considered burning the place down to end it quickly, but he couldn't bring himself to destroy his childhood home filled with precious memories. Peter rubs his chin thoughtfully, deeply understanding the man's emotional attachment to the property. Suddenly, the older man gently pokes Yuuki's head to get the distracted boy's attention. Pointing to the surprised child, Peter asks if they can entrust this crucial first job to him. Winking playfully, the veteran hero explains that Akino handles most of the practical work, and he wants Yuuki to provide backup. Yuuki hesitates, nervously admitting he offered to help, but worrying his mere presence might just make them anxious. The tiny boy internally panics over the terrifying reality that despite his hidden powers, he is still only a 6-year-old child. Setting his doubts aside, the determined boy puffs out his chest and resolves to complete the mission since they specifically asked him. Looking up at his new partner, Yuuki asks MS, Akino what exactly they need to do to handle a dangerous miasma pool. Kino smirks confidently, adjusting her glasses with a wicked little chuckle as a plan forms in her mind. Bursting with sudden, overwhelming energy, she brandishes a mop and declares they are going to do a massive cleanup. She enthusiastically explains that improving the ventilation and defeating the mutated beasts will completely dissolve the miasma pool. Though she notes the beasts are only bug level, Akino warns that staying in the pool will make them dizzy, so they must strike swiftly. Fired up by her energy, Yuuki confidently agrees to the fast-paced assault. The two determined cleaners confidently march toward the haunted manor, their boots thudding in unison. Gripping his cleaning tools tightly, Yuuki eagerly jumps into action alongside his fierce companion. Charging into the dusty foyer with a feather duster, the boy cheerfully declares that even he can handle this simple task. Throwing the large windows wide open, he immediately starts improving the mansion's ventilation to scatter the dark energy. Kino furiously wipes down surfaces, while Mighty the pup aggressively scrubs the stone floor with a rag. Working flawlessly as a team, Akino violently sweeps the floors while Yuuki expertly dusts the massive, ornate couches. Sunlight finally pours into the grand room, revealing sparkling clean windows and pristine furniture devoid of any dark aura. Wiping sweat from his brow, Yuuki proudly notes that the place is getting pretty clean, while Mighty barks in cheerful agreement. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoes from down the hall, catching Yuuki's attention as Akino prepares to tackle the next room. Hearing a terrified scream, Yuuki urgently shouts Akino's name and sprints down the corridor to investigate the commotion. Peeking around a massive pillar, Yuuki is shocked to spot the two bumbling thugs from the alleyway cowering by a heavy door. The thugs panic as the door bursts open, shouting to forget the nobles inside and desperately urging each other to run for their lives. Bursting into the back room, Yuuki and Mighty discover an incredibly thick, suffocating concentration of dark miasma. A swarm of terrifying, fanged books flies wildly through the air, aggressively attacking everything in sight with their sharp pages. Yuuki recoils in pure shock as the cursed literature swarms aggressively around the ruined study. Stepping calmly inside, Akino explains that libraries are highly prone to becoming miasma pools and spawning book-type monsters. However, she quickly grows dizzy and stumbles, realizing this infestation is far beyond anything she imagined as Yuuki rushes to catch her. Sprinting through the chaotic library, Yuuki realizes they need to find any remaining survivors and escape before the miasma dizziness overwhelms them. Without warning, a monstrous fanged book violently swoops down to attack the fleeing group. Trapped amidst the swarm of flying literature, Sakura cowers helplessly on the floor with her arms shielding her head. Trembling in terror, she apologizes to her master as Yuuki suddenly spots her in the danger zone. Warning Akino that he is about to do something reckless, the young boy pivots and leaps directly into the fray. He fearlessly confronts the aggressive, flapping books as they dive toward the defenseless girl. With incredible speed and precision, Yuuki launches a flurry of devastating kicks to shred the monstrous tomes. The cursed books violently shatter into pieces under his relentless assault. Sliding smoothly to a halt in front of the terrified girl, he completely neutralizes the remaining threat. Reaching his tiny hand out, Yuuki gently asks Sakura if she is all right. Still trembling from the sheer shock, the flustered girl gratefully clasps his outstretched hand. Yuuki quickly pulls her to her feet, urgently warning that staying any longer in the thick miasma would be incredibly dangerous. Bursting out of the manor's gates into the fresh air, Sakura breathes a sigh of relief and deeply thanks him for saving her life. Kino suddenly notices his lack of protective gear, asking in bewilderment how he is perfectly fine despite the overwhelming miasma. Blinking in surprise, Yuuki realizes that he truly isn't feeling dizzy at all and wonders why the toxic air didn't affect him. Shaking off the mystery, Akino declares they must head home immediately to warn her father about the unexpectedly high danger level. Safely back at the shop, Peter sighs in deep relief upon hearing the harrowing tale and confirming everyone's survival. Sakura stands awkwardly before her rescuers, looking completely drained and deeply apologetic. She humbly thanks Yuuki again for sharing his precious mana, noting it is the absolute least she can do to repay him. Curious about the strange situation, Yuuki asks the novice saintess why she was wandering around the haunted manor. He points out that she wasn't alone and asks about the shady figures who abandoned her. Lowering her gaze, Sakura quietly reveals that the fleeing men were actually her senior members from the Musean Order. She explains they went there to capture monsters, and she acted as living bait because her exceptionally strong mana attracts beasts. Yuuki stares in absolute bewilderment, struggling to comprehend why a healer would be used as monster bait. Flashing a tragic self-deprecating smile, the girl claims she is glad everyone escaped because even a piece of trash like her has uses. Peter and the children recoil in absolute shock at her heartbreakingly low self. Stepping in, Peter explains that trainees face intense pressure because becoming a true saintess requires paying an enormous tribute to the order. He grimly adds that capturing monsters is a desperate attempt to raise funds, as the beasts fetch a high price on the black market. Clutching her robes tightly, Sakura admits she knows it is a twisted practice, but feels she has no other options left. She softly explains that she was born the seventh daughter of a severely impoverished minor noble house. Desperate to ease her family's financial burden, she entered the order hoping to utilize her single talent of abundant mana. She dreamed of becoming a saintess to heal the sick and purify deadly miasma, believing she could overcome her natural clumsiness. Tears welling in her eyes, she confesses that she truly just wanted to be useful to the people around her. However, she tragically failed to meet the impossible tribute quotas and entirely drained the parting funds her parents gave her. Yuuki gazes up at the broken girl, his eyes filled with profound empathy and quiet anger at her exploitation. Staring into the distance, Sakura reveals the dark rumor that those who fail to pay remain trapped as lowly trainees for life. She notes that the townsfolk whisper terrible things about the order's endless cycle of debt and servitude. Unable to hide his sympathy, Yuuki softly calls out her name. Clasping her hands in a desperate prayer, the weeping girl expresses pure gratitude that he showed kindness to someone as worthless as dust. Tears finally spilling over, Sakura smiles brightly and declares she is truly happy that Lord Yuuki saved her. Gripping her arm tightly, Yuuki violently pulls Sakura forward to stop her from spiraling into despair. Glaring with intense determination, the young boy fiercely declares that she is not useless at all. Staring earnestly into her tearful eyes, he insists that she is genuinely a very kind person. He reminds her that when he first arrived in the confusing city, she faithfully stayed by his side the entire time. Squeezing her hand, he gently points out that she bravely acted as bait at the manor to buy precious time for her seniors. Throwing his tiny arms wide open, Yuuki beams and praises her selfless willingness to act for others as absolutely wonderful. Overwhelmed by his pure, unfiltered sincerity, Sakura stares back at him with wide, starry eyes. Peter steps forward with a gentle smile, advising the young girl to stop judging herself so harshly. Glancing down with a sad, empathetic smile, Yuuki softly admits that he completely understands exactly how she feels. Reflecting on his past, he warns her how dangerously easy it is to slip into a mindset of worthlessness, before reaffirming that she is a truly good person. Tears of profound relief streaming down her flushed cheeks, Sakura pulls the small boy into a tight, emotional hug and deeply thanks him. Watching the incredibly touching scene, Peter rubs his chin thoughtfully as he wonders how he can further help the struggling trainee. A sudden spark of brilliant inspiration visibly strikes the seasoned hero. Yuuki excitedly turns to Peter, suggesting they hire Sakura to help clean the infested manor so she can finally regain her lost confidence. The young boy gazes up at the tall man expectantly, his eyes burning with a fierce desire to uplift his new friend. Peter agrees without hesitation, noting that Sakura's massive mana reserves will guarantee they complete the dangerous request safely. Smiling brightly at the stunned girl, Peter officially offers to pay her a proper reward if she helps Yuuki and Akino clean the estate. Startled by the generous offer, Sakura momentarily doubts her worth before desperately begging them to let her join the mission. Powerful, glowing aura of renewed hope and camaraderie washes over the united group as they finalize their bold strategy. Gripping their mops and buckets with intense, dramatic resolve, the newly formed squad prepares to move out. Armed to the teeth with basic cleaning supplies, the heroic team marches boldly toward the haunted manor to finish the job. The team stands outside the eerie Hilk mansion, fully prepared to begin their massive cleaning operation. Kino enthusiastically points forward, declaring they will efficiently tackle the back rooms first where the miasma is thickest. She confidently poses and adjusts her strange glasses, clearly geared up for the dangerous task ahead. Curious about her equipment, Yuuki tilts his head and asks what is so special about the glasses she has been wearing since yesterday. Kino proudly explains that her special lenses allow her to visualize miasma, ensuring she won't miss a single speck of corrupted dirt. Activating her unique vision, she scans the area and immediately notices something absolutely shocking. She realizes in awe that the dark miasma is miraculously purifying itself just by being near Yuuki, making the air much easier to breathe. Kino notes that purification normally requires intense cleaning or the use of rare holy water to cleanse the dark energy. Confused, Yuuki asks what holy water is, prompting her to explain that it is special water infused with the Great Spirit's power. Staring at the boy, Akino marvels at how mysterious he is for effortlessly resisting the miasma sickness without any divine tools. Yuuki suddenly recalls his mother serving him incredibly delicious fresh fruit and pure water every single day. He gasps in sudden realization, wondering if the amazing food from his childhood was actually infused with the Great Spirit's immense power. When Akino asks what is wrong, the flustered boy quickly waves his hands and insists it is absolutely nothing. Raising her fist high, Akino cheerfully rallies the team to get back to work and make the mansion shine. The group springs into action, furiously sweeping and wiping down the dusty furniture as they thoroughly clean the large room. Yuuki rapidly scrubs the stone floor with a rag, while Mighty the pup hilariously spins around inside a tangled bedsheet. Dropping to his hands and knees, the energetic boy aggressively wipes the floor tiles until they squeak with cleanliness. Exhausted but satisfied, Sakura drops to her knees and wipes the sweat from her brow as the room finally clears. Spotting her resting on the floor, Yuuki gently praises the novice saintess for working so incredibly hard. Crossing his arms proudly, he nods in satisfaction and notes how glad he is that they invited such a serious and kind person. Suddenly, a massive, terrifying spider monster scurries across the floor, causing Sakura to scream as she urgently warns Yuuki. Unfazed by the massive beast, the young boy swiftly raises his arm and violently swats the creature away with a single, powerful strike. The spider crashes against the wall while Akino and Sakura stare in absolute, stunned silence at his ridiculous strength. Trembling in shock, Sakura asks in disbelief how he just managed to casually swat away a deadly monster, completely barehanded. Blinking innocently, Yuuki brushes it off by stating that the spiders back in his home mountains were significantly bigger. Gripping her chest, Sakura groans in misery, admitting that just thinking about giant mountain spiders makes her feel incredibly sick. Yuuki immediately rushes over and gently shares his mana with her, earning a relieved sigh as her nausea fades. As Sakura frantically apologizes for being useless again, Akino sternly orders her to stop and genuinely praises her presence. Cradling his fluffy puppy, Yuuki flashes a bright, heartwarming smile that instantly melts the remaining tension. Pumping her fist, Akino announces that since everyone is feeling better, they should immediately tackle the remaining rooms. The group gazes up at a massive, cobweb-covered chandelier hanging ominously in the center of the entrance hall. Kino stares up at the infested fixture, muttering about how they are supposed to safely reach and clean such a high spot. Without skipping a beat, Yuuki confidently volunteers to take care of the towering problem himself. Launching himself into the air, the agile boy unleashes a rapid, devastating combo of strikes that completely obliterates the monster-infested webs. He effortlessly lands on top of the sparkling chandelier, leaving the girls completely astounded by his master's amazing training. Working together seamlessly, the trio carefully lowers the grand chandelier to thoroughly scrub away the remaining grime. Throwing their hands up in victory, the cleaning squad proudly declares their mission an absolute success as the mansion sparkles around them. Back at the shop, a deeply relieved Mr. Hilk bows gratefully, knowing his late parents would be thrilled to see their home restored. Peter warmly accepts the apology, but sternly advises the man to never neglect the property's maintenance again. Smiling warmly, Mr. Hilk hands over a thick envelope containing their hard-earned reward for completing the dangerous request. Watching from the cobblestone street, Peter, Akino, and Yuuki silently observe the man as he walks away. Smiling with quiet satisfaction, Peter notes how glad he is that Mr. Hilk seems so genuinely happy with their work. Back inside the shop, Peter warmly hands over 2 heavy pouches of coins to Yuuki and Sakura as their official payment. Handing over the pouch, Peter explains that after deducting living expenses as Lady Lucy requested, he wants the young boy to learn how to manage his own finances. Yuuki's eyes widen with absolute delight, excitedly shouting that he completely never expected to receive a cut of the reward himself. Turning his attention to the stunned novice saintess, Peter gently asks if her generous share will adequately cover her required tribute. Clutching the heavy pouch to her chest, Sakura beams with starry eyes and enthusiastically declares that it is more than enough. Shifting his tone to a serious note, the veteran hero mentions he has one final, belated report to share with the group. Sakura gasps in pure shock as Peter reveals they officially reported to the Musean Church that she single-handedly purified the entire Hilk mansion. Lowering her gaze modestly, the flustered girl mutters that she only provided a tiny bit of help during the mission. Shrugging casually, Peter explains that his odd jobs shop is ultimately just an unofficial jack-of-all-trades group that doesn't require glory. Smiling reassuringly, he insists that as long as they successfully solve their clients' desperate problems, they have absolutely no need for official credit. Resting a heavy hand on Yuuki's head, the kind man notes that giving Sakura the full credit actually helps their shop avoid unnecessary attention. Glancing down at his tiny apprentice, Peter warmly asks for his agreement on the clever arrangement. Overwhelmed by their incredible generosity, Sakura nervously hesitates and struggles to accept the unearned praise. Before she can protest, Akino steps forward and smoothly asks the novice saintess for one additional favor. Praising her immense mana for accelerating their work, Akino earnestly asks if Sakura would be willing to continue helping their team from time to time. Looking up with pure sincerity, Yuuki chimes in to thank her and completely agrees that her presence was a massive help. Clutching her hands tightly against her chest, the young girl trembles as a profound wave of emotion washes over her. Tears streaming down her flushed cheeks, she weeps with joy over finally being needed and desperately begs them to let her stay. As Sakura violently sobs out her gratitude, Akino awkwardly pats her back while a visibly amused Peter gently scolds her for crying again. The warm morning sun rises over the bustling city as a brand new day begins. Wandering through the lively, crowded marketplace, Yuuki rubs his chin thoughtfully as he tries to decide what to purchase. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of light catches his attention, causing the young boy to gasp in pure wonder. Approaching the stall, he listens in awe as the friendly shopkeeper explains that the intricate clockwork doll dances whenever it gathers sunlight. The merchant proudly points out a tiny, beautiful fragment of Evanium attached to the toy, noting how incredibly pretty it looks when it glows. Staring deeply at the dancing figures, Yuuki feels a sudden pang of nostalgia as he realizes the delicate dolls look exactly like his beloved adoptive parents. A determined smile spreads across his flushed face as he firmly makes his final decision. Slamming his coins down, Yuuki happily declares he will take the toy while the grateful shopkeeper carefully wraps his purchase. Hugging the wrapped package tightly against his chest, the young boy closes his eyes with an incredibly satisfied smile. Strolling casually alongside Mighty, he beams with pride, hoping his parents will be thrilled by the precious gift bought with his very first paycheck. Kino suddenly approaches from the crowd, carrying a large bag and cheerfully asking if he managed to find something good. Without warning, Mighty's ears perk up and the tiny pup barks eagerly at a sudden intoxicating scent. Drool pooling at the corner of his mouth, Yuuki shamelessly admits he is starving as the mouth-watering aroma washes over them. Kino confidently points toward a bustling food stall, noting they are roasting fresh bone-in meat until it turns perfectly golden brown. Flashing a bright, cheerful smile, she generously offers to splurge on a massive cut of meat to celebrate his very first successful job. Yuuki cheers enthusiastically as his older companion wildly sprints toward the stall, ordering him to wait right there. Sitting quietly on a wooden bench, Yuuki bitterly reflects that aside from his mother's magical fruit, the local cuisine has consisted entirely of dusty bread and unpeeled bean soup. Watching the crowded street, he mentally complains that every single meal he has eaten so far has tasted either brutally salty or incredibly bland. However, his eyes sparkle with pure, unfiltered excitement as he eagerly anticipates his very first taste of fresh, juicy meat in this completely bizarre world. Apologizing for the wait, Akino finally returns to the hungry boy with their freshly cooked food. She excitedly presents a large piece of bone-in meat to Yuuki, while also offering a tasty treat to a barking Mighty. Noticing his hesitation, Akino cheerfully encourages the young boy not to be shy and to eat it while it is still hot. Taking a massive bite, Yuuki's eyes widen in sheer delight as the incredible flavor bursts in his mouth. Despite realizing the portion is smaller than he expected, he happily savors the delicious meal. Kino explains that fresh meat is incredibly hard to acquire, because the toxic miasma makes raising animals and crops severely difficult. She notes that any area outside of Windy Land quickly devolves into a deadly miasma pool, leaving Yuuki in absolute shock. Flashing a bright smile, she promises they can go buy plenty more meat once the miasma is finally cleared. Fired up by the delicious food, Yuuki fiercely declares he will work as hard as possible until the miasma is completely gone. Chewing thoughtfully, he realizes he should be grateful for the rare meal even if the seasoning is a bit too light. Suddenly, Yuuki's attention is drawn to two passing novice saintesses gossiping about a noble who recently purified a miasma pool. The jealous girls complain that they shouldn't have left her behind if the job was so easy, noting their branch leader was thrilled by the report. As Akino and Yuuki listen silently, the trainees scoff at how impossible it seems for the clumsy girl to have handled so many monsters alone. Walking away, they bitterly assume she just pulled noble strings to have someone else do the dirty work. Yuuki silently chews his meat, his expression darkening as he absorbs the toxic, baseless rumors. Looking deeply concerned, Akino gently notes that while it is good the church recognized the purification, that nasty conversation was definitely about Sakura. Adi lets out a confused whine as he senses his master's sudden shift in mood. Hugging his pup tightly, Yuuki frowns in deep frustration over how incredibly unfair it is for Sakura to be targeted by envy after working so hard. Gazing up at the clear sky, the young boy desperately wonders if there is any way for his kind friend to be properly recognized. Kino agrees softly, sharing his lingering sadness over the unjust situation as the scene transitions to a quiet watermill house. Meanwhile, far away in the Athos range, a floating Lucy asks Olympia how long she plans on staring through her magical device. Olympia sighs heavily, noting she's using the spirit telescope to search for Yuuki, but struggling because the miasma blocks any spirit-filled waters. Lucy reminds her that the greedy Musean church has completely monopolized all the sacred springs anyway. Hearing the church's name, a scarred man nearby intensely mutters Yuuki's name under his breath. Throwing on his heavy cloak, the fierce warrior abruptly announces he is heading out, completely ignoring Olympia's confused questions. As the scene briefly flashes back to a worried Yuuki holding his pup, the scarred warrior strides purposefully. He grimly finishes his thought, declaring his firm intention to personally assess Yuuki's current situation. Horse-drawn carriage travels steadily along a winding dirt road through a vast, picturesque mountainous landscape. Peeking over the edge of the wooden cart, Yuuki and his fluffy pup gaze curiously at the passing fields. The puppy barks cheerfully as Yuuki notes that the scenery is completely different from their previous journey. From the driver's seat, Peter calmly announces that they are finally getting close to the village. Kino stammers nervously as Peter asks Sakura to brief everyone on their latest helping job before they arrive. Nodding obediently, the novice saintess prepares to explain the intricate details of their new mission. Peter gently smiles and encourages the flustered girl to proceed with the briefing. Sakura explains that a massive miasma pool has formed in the nearby mountain, causing ferocious red tusk boars to aggressively invade. She adds that a skilled local has been desperately driving them back, but the village contacted the church because he is rapidly reaching his limit. Tilting his head in confusion, Yuuki asks if their small group is actually expected to fight the massive beasts. Sakura smiles brightly and reassures him that they are only hired to build protective fences around the fields. Peter chimes in to explain that their team is merely a stopgap measure until Toonalite can dispatch official beast hunters. He notes that the only local hunters capable of handling such fierce beasts would be the legendary Brooks hunting party. Squishing his puppy, Yuuki marvels at the fact that this famous party has been active since the terrifying Demon King era. Sakura's eyes sparkle with absolute admiration as she gushes about how Lord Brooks helped defeat the Demon King. Throwing her arms wide, she dramatically praises his worldwide valor while lamenting that his feats are often overshadowed by Lord Granada. Yuuki beams with pure excitement, earnestly hoping they might actually get to meet such an incredible hero during their mission. Hugging his pup tightly, the young boy wistfully wonders if he will ever get the chance to meet the universally beloved Lord Granada. Shifting to logistics, Peter mentions that the reward from this cooperative request will help cover Sakura's required church donation. Clasping her hands together, Sakura smiles through joyful tears as she expresses her deep gratitude for finally being able to repay their kindness. Yuuki flashes a warm, heartwarming smile as he happily watches his friend finally regain her lost confidence. Peering into the distance, Peter calmly announces that Tauka village is finally in sight. Suddenly, a panic shout echoing across the fields warns of an incoming red tusk boar attack. The puppy lets out an eager bark and suddenly leaps from the carriage, prompting Yuuki to shout his name in panic. The tiny pup fearlessly charges straight toward the chaotic danger as his master desperately yells for him to stop. The entire carriage erupts into absolute panic as the oblivious puppy sprints directly toward the ferocious monsters. The adults freeze in sheer unadulterated terror as they helplessly watch the terrifying scene unfold. Without a second thought, Yuuki bravely leaps out of the moving carriage and wildly sprints after his reckless companion. Sprinting across the dirt path, the frantic boy desperately screams for his beloved puppy to return. The dog simply barks happily over his shoulder, completely oblivious to the massive threat looming ahead. The energetic pup leaps playfully into the air, as if the entire dangerous situation is just a fun game. Yuuki finally snatches the squirming pup into his arms, sighing in deep relief while the terrified adults shriek in the background. Just a few feet away, a massive, terrifying boar violently charges toward a bald man desperately swinging a farming pickaxe. Holding his pup tightly, Yuuki gasps in alarm as he realizes another furious beast is rapidly closing in on the villager. The muscular, bald villager strains with all his might to hold the massive monster back, violently cursing at the beast. Moving with blinding speed, the young boy fiercely dashes forward to intervene before the man is crushed. Launching himself high into the air, Yuuki unleashes a devastating flying kick that violently crashes into the monster's snout. Landing flawlessly with his pup still in his arms, the young boy cheerfully asks the stunned villager if he is all right. The bald man stands completely frozen, staring at his tiny savior in absolute bewildered shock. Suddenly recognizing the boy's face, the enraged thug violently points and screams that he is the same annoying brat from the city alleyway. Breathing heavily after the intense strike, the bald man assures everyone to step back and claims he is perfectly fine. Flashing a strained but reassuring smile, he tries to comfort the worried older villagers who still look deeply concerned. Leaning down toward his tiny savior, the man fiercely whispers an order for Yuuki to keep quiet about their alleyway encounter before questioning his presence in the village. Peter and the girls step forward, with Akino questioning if they are even needed, while Peter firmly insists that the villagers must learn to defend their own fields. The bald man's jaw drops as he realizes this mismatched group of a kid, women, and an old man are the official hunters dispatched to save them. An older villager gently chides the bald man, named Mai, reminding him to be grateful since the group traveled all this way to help. Crossing his muscular arms with a gruff huff, Mai listens as the villager praises him for single-handedly driving off the ferocious beasts until now. Mai scoffs proudly, claiming they are lucky he returned to the sticks after getting fired from his job in Toonali. The old man raises a skeptical eyebrow, bluntly asking if his supposed job in the big city was actually just highway robbery. Completely caught off guard by the accurate accusation, Mai violently flinches and awkwardly turns his back in a cold sweat. Suddenly, two familiar figures named Stinky and Abel furiously sprint toward the group, completely exhausted. Spotting his returning subordinates, Mai sighs in relief and notes that he is glad they made it back to the village safely. Abel lowers his hood with a deeply apologetic gaze, prompting Mai to stare back in grim understanding. Losing his temper, Mai shouts that his subordinates shouldn't have acted on their own, while lamenting that they are all effectively fired. The older villagers murmur in confusion about the strange men, wondering if they are Mai's friends or simply ex-coworkers. Mai freezes in utter terror as he realizes the villagers are rapidly piecing together his shameful criminal activities. Watching the chaotic drama unfold, Yuuki internally groans that the situation is quickly becoming incredibly messy. Squishing his fluffy puppy, the young boy nervously hopes that Peter will step in to control the escalating tension. The villager suddenly gasps in awe, recognizing Peter and excitedly asking if he is actually the famous mine lord. Seeing the adults completely distracted and failing to pull together, Yuuki decides he can easily use his status as an oblivious child to forcefully interrupt. Clenching his tiny fist with intense determination, the young boy resolves that he is the only one who can settle this ridiculous argument. Stepping boldly into the center of the crowd, Yuuki raises his voice to grab the squabbling adults' attention. With big innocent eyes, he earnestly begs them to explain the situation so he can help sort it out, landing a massive critical hit on their hearts. Hache barks cheerfully to assist, completely melting the adults' tension with a super effective display of absolute cuteness. Trying to justify their crimes, the thugs desperately explain they only borrow money from wealthy travelers and never meant to harm the collapsed saintess. Unfazed by their excuses, Peter sternly commands the thugs to apologize and never attempt something so profoundly stupid again. Thoroughly chastised, the massive Mai bows his head and mutters a sincere apology, causing Sakura to panic. Flustered, the novice saintess awkwardly reassures him that she doesn't remember the incident and is actually grateful since it led to Yuuki saving her. Peter steps in with a serious glare, firmly reminding the thugs that Sakura's kindness doesn't make their actions something to be grateful for. He fiercely demands an absolute end to their highway robbery and pickpocketing, ordering them to start living honest lives. Shifting back to the mission, Peter confirms that the girls will handle the boar countermeasures by setting traps instead of trying to exterminate them. Unrolling a strange mesh, Peter explains that the net utilizes scrapavanium to emit light and vibrations that violently repel the beasts. Villager anxiously questions if a simple net can truly stop a monster, just as another boar suddenly bursts from the tall grass. Acting purely on instinct, Mai bravely throws himself in front of the beast, bracing the glowing net to block its vicious charge. The boar violently recoils from the trap's holy energy, while the villagers stare in absolute awe at the miraculous defense. Mai whips his head around in sheer disbelief, completely stunned to learn that this brilliant method was actually inspired by the tiny boy. Basking in the glory, Sakura happily accepts the villagers' praise, who assume she orchestrated the incredible strategy. Yuuki laughs nervously while Akino proudly explains she simply adapted the concept of an electric fence from her grandfather's rural teachings. Pumping her fist with explosive enthusiasm, Akino declares the trap a massive success and orders everyone to begin installing it immediately. Working flawlessly as a united team, the villagers and hunters quickly carry heavy wooden logs to construct the protective barrier. The villagers and hunters work tirelessly to construct long wooden fences across the vast, snow-dusted mountain landscape. Sweating heavily, the muscular Mai violently swings a heavy mallet to drive a massive wooden post deep into the earth. Sakura cheerfully praises the tiny pup Mighty for his excellent work as Mai stares at her in sudden bewilderment. Feeling an incredible surge of stamina from her holy presence, the stunned man marvels at how crazily energized he feels. Scratching his bald head awkwardly, Mai asks the novice saintess why she isn't terrified of the very men who tried to rob her. Flashing a gentle, forgiving smile, Sakura points out that they never actually harmed her and firmly believes they won't do it again. Closing her eyes with pure, genuine warmth, the young girl happily declares that she has absolutely no reason to be scared. Resting his hands on his hips, the seasoned thug shakes his head with a fond smile, predicting her soft heart will make her a fine saintess. Flustered by the unexpected praise, Sakura wildly waves her hands and stammers that she still needs to train incredibly hard to achieve her dream. Standing quietly by the newly built fence, the cloaked Abel watches the heartwarming interaction in complete silence. Pumping his fist with explosive energy, Mai aggressively rallies the team to work through the night by the light of massive campfires. Yuki quickly steps in to stop him, urgently warning that maintaining bright fires at night will only attract massive swarms of beasts. Realizing the immediate danger, Peter orders everyone to dim the lights and head to bed, completely shutting down Mai's reckless plan. Looking down at his tiny savior, Mai smiles in absolute awe and praises the young boy for his incredible knowledge of the dangerous mountains. Flashing a bright, innocent smile, Yuki happily explains that he simply grew up surrounded by the harsh mountain wilderness. Later that evening, the quiet assassin Abel sits completely alone beneath the darkening sky, lost in deep thought. Spotting the solitary man, Yuki casually approaches and politely asks if he can share the quiet space. Sitting together, the cloaked assassin gently apologizes for their previous clash, while sincerely thanking Yuki for lending his immense strength to his men. Gazing out over the peaceful fields, Abel admits with a quiet sigh that the young boy's actions finally helped him make a difficult decision. Pulling his dark hood tighter, the rogue drops a bombshell, bluntly revealing his firm intention to leave his former comrades behind. Yuki's eyes widen in sheer shock, desperately asking the assassin why he would abandon his friends. Fixing the boy with an intense, glowing stare, Abel hints at a deeply hidden secret beneath his calm exterior. The assassin calmly reveals that his unique eyes grant him the special ability to accurately read other people's true potential. Turning his back to the wind, Abel confidently states that Mai and Stinky will be perfectly fine without his guidance. Glancing back over his shoulder, he softly thanks the young boy for his help before quietly slipping away into the shadows. Clutching his fluffy puppy, a bewildered Yuki sighs and accepts that the complicated grown-up world is full of mysterious adult circumstances. The next morning, a cheerful Mai and Stinky approach the cloaked Abel in the bustling village square. Staring coldly from beneath his hood, Abel bluntly announces that their shared journey officially ends right here. The two former thugs freeze in absolute shock, completely blindsided by their leader's sudden and unexpected departure. As Abel turns and strides toward a waiting stagecoach, a frantic Mai wildly sprints after him, desperately screaming his name. Grabbing the wooden fence, Mai angrily demands an explanation, violently reminding the assassin that they are supposed to be loyal comrades. Refusing to look back, Abel coldly declares that their partnership is entirely in the past and notes that Mai has finally found a true home. Pointing out the obvious truth, the cloaked man notes that his former partners look significantly happier and more relaxed than they ever did in the city. Stepping onto the back of the carriage, Abel firmly commands his shocked friends to stay behind and finally live an honest, straight life. Tears streaming down his face, Stinky desperately begs his beloved leader to abandon the road and stay in the village with them. Shaking his head sadly, Abel admits he has nowhere left to call home, but warmly reminds them that they belong right here. Flashing a rare, genuine smile, the lone wanderer urges his friends to use their immense strength to protect their peaceful hometown. Watching from behind the wooden fence, Yuki and his faithful pup quietly observe the two former thugs walking away down the dirt road. Staring at the empty horizon, a deeply saddened Stinky murmurs that their stoic leader Abel is truly gone. He nervously rubs the back of his head, awkwardly lamenting that even the young boy had to witness them at such a shameful, pathetic moment. I gently rest a heavy hand on his partner's head, flashing a soft smile as he reassures him that everything is perfectly fine. Looking toward the sky with renewed determination, the muscular man declares they must simply do their best so the three of them can happily reunite someday. Clenching his fist with explosive enthusiasm, Mai cheerfully announces that they will immediately resume building the protective traps after breakfast. Pachit barks eagerly in agreement as Yuki smiles and enthusiastically declares that they should go help too. Sometime later, a frantic voice screams Yuki's name as a desperate figure wildly sprints toward him. Panting heavily from her desperate sprint, Akino crashes into the group and breathlessly announces that something absolutely terrible has happened. Trembling with panic, she screams that Sakura has completely vanished without a trace. Yuki and Peter recoil in pure, unadulterated shock at the horrifying news. Kino frantically explains that they shared a room at the inn, but when she woke up this morning, Sakura was already gone. Gripping Sakura's magical staff, Peter grimly reveals that he found her precious weapon completely abandoned behind the inn. He firmly insists that the diligent girl would never carelessly leave something so important lying around, yet their desperate searches have yielded absolutely nothing. Sweating with worry, Akino notes how incredibly serious Sakura is about her duties, wondering aloud if she was violently attacked by a monster. The terrified villagers huddle together, fearfully whispering about the young saintess's abrupt and mysterious disappearance. Grim-faced villager clutches his hat, muttering that he has an incredibly bad feeling about the entire escalating situation. Sudden flashback shifts the narrative to the quiet hours of the early morning before the chaos erupted. Rubbing her sleepy eyes, Sakura groggily wonders why she mysteriously woke up much earlier than usual. Determined to shake off her lingering exhaustion, the young saintess fiercely slaps her own cheeks to wake herself up. Pumping her fist into the air, she forcefully scolds herself to focus so she can work hard for the sake of Tauka Village. Gripping her magical staff tightly, the dedicated girl steps outside into the cool, silent morning. She suddenly freezes in confusion, nervously asking a shadowy figure standing in the dawn light to identify themselves. The strange man confirms she is the Musean apprentice, prompting a bewildered Sakura to politely introduce herself. Pretending to be an ally, the stranger warmly suggests he should introduce the young monster subjugator to the rest of the waiting villagers. The man's friendly demeanor violently shatters into a sinister glare, as he coldly declares that won't be necessary. Sakura freezes in absolute bewilderment, completely failing to process the sudden, terrifying shift in his tone. Without a shred of hesitation, an armored knight brutally punches the defenseless girl directly in the stomach. Looming over her broken body, the ruthless attacker sneers that they will frame her for illegally barging into the mountains and leaving the village in utter ruin. Collapsing in agonizing pain, Sakura desperately reaches out for Yuuki, as the assassin coldly apologizes for simply following his employer's cruel script. The armored thug casually hoists the unconscious girl over his broad shoulder, while she silently prays for Yuuki to save her. Snapping back to the frantic present, the desperate villagers violently scour the area while screaming Sakura's name. Dropping his nose to the dirt, the tiny pup Pacha furiously sniffs the ground in search of a clue. Yuuki urgently asks his fluffy companion if he can successfully track the missing saintess's scent. The search party wildly calls out toward the empty fields, praying for any response from the missing girl. Mai suddenly freezes in sheer terror, his eyes widening as he spots something absolutely horrifying in the distance. The entire group recoils in panic as thick, ominous smoke violently billows into the sky from a raging forest fire on the nearby mountain. Yuki stares at the dark plumes in absolute horror, recognizing the unnatural color of the smoke and realizing the catastrophic timing. His mind flashes back to a stern warning from his master about a dangerous, specialized smoke explicitly designed to violently flush out hiding monsters. Gasping in pure terror, the young boy realizes someone has intentionally ignited a catastrophic flushing smoke right next to a defenseless human settlement. Panic erupts as a villager violently points out that the enraged monsters are charging down the mountain straight toward them. Over the chaotic shouting, an infuriated Mai clenches his fist and furiously demands to know which absolute idiot set off the flushing smoke. Kino desperately begs the men to reinforce the traps and fences, while an older villager grimly agrees it is their only chance. Bringing into action, the village leader wildly gestures and screams for the women to evacuate the children to the other side of the settlement. Brandishing their heavy farming tools, Mai and the men fiercely vow to hold the line and buy enough time for everyone to safely escape. As mothers desperately sprint away with their crying children, the remaining men bravely form a defensive wall facing the imminent threat. Standing frozen amidst the terrifying chaos, Yuuki grips his clothes and silently wishes his incredibly strong master was there to help. Sudden sharp bark breaks his train of thought as the tiny pup Pacha confidently steps forward. Yuuki's eyes widen in sheer bewilderment as a strange, powerful sensation begins flowing directly into his mind. Staring down at his glowing companion, the young boy telepathically hears a request and quietly asks if the pup means to use his full power. Blinking in absolute shock, Yuuki realizes the mysterious voice echoing in his head actually belongs to his tiny dog. Without a second thought, the boy enthusiastically grants permission, begging Pacha to unleash his true strength to save their friends. Blinding, intense light violently erupts from the small dog, forcing Yuuki to throw his arms up to shield his eyes. When the brilliant glow finally fades, an absolutely massive, majestic white wolf with glowing crest stands proudly in the snow. Yuuki stares up at his miraculously transformed companion, his eyes sparkling with pure, unfiltered awe. With an excited shout, the young boy fearlessly launches himself through the air toward the giant beast's back. Telepathically asking if he wants to grab on, the massive Pacha lets out a resounding bark as Yuuki perfectly lands on his fluffy neck. Back at the defensive line, the sweating men tightly grip their shovels and pickaxes as someone screams that the red fang boars are finally attacking. The very ground violently trembles beneath their boots as an overwhelming stampede of massive beasts rapidly approaches. Perched high atop his giant wolf, Yuuki suddenly turns his head as a strange noise catches his attention. Panicked villager wildly gestures toward the opposite side of the settlement, screaming that another terrifying threat is rapidly closing in from behind. Sweating in pure terror, Mai violently curses their horrific luck as he spots a vicious pack of black wolves charging toward them. The defensive line completely collapses in panic as the enormous, shadowy predators violently sprint directly into the village. Moving with blinding speed, the ferocious black wolves completely ignore the terrified humans and dart right past their defensive line. Mai and the other men slowly lower their weapons, staring in absolute mind-boggling confusion at the bizarre turn of events. Villager violently points toward the distance, screaming in disbelief that the black wolves are actively fighting off the charging red fang boars. Staring up at the towering white beast, a stunned villager stammers out a question, wondering if this giant creature is actually the tiny pup Pacha. Mai completely loses his composure, wildly demanding to know if the small, innocent-looking boy is actually a legendary monster tamer. Clinging tightly to his massive companion, Yuuki leans forward as the giant wolf prepares to sprint. The young boy urgently asks Pacha to track down the missing saintess, earning a fierce, determined bark in response. Glancing back at the chaotic battlefield, Yuuki sighs in deep relief, knowing the village is temporarily safe thanks to the wild wolf pack. Waving his pickaxe, Mai boldly orders the young boy to go find the apprentice girl and leave the defense of the village entirely to them. Nodding with intense determination, Yuuki loudly accepts the mission as his giant beast violently kicks off the dirt. The majestic wolf effortlessly leaps high into the sky, leaving the stunned villagers absolutely speechless as he bounds toward the blazing mountain. Gripping the thick white fur, Yuuki marvels at the beast's incredible breathtaking speed as the landscape blurs beneath him. Staring into the rapidly thickening smoke, the young boy urgently asks his companion if they are heading in the right direction. Leaning close to the wolf's neck, Yuuki fiercely prays for Sakura's safety as they aggressively charge into the dangerous, burning forest. Pacha suddenly slows his pace and begins panting heavily, prompting a deeply concerned Yuuki to ask if he is alright. Coughing against the toxic air, Yuuki realizes the brutal flushing smoke is so overwhelmingly thick that it might even suffocate the mighty king of beasts. Peering through the suffocating gray haze, the young boy's eyes widen as he spots a shadowy figure and desperately hopes it is his missing friend. Arriving at the edge of the blazing forest, Yuuki hops off the giant wolf and orders Pacha to wait right there. Sprinting fearlessly into the thick, toxic smoke, the young boy desperately calls out for the missing saintess. A weak, pained groan suddenly echoes through the dense underbrush. Peering intensely through the sharp leaves, Yuuki narrows his eyes as he spots something hidden in the shadows. A wave of pure relief washes over him as he cheerfully declares that he finally found her. Rushing to Sakura's side, he desperately begs her to hang in there while checking her for injuries. Yuuki gently lifts the unconscious girl, his face pale with sudden shock and worry. Looming over the children, a group of armed thugs violently demands to know what a random brat is doing in the forest. Glaring at the terrifying men, Yuuki shivers at their wicked aura but bravely declares that Sakura is his precious friend. The thugs burst into cruel laughter, mockingly pointing out that the boy foolishly came all this way just to save an apprentice. Brandishing their weapons, the ruthless men violently promise to put the tiny boy to sleep right alongside her. Without a shred of hesitation, a burly thug winds up and throws a vicious punch straight at Yuki's face. Moving with blinding speed, Yuuki effortlessly dodges the heavy strike and casually flips the massive thug onto the dirt. Enraged by the humiliating counterattack, the remaining thugs furiously scream at each other to grab the slippery brat. Yuuki leaps gracefully through the air, violently delivering a flurry of devastating kicks that instantly knock the entire group unconscious. Swiftly scooping the unconscious Sakura onto his back, the young boy apologizes for the rough ride. The heavily armored boss suddenly turns his head, angrily demanding to know what is causing such a pathetic commotion. Yuuki freezes in his tracks, locking eyes with the terrifying, battle-scarred warrior. Stepping out of the smoke, the fierce knight coldly commands the tiny child to explain himself. Sweating in absolute terror, Yuuki instantly realizes this man is overwhelmingly strong and that their current situation is incredibly dire. Pushing his small body to the absolute limit, the frantic boy violently sprints away while screaming that they must run for their lives. Panting heavily beneath Sakura's weight, Yuuki desperately wonders if they can actually outrun such a monstrous opponent. In the blink of an eye, the towering boss suddenly teleports directly into their path, mockingly asking where the boy is looking. The knight coldly praises Yuuki for humiliating his men, but firmly insists he must complete his job and take the girl. Clenching his fists, Yuuki fiercely declares that he doesn't care about their wicked plans because Sakura is his dear friend. Standing bravely in front of the collapsed saintess, the tiny boy glares up at the massive warrior and swears he will never surrender her. The armored boss drags a heavy hand down his face, releasing an exhausted, deeply annoyed smile. Drawing his weapon with a sinister smirk, the knight admits the brat is amusing but ruthlessly decides to end his life right there. Squeezing his eyes shut, Yuuki tightly braces himself for the incoming devastating strike. After a tense moment of absolute silence, the confused boy cautiously opens one eye to see why he isn't dead. Both Yuuki and the terrifying knight stare in absolute, mind-boggling shock at the miraculous intervention. Effortlessly blocking the deadly attack with one hand, a fierce, scarred woman smirks and casually chides Yuuki for making such a massive fuss. Standing calmly at the edge of the clearing, the scarred woman warmly notes that Yuuki is making quite a splash. The young boy's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as he happily shouts out to his beloved master. The armored boss violently flinches and stammers in absolute shock as he recognizes the newcomer's true identity. Glaring intensely at the scarred woman, the terrifying knight bitterly mutters the legendary hero's name. Yuuki freezes in his tracks, his mind desperately trying to process the sudden, world-shattering revelation. As the stunned boy realizes his master is actually the famous hero Granadas, Lucy coldly scolds the knight for laying hands on a child. Fixing the towering warrior with a piercing glare, the legendary hero firmly declares she cannot simply leave him be. Yuuki's eyes sparkle with absolute, starstruck awe as he comprehends he was raised by the world's greatest living legend. Lucy calmly orders her starry-eyed apprentice to step back into safety with the unconscious girl. Nodding obediently, Yuuki carefully shields Sakura and steps away from the imminent clash. Lucy locks her cold gaze onto her old acquaintance as Yuuki safely drags his friend into the brush. She mockingly notes that Brooks hasn't changed at all, remaining just a boring man desperate to look big despite his title as the mercenary king. An infuriated Brooks snaps at her to shut up, fiercely claiming he survived the dangerous era and clawed his way up strictly through his immense strength. Shaking her head in quiet disappointment, Lucy corrects him by stating that the truly strong warriors actually died during the Demon Lord era. The scarred hero violently draws her massive sword in a blinding, explosive flash of steel. Glaring coldly at the mercenary, she grimly affirms that every single true warrior perished in that brutal. She silently steps forward, her cloak billowing in the wind as she prepares to face the towering knight. Continuing her verbal assault, Lucy casually mentions that she has heard the nasty rumors about his wicked mercenary group. She bluntly notes that they gang up to hunt monsters and violently squeeze rewards out of innocent people through sheer intimidation. Narrowing her eyes, she asks if his current job was simply to get paid to mercilessly bully a defenseless apprentice of the Musean Order. Furious Brooks screams for the washed-up retiree to shut up and stay hiding in the shadows off the main stage. Gritting his teeth with explosive rage, the massive knight violently declares that his era has finally arrived. He aggressively charges forward with a massive weapon, roaring for her to stay lurking in the back where she belongs. Lucy watches his furious, desperate assault with absolute, chilling calmness. The mercenary king unleashes a devastating downward strike, but Lucy effortlessly blocks the massive blow with her own blade. Gripping her sword tightly, the scarred woman parries his heavy attack with flawless, terrifying precision. The violent clash of their heavy weapons sends intense shockwaves rippling through the quiet forest air. Brooks violently swings again, putting all his immense strength into a furious, sweeping attack against the calm hero. Lucy effortlessly deflects the massive blade, completely neutralizing his overwhelming physical power. With blinding speed, the legendary hero violently counters and knocks the towering knight entirely off balance. Brooks's eyes widen in sheer terror as he realizes the horrifying, insurmountable gap in their actual combat abilities. The massive mercenary crashes violently onto his back, completely defeated in mere seconds. Lucy stands victorious over the fallen man, her expression utterly calm and unmoved by the brief skirmish. Watching from the bushes, an astounded Yuuki realizes just how overwhelmingly strong his master truly is. He mentally recalls how she casually obliterated a pack of ice wolves in one blow, realizing her ridiculous strength was never normal to begin with. Groaning in absolute agony, the defeated Brooks desperately struggles to crawl away as Lucy steps toward him. Staring coldly down at the broken man, she mockingly asks if leeching off the weak is truly a strong way to live. She turns her back in utter disgust, sternly commanding the pathetic mercenary to stop showing children such a shameful display. Leaving the broken man behind, the victorious hero casually strolls back toward the hidden children. Beaming, Yuuki happily calls out to his beloved master, entirely amazed by her incredible, flawless risk. Flashing a warm, gentle smile, Lucy apologizes for the delay and tells Yuuki it is finally time to head home. Back at the Tauka village plaza, the relieved townsfolk erupt into deafening cheers as the battle winds down. Sweating heavily, the muscular Mai violently swings his heavy pickaxe to strike the remaining beasts. Landing a decisive blow, Mai triumphantly declares that there is only one last monster left to deal with. The villager girl frantically points and calls out for Stinky as the rogue desperately sprints into position. Rushing forward with a fierce, determined glare, Stinky prepares to confront the final charging beast. Standing shoulder to shoulder, Peter, Aquino, and the former thugs brace a sturdy net trap to catch the incoming boar. The massive beast violently crashes directly into the waiting net, prompting Mai to proudly shout that everything went exactly as planned. Thrusting his tool into the air, Mai wildly declares the red fang boar subjugation a complete success as the crowd cheers. Striding casually back toward the village, Lucy cheerfully announces their safe return while Yuuki waves happily. Mai wildly sprints up to the pair, desperately asking the kid and the young miss if they are completely safe. Beaming with pure pride, Yuuki joyfully announces that his incredible master came to save them. The muscular Mai stares blankly at the scarred woman, completely failing to recognize her true identity. Peter's jaw drops in absolute shock as he instantly recognizes his old comrade and loudly calls her Captain Granadas. The former thugs completely freeze in pure, unadulterated terror upon realizing they are standing before the great hero. As night falls over the village, a massive whole red fang boar roasts slowly over a crackling open fire. The entire village gathers around a towering bonfire, relaxing and sharing stories after surviving the terrifying ordeal. Clinking massive wooden mugs together in a joyous toast, the relieved villagers loudly declare it is time to celebrate. Tears of pure gratitude streaming down her face, Sakura humbly thanks her benefactor Yuuki and marvels at being rescued by the legendary Granadas. Smiling warmly alongside a barking Pacha, Yuuki gently reassures her that he is simply glad she is safe. The scene shifts to the adults relaxing by the bonfire, with Yuuki and Pacha happily watching from the sidelines. Kino cheerfully waves to the little ones, announcing that their massive feast is finally finished roasting. Presenting the perfectly cooked meat, she generously invites everyone to eat as much of the whole roast boar as they want. Yuuki and Sakura's eyes sparkle with absolute delight as they stare at the mouthwatering feast. Sitting happily on a wooden bench, the two hungry children take massive, satisfying bites of the juicy meat. Savoring the rich flavor, they marvel at the perfectly browned meat overflowing with delicious juices. Yuuki happily devours his meal, noting it is incredibly good even if the salt seasoning is a little light. Chewing thoughtfully, the young boy secretly wishes he could season the meat with a rich, junky, sweet and spicy flavor from his past life. Staring deeply with newfound determination, Yuki's resolve surges as he vows to find those nostalgic flavors while dispelling the miasma. The scene shifts to the adults relaxing by the bonfire, quietly enjoying the celebratory atmosphere. Sitting on a nearby log, a tipsy Peter proudly asks the legendary hero if his talented daughter is almost too good for him. Lucy smiles and firmly agrees, noting that Akino oozes good fortune and is the absolute spitting image of Peter in his younger days. The hero playfully predicts Akino will eventually find a big mine and become a key figure, causing the flustered girl to nervously beg her to stop. Chuckling softly, Peter humbles himself by claiming he is just lucky, admitting they only succeeded because the prodigy Lord Yuuki was there. Lucy gazes fondly at her apprentice, admitting even she is genuinely surprised by his extraordinary development. She marvels at how fast kids grow, noting that he was practically a baby just a short while ago and is now completely out of the ordinary. Sipping his drink, Peter notes he never expected to share a drink with his captain again, though Lucy quickly reminds him the squad disbanded ages ago. Kino playfully scolds her father not to drink too much, noting that even she wouldn't dare try to scold the great Granadas. Yuuki suddenly jogs over with two fresh wooden mugs, politely asking his master and Peter if they are drinking their water properly. Accepting the water, Lucy's expression turns serious as she gently asks Yuuki if he minds talking for a bit. Blinking in sheer confusion, both Yuuki and Peter stare blankly at the legendary hero. Stepping forward with confident, heavy strides, Lucy closes the distance to her young apprentice. Smiling warmly, she praises Yuuki for growing so much and doing splendidly, though the humble boy admits he is simply doing his best. Nodding with gentle approval, Lucy assures him that giving his absolute best is the greatest thing he can do. The legendary hero chuckles softly, her stern demeanor melting away into genuine affection. Her expression darkening slightly, she warns him that similar dangerous situations might easily happen again. Placing a reassuring hand on him, Lucy firmly declares that using his immense power to protect others is the ultimate proof of true strength. She officially commands him to fight seriously whenever the situation demands it, earning a fiercely determined nod from the young boy. The warm bonfire continues to crackle cheerfully as the group basks in the peaceful, celebratory atmosphere. Shifting to business, Lucy casually asks Peter for an update on his secret investigation into the Musean Order. Catching Yuuki completely off guard, Peter reveals that Sakura's recent struggles expose the dark reality behind the Order's tribute payments. While Sakura happily finishes her meal in the background, Peter explains the branch is illegally squeezing outrageous sums from their lower-ranked saintesses. He adds that their extortion rate is causing a massive spike in resignations compared to other branches, which entirely confirms Lucy's suspicions. Peter grimly notes the corruption might run even deeper than we originally feared, prompting a solemn nod of gratitude from the scarred hero. Flustered by her thanks, Peter hastily corrects himself from calling her captain, insisting he is simply honored to fulfill Lady Lucy's request. Yuuki stares at the adults in absolute awe, finally realizing his master and Peter have been secretly investigating the corrupt church this entire time. Watching the celebrating villagers, the young boy's heart swells with profound respect as he realizes just how incredibly amazing the adults truly are. Peter suddenly turns his attention back to the boy, asking for his firm agreement. Lucy smoothly interrupts to ask if she can borrow her apprentice for a little while longer, leaving Yuuki deeply curious about her next move. She reveals that Olympia desperately wants to meet him, casually instructing him to bring the apprentice girl along for a sudden trip to the Twilight Branch. Though slightly bewildered by the rapid change of plans, Yuuki cheerfully accepts the new mission. The morning sun casts a bright, imposing light over the grand architecture of their next destination. The group arrives at the massive, intricately designed headquarters of the Musean Order's Twilight Branch. Stepping through the heavy doors, they enter the grand, echoing halls of the religious institution. Polite receptionist steps forward, nervously asking the imposing adults why they brought children into the official branch. Lucy and Peter immediately lock eyes with the staff, unleashing a terrifying, synchronized glare that completely silences the room. The terrified receptionist violently recoils with a squeak of fear under the crushing pressure of their intense intimidation. Ignoring the frightened staff, the legendary duo boldly marches deeper into the heart of the corrupt building. Cornering the sweating bishop, Lucy flashes a dangerously calm smile and firmly requests to borrow a little of his precious time. Stepping into the grand hall, Lucy glares at the sweating bishop and firmly demands to borrow a little of his precious time. Staring deeply into the church's sacred spring, Yuuki feels a sudden, overwhelming wave of nostalgia wash over him. The panicked bishop demands to know what the legendary hero is planning, while the terrified staff cowers behind him. Lucy and Peter remain completely unfazed, glaring down the corrupt church officials with crushing silent intimidation. Slamming her demands down, Lucy fiercely orders the bishop to return the extorted tribute to the saintesses, while confirming they possess all the damning evidence. The corrupt bishop stammers in pure shock, wildly feigning ignorance as his sinister facade begins to crumble. Desperately trying to regain control, the church leader arrogantly declares that they are the true heirs to the lost spirit's will. Pointing an accusing finger, he bitterly blames the arrogant hero Granadas for saturating the world with deadly miasma after defeating the demon lord. The bishop furiously screams that protecting the city and the absent mine lords' stead costs an absolute fortune, justifying their extortion as the embodiment of the great spirit's light. Sneering with wicked arrogance, he coldly orders the ignorant outsiders to keep their noses out of the church's sacred affairs. The frantic staff desperately calls for guards to drive the noble intruders out, viciously blaming the apprentice Sakura for orchestrating the invasion. Watching the church officials spiral into a chaotic frenzy, a sweating Yuuki nervously realizes the situation is rapidly turning into a disaster. The furious bishop continues his rant, arrogantly questioning if the Great Spirit would ever permit such an outrageous intrusion. Unfazed by the screaming man, Lucy tilts her head with a dangerously calm smirk and mockingly repeats his bold claim about the Great Spirit. Staring directly into the bubbling spring, the legendary hero casually asks the Great Spirit for its personal opinion on the matter. The arrogant bishop freezes mid-sentence, blinking in sheer confusion as he tries to process who she is actually talking to. Suddenly, a single glowing drop of water violently ripples across the surface of the sacred spring. Deep resonating sound echoes through the grand hall, causing the terrified church officials to gasp in alarm. The tranquil waters of the spring abruptly erupt into a towering, blinding pillar of pure, divine light. Shielding his eyes from the overwhelming radiance, the trembling bishop stutters in absolute, unadulterated terror. The swirling liquid magically coalesces into the majestic, ethereal form of a massive water spirit. Staring up at the towering, glowing entity, Peter breathes out a quiet gasp of pure awe at the miraculous sight. Booming, divine voice echoes through the minds of everyone present, fiercely condemning the church for borrowing the spirit's name to satisfy their selfish greed. The majestic entity declares their corruption supremely lamentable, bringing the corrupt officials to their trembling knees. Yuuki stares in absolute bewilderment, his jaw dropping as he realizes the sacred spring water has miraculously transformed into his adoptive mother, Olympia. The weeping bishop violently throws himself to the marble floor, completely convinced that the Great Spirit itself has actually descended. The terrified staff completely breaks down, realizing a divine manifestation of this magnitude hasn't occurred since the terrifying demon lord era. Glaring down at the weeping sinners, the ethereal Olympia softly shakes her head and calls their actions a profound shame. Pressing his forehead against the cold floor, the broken bishop desperately begs the divine entity for absolute forgiveness. The radiant spirit firmly commands them to grant their hoarded benevolence to the truly faithful and worthy members who actively better the world. Leaning close to her bewildered apprentice, Lucy casually whispers that Olympia simply wanted to see his face again. She smoothly explains that Peter had been deeply concerned about the church's corruption, so they decided to use Olympia's dramatic entrance to resolve both issues. Sweating profusely at the sheer scale of the deception, Yuuki mentally questions if causing a religious miracle truly counts as just doing something on the side. Pumping his tiny fists, the young boy quickly shakes off his doubts, fiercely resolving to play along if it means permanently saving Sakura and the other apprentices. The majestic water spirit suddenly points a glowing finger directly at Yuuki, dramatically ordering the church to be extra kind to her most beloved child. The entire room completely freezes, with all eyes violently snapping toward the tiny, bewildered boy standing near the door. The horrified bishop shrieks in absolute disbelief, instantly realizing he just unknowingly threatened the Great Spirit's personal favorite. Trembling with unprecedented terror, the corrupt officials rapidly pivot to face the sudden VIP in their midst. Smiling warmly at her adopted son, the glowing Olympia happily confirms that the tiny boy is indeed her most treasured existence. Shifting her divine gaze towards Sakura, the radiant mother notes with a gentle smile that her beloved son seems to be making wonderful friends. Glaring down at the terrified church officials, the majestic spirit coldly declares that they will receive their divine punishment later from her personal messenger, Lucy. The frantic bishop desperately begs for mercy, but Olympia sternly silences him for violently endangering the lives of innocent people. Trapped by the divine judgment, the sweating bishop groans in defeat as Lucy coldly steps forward to interrogate him about the mercenary Brooks. Shifting her massive glowing form, the Great Spirit gently turns her attention to the young apprentice and kindly asks for her name. Sakura trembles with awe as the divine entity warmly asks her to take especially good care of her beloved child moving forward. Flustered by the overwhelming honor, the young saintess hastily bows and vows to protect the boy with everything she has. Blushing furiously, Sakura marvels at Yuuki's incredible status, while frantically realizing the Great Spirit is actually speaking directly to her. The surrounding priests violently throw themselves to the floor, fanatically pledging that the Musean order will now act solely according to the Great Spirit's true will. Meanwhile, the glowing water spirit desperately reaches her massive, ethereal hands toward the tiny boy standing on the floor. Yuuki tilts his head in absolute bewilderment as the towering divine entity awkwardly wiggles her phantom fingers at him. The majestic spirit sadly lowers her massive hands, unable to physically touch her beloved son through the watery manifestation. Olympia violently weeps in frustration, crying out that she cannot physically hug her precious child in this ethereal form. Gazing up at the towering, weeping spirit, Yuuki's eyes soften as he softly murmurs his adoptive mother's name. Throwing a massive divine tantrum, Olympia sobs uncontrollably and wails about how intensely lonely she is without him. The grand, terrifying manifestation completely devolves into a blubbering mess as a deeply exasperated Lucy orders the great spirit to calm down. Sometime later, back at Peter's cozy shop, the veteran hero laughs cheerfully and notes that the chaotic church invasion was quite satisfying. Pouring himself a drink, Peter smiles and reminisces that their old comrades truly haven't changed at all since the old days. Yuuki watches the adults with sparkling eyes, recalling how seriously the epic legend of Granadas gets talked about out in the world. Peter excitedly notes that the legendary battle against the Demon Lord was absolutely outrageous, relying on Lucy's peerless martial arts and Olympia's overwhelming spirit power. Deep in thought, Yuuki realizes this bizarre world is filled with demon lords, magical beasts, divine spirits, and secret healing arts. Recalling the awe-inspiring manifestation at the church, the young boy marvels at how incredibly cool and fantastical his mother's powers truly are. His mind flashes back to the dark alleyway, where he miraculously shared his inner energy to save the collapsed saintess. Yuuki reflects on Sakura's absolute shock when she recognized his spontaneous action as an advanced healer's technique. Turning toward the shop owner, the curious boy mentions Sakura's claim about his mana and eagerly prepares to ask a burning question. Leaning forward with intense excitement, Yuuki directly asks Peter if real magic actually exists in this world. Blinking in sheer surprise, Peter pauses his drink and stares blankly at the incredibly oblivious child. Chuckling warmly, Peter confirms its existence, but notes it is officially called sorcery, teasing Yuuki for lacking basic worldly knowledge. Peter explains that everyone possesses raw inner energy called mana, and converting it to manipulate phenomena like fire or light is the true essence of sorcery. However, he warns that wielding actual sorcery requires vast mana reserves and grueling training, making true sorcerers incredibly rare. Tilting his head, Yuuki asks if this mystical sorcery is fundamentally different from the glowing Avanium stones used all around town. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, Peter notes that Toonalite only became a massive thriving city because it harvests those powerful spirit stones. Holding up a finger, the veteran hero explains the true reason Avanium is so universally valued across the world. The scene highlights the bustling city relying entirely on the glowing stones to seamlessly power their everyday tools and streetlights. Peter reveals that the stones allow ordinary people without sorcery skills to easily trigger magical phenomena, prompting a nod of understanding from Yuuki. He explains that advancing Avanium technology severely dwindled the need for real sorcerers, pushing those with high mana into the church or hunting guilds instead. Undeterred by the bleak history, Yuuki eagerly leans in and asks if he could possibly learn how to use actual sorcery. Peter hums thoughtfully, scratching his cheek as he seriously considers the incredibly talented boy's bold request. Crossing his arms, the shop owner admits that learning sorcery would definitely be possible if they could find him a proper teacher. Kino gasps in sudden realization as Peter smiles, noting that he actually knows one specific sorcerer who perfectly fits the bill. Peter dramatically reveals the legendary candidate is Lady Rilke, the Granadas squad's former court sorcerer whose all-seeing eye successfully prophesied the Demon Lord's arrival centuries ago. Marveling at the sorceress's incredible lifespan, Yuuki wonders if she belongs to a magic-wielding race like an elf. Yuuki excitedly asks if they can meet her, while a nervous Peter notes that talking about her usually summons her. Suddenly, the entire room begins to violently shake and vibrate. As Akino frantically asks her dad what is happening, Peter calmly orders the panicked kids to hold their cups. The teacups fiercely rattle as a brilliant, glowing magic circle begins to form directly on the wooden table. The mysterious magical energy intensifies, illuminating the room with a blinding light. Unfazed by the chaos, Peter casually mentions that the table was a congratulatory gift from Lady Rilke herself. He smoothly explains that the eccentric sorceress installed a very specific magical mechanism inside the furniture. Without warning, a terrifying severed head bursts straight out of the table, causing the children to scream in horror. Yuuki and Akino wail in absolute terror, scrambling backwards from the horrifying, disembodied face. A beautiful, mischievous woman phases through the wood with a smirk, casually praising the kids for their excellent, terrified reactions. The stunning sorceress fully materializes, sitting comfortably on the edge of the glowing table. Sighing in exasperation, Peter respectfully greets Lady Rilke after their long time apart. Rilke smiles down at the awestruck group, her ethereal presence commanding the entire room. Peter politely asks her not to fright his kids so much, prompting Rilke to apologize while claiming she merely wanted to leave a strong impact on the otherworldly traveler. Trembling with curiosity, Yuuki slowly approaches the sorceress and reaches out to poke her dangling leg. Flushing bright red, the young boy marvels that he can actually touch her, completely catching the sorceress off guard with his sudden action. Rilke smiles in genuine surprise, explaining that his ability to physically interact with her astral projection undeniably proves his immense magical power. Leaning in closely, the beautiful elf asks if he is the boy who wishes to learn sorcery, earning a nervous nod of thanks from Yuuki. Peering deeply into his soul, she murmurs that his vast mana, intellect, and sheer willpower are more than sufficient for the task. Her eyes suddenly widen in pure shock as she reads the boy's deepest, hidden desires. Smirking with intense fascination at his bizarre inner worries, Rilke confidently declares that forging his potential will be entirely worth her time. Raising her hand with a playful grin, the sorceress asks if a specific kind of magic would catch his interest. Brilliant magical aura flares around her palm. She prepares to manifest a physical object out of thin air. Completely ordinary plastic bottle of soy sauce miraculously materializes in her glowing hand. Yuuki screams in absolute joy upon seeing the beloved condiment, as Rilke reveals he can use magic to summon familiar items from his previous world. She proudly notes that the boy possesses a prodigious gift, packing enough imagination and memory to easily sustain complex materialization. However, Rilke bluntly warns him that fulfilling his ultimate culinary dreams will be incredibly difficult in his current, untrained state. Pointing a commanding finger, she challenges the young boy to actively seek her out if he truly wishes to learn sorcery for the sake of that dream. With a dramatic swish of her elegant robes, the powerful sorceress begins to fade away into the ethereal light. Disappearing completely, Lady Rilke leaves behind a final, echoing promise that she will be waiting for him.
Hearing a sharp bark, someone calls out for Pochi to wait. The eager dog barks excitedly, urging its master to hurry home. Trudging along with a bright smile, Yuki shares that he cannot wait to see his mom, while Pochi barks about looking forward to reuniting with his ancient kin. Yuki, Lucy, and Pochi walk along a rugged mountain trail, noting it has been half a year since they left and it is his first homecoming in a long while. The scene shifts to a flashback from a few days earlier outside Peter's handyman shop. Someone offers an open invitation to visit their tower anytime to seek out and learn magic. As Yuki excitedly asks about the magic school, Peter explains that it is the Alberthia Royal Academy, which features a dedicated magic department. The elf Rilke abruptly knocks and pardons her intrusion, assuring the boy that the magic he wishes to master will be his if he comes. Peter suddenly remembers an errand and excuses himself from the conversation. Rilke rushes off with a promise to send someone later, leaving Yuki bewildered. Lady Lucy enters the room to announce she has safely finished tidying up, earning Peter's gratitude for her hard work. Peter pauses and looks off with a thoughtful expression. Musing to himself, Peter wonders why Rilke, whom he rarely sees, came out of nowhere just to invite the boy to a magic school. Feeling overwhelmed by the sudden offer, Yuki admits he is a little unsure about studying magic under Rilke. A reassuring hand gently pats Yuki on the head. Flashing a warm smile, Peter tells the boy to do what he wants because there is nothing to agonize over. Peter suggests returning home to see Olympia, who has been waiting for him, and taking some time to think it over. Yuki enthusiastically agrees to think about the Academy's offer. Fully packed for the journey, Yuki waves a cheerful goodbye to Peter and Lucy outside the shop. Returning to the present, Lucy reminds them that Olympia has been waiting with a long neck, so they should hurry back. Pochi barks happily beside Yuki, asking his master if they are finally returning to the mountain. Promising to run a lot, Pochi barks playfully as Yuki agrees that he is also happy. Yuki suddenly stops in his tracks as something catches his attention. Gazing out over the majestic, snow-capped peaks, Yuki realizes in awe that he can now talk with Pochi. A massive, crystalline monster suddenly erupts from the frozen earth with a terrifying roar. Stepping up to face an abnormal individual of the Shimo Fury Ryumadoki, someone challenges Yuki to show how much he has grown over the past half-year while offering to carry his luggage. Looking slightly nervous, Yuki asks if he has to face the towering beast all alone. He quickly asks Pochi to back him up if something happens, and the brave dog readily agrees. A hand firmly grips the hilt of a sword and draws it from its scabbard. Yuki remembers claiming he could beat an abnormal individual half a year ago, even though he failed to defeat it then. Bolstered by the fact that he can now understand Pochi's words, he reflects on his progress over these 6 months. Gripping his blade with newfound confidence, he declares that he might have finally leveled up. With a fierce battle cry, Yuki lunges forward and swings his sword with all his might. Crouching smoothly after the strike, he looks back in confusion as the monster shatters effortlessly behind him. Walking up with their heavy packs, Lucy warmly praises Yuki for a nicely done victory. Relieved that he beat it, Yuki kneels by the shattered remains but suspects the monster was weakened because the fight felt a little too easy. When Pochi asks if he will destroy the ice core, Yuki explains that normally a Shimo Fury Ryumadoki revives if you leave it, but there is something he wants to try. Hearing Lucy call for them to get moving, Yuki eagerly voices his agreement. Yuki carefully slides the intact crystalline core into his travel pouch. The tranquil journey concludes as they approach a peaceful, picturesque home surrounded by blooming flowers and fluttering butterflies. Spotting a familiar house in the distance, Yuki excitedly points out that it is his mom. Waving his hand high in the air, he runs forward with Pochi and calls out to her. Startled by the sudden noise, Olympia turns her head toward the approaching figures. Recognizing her son, she calls out Yuki's name in sheer disbelief. She instantly swoops in and tackles him into an overwhelming hug as he lets out a surprised cry. Embracing him tightly, she welcomes him home and exclaims how much she has longed to hold the real Yuki. Realizing she is squeezing the breath out of him, she hastily apologizes for getting carried away. Olympia suddenly remembers her manners and looks up to acknowledge Lucy's presence. Freed from the crushing hug, Yuki stands quietly and looks up at the adults. Smiling warmly alongside Lucy, Olympia formally welcomes Yuki back home. Blushing with a bright, innocent smile, Yuki happily agrees. Running toward them with open arms, he announces that he is finally back. As she pours tea at the cozy wooden table, Olympia asks Yuki how his life in town has been. Sitting beside Lucy, Yuki listens as his mother asks if the work is hard or if he found anything fun. Yuki shares that everyone is nice and he is having a good time, leaving Olympia deeply relieved to know he is safe with Peter. Suddenly remembering something important, Yuki looks up at Lucy. Reaching into his bag, he announces that he brought souvenirs for the two of them. Lucy and Olympia look on with curious expressions, wondering what he has brought back. Olympia gasps in sheer delight at the sight of two incredibly cute dolls. Noting that the dolls look exactly like Lucy and Olympia, Yuki asks if they can display them at home. Touched by the thoughtful gesture, Olympia promises to put them in a very special place. Overcome with emotion, Olympia tearfully notes how much Yuki has grown just by bringing them souvenirs. Confused by her sudden tears, Yuki asks why she is crying while Lucy smiles softly in the background. Lucy gently remarks that children grow up in the blink of an eye. Smiling through her tears, Olympia admits that as a mother, she is just very happy. A brief memory surfaces of a young girl thanking her big brother for everything. The memory lingers on the bittersweet feeling of seeing much younger siblings suddenly grow into proper adults. Lucy notes that while the growth brings immense happiness, it also leaves a parent feeling a little lonely. Taking a determined step forward, a booted foot hits the floorboards. Rushing in for a warm embrace, Yuki thanks his mother for always being there for him. He reflects on how she took him in from the snowy mountains and raised him with all the love she could possibly give. Looking up with sincere eyes, he solemnly declares that he is deeply grateful. Stunned and deeply moved by his words, Olympia stammers that she is extremely happy. A gentle hand reaches down and tenderly pats Yuki on the head. Looking down at him affectionately, Lucy tells Yuki that they are the ones who are truly grateful to him. Pochi barks his agreement as Yuki joyfully proclaims how glad he is to have met them and become a family. Smiling brightly at his loyal companion, Yuki also makes sure to thank Pochi. Shifting the emotional mood, Lucy playfully announces that Mother wants to hear all of Yuki's heroic tales from Toei no Light. Eyes sparkling with absolute excitement, Yuki eagerly agrees, stating he has so much to tell them. The family sits warmly around the table, ready to share stories and laughter late into the peaceful evening. A quiet, peaceful house sits safely near the edge of a calm body of water. Carrying his heavy backpack, Yuki trudges toward the water's edge with Pochi following closely behind. Reaching the shallows, Yuki crouches down and gently places an object into the cool spring. He notes that as long as the Shimo Fury Rumidoki's ice core stays inside the sanctuary and avoids miasma, it will not revive. Holding the sealed core, Yuki smiles and confidently states that soaking it in the spring water will keep it completely safe. As Yuki sits quietly by his packed bag, Olympia gently calls out his name from behind. Looking down with a deeply worried expression, she asks if he is really leaving so soon. Yuki explains that he needs to head to the magic school so he can restore Mount Athos, adding that academy staff will likely be arriving at Peter's house soon. Gazing at him longingly, Olympia admits she will be lonely and wishes he could stay with them forever. Lucy gently murmurs Olympia's name, prompting the heartbroken mother to lower her head and quietly accept reality. Kneeling down to his level, Olympia notes with a tender smile that he will have grown even more by the next time they meet. A flood of warm memories flashes by, showing the young boy laughing and growing up through various stages of his childhood. Clutching her necklace, Olympia steels her resolve and makes a firm decision. Flashing a bright, tearful smile, she promises to keep cheering him on with all of her heart from now on. Beaming with pure excitement, Yuki happily shouts his farewells as he prepares to depart. Watching the heartfelt exchange, Lucy smiles warmly at the unbreakable bond between mother and son. Olympia pulls Yuki into a tight, loving embrace, promising to always wait for him as he swears to visit again soon. The scene shifts rapidly as the group prepares for the long journey back to town. The loyal dog happily offers his back for a ride, and Yuki eagerly accepts the invitation. Climbing onto the large foxdog's back, Yuki excitedly commands him to set off. Almost instantly, Yuki's eyes widen in sheer panic as they accelerate at a breakneck speed. Pochi sprints with immense joy while Yuki screams in absolute terror at how fast they are moving. After the intense ride, a completely drained and motion-sick Yuki slumps forward in sheer exhaustion. The wild journey ends as they arrive outside a large, multi-story building in the middle of town. Pushing the door open, Yuki announces his return just as Peter warmly welcomes him back. Peter notes that the boy's timing is perfect because he already has a guest waiting for him. Peeking into the room, Yuki assumes someone from the Royal Academy has arrived to fetch him. A sharply dressed young man immediately recognizes him and greets Lord Yuki Kanzaki with overwhelming enthusiasm. Yuki violently recoils and shields his eyes, completely blinded by the young man's radiant aura. Gesturing toward the glowing newcomer, Peter formally begins the introductions. Standing tall and proud, the handsome guest introduces himself as Christoph Myra Alberthia. Staring blankly, Yuki repeats the name Alberthia as the realization slowly begins to dawn on him. His eyes widen into massive saucers as the sheer weight of the guest's identity finally clicks into place. Trembling with absolute shock, Yuki gapes at the radiant young man and stammers out that he is a prince. Reeling from the sudden revelation, an onlooker gasps in absolute shock at the sight of the royal prince. Utterly confused by the prestigious visit, Yuki wonders what possible business His Highness could have with him. Believing himself to be just an ordinary kid, he questions why the prince isn't visiting a famous hero or his master instead. Laughing warmly to ease the tension, the prince tells Yuki not to be wary and suggests they get straight to the point. Intrigued by the sudden shift in tone, Yuki stares curiously as an official document is revealed. Presenting a formal letter of recommendation from Professor Rilke, the prince formally requests Lord Yuki's attendance at the Alberthia Royal Academy. Overhearing the conversation, Peter and his companion express mutual surprise that the prince personally delivered the invitation from their former teacher. Revealing the true weight of the summons, the prince explains it is a direct command from the great archmage and honorary headmaster. Astounded by this unbelievable revelation, Yuki realizes the eccentric severed-head lady actually holds an incredibly lofty position. Despite understanding her rank, he remains baffled that a royal prince would travel all this way just for a commoner. Staring up in silent awe, the young boy quietly admires the prince as a truly remarkable adult. Returning the respectful gaze, the prince reveals he has been eager to meet Yuki because Professor Rilke is quite taken with him. Listing the boy's incredible feats, the royal recounts how the otherworldly traveler tamed the Beast King and was discovered by the great hero Gratanas. Continuing his high praise, he highlights how Yuki heroically exposed the Musean cult's corruption and cleared the miasma plaguing the people. Shifting focus to the academy, the prince describes the esteemed Alberthia institution as a place built to cultivate brilliant youths for bright futures. Urging him to accept the grand opportunity, he asks Yuki to come at once so they can properly nurture his undeniable talents. Overwhelmed by the prestigious school and a personal royal invitation, Yuki sweats nervously and feels they are laying the praise on too thick. Torn between two paths, he admits his desire to attend the academy but hesitates because he refuses to neglect his duties at the helper shop. Stepping forward in silent support, a reassuring hand is firmly placed on the boy's shoulder. Catching Yuki entirely off guard, a supporter vehemently encourages him not to hold back and simply go. Backing up the encouragement, the prince notes Yuki's reliable work ethic and mentions he even secured Master Peter's glowing endorsement. Swayed by the overwhelming respect and push from the adults around him, the young hero realizes he has absolutely no reason to refuse. Steeling his wavering resolve, Yuki nervously but firmly agrees to do his absolute best at the academy. Smiling warmly at the accepted offer, the prince declares the matter settled and immediately addresses Akino. Instructing Akino to invite Sakura to a dinner party tonight, he playfully reminds Yuki to behave since the boy will soon be separated from her. Staring down at a glowing artifact in his hands, Yuki remembers he also has the Toeno light to consider before leaving. Breaking the serious mood, someone cheerfully promises to cook their absolute best and tells Yuki to look forward to the feast. Transitioning to a quieter moment later on, Sakura and Yuki sit together to discuss the massive life change. Overflowing with obvious admiration, Sakura asks Lord Yuki to confirm if he is truly enrolling in the esteemed Royal Academy. Emphasizing the school's high status, she explains that it is an elite institution typically reserved only for youths from very good noble families. Leaning in closer, she warns him that the tuition fees for such a prestigious academy are absolutely tremendous. Utterly startled by the sudden mention of massive expenses, Yuki violently flinches in sheer financial panic. Quickly moving to reassure the panicked boy, Sakura assumes he is being invited as a scholarship student and tells him not to worry. Breathing a massive sigh of relief, Yuki calms down upon hearing he likely won't have to pay the exorbitant fees. Smiling softly at his relieved reaction, Sakura expresses her genuine happiness for his incredible new opportunity. Reflecting on his boundless potential, she admits she never thought Lord Yuki was the type to stay confined to just one town. Shifting the conversation to her own recent growth, Sakura proudly mentions she also recently became independent as a saint. Praising her immense hard work, Yuki smiles back as Sakura asks if he remembers their dark days in that old back alley. Recalling the terrifying reality of her severe mana deficiency, Yuki admits he was truly scared she might die back then. Filled with immense gratitude, Sakura credits her survival entirely to Lord Yuki and happily notes she has finally stopped collapsing. Standing confidently, Sakura assures him that the frail apprentice is gone and urges him to leave with absolute peace of mind. Moved by her newfound strength, Yuki gazes at the resolute saint in silent awe. Reflecting on his arduous journey, he suddenly realizes a full half-year has passed since he arrived at Toei no Light. Reminiscing about the bustling events, he warmly recalls the many memorable moments and heartfelt gifts shared with the local townsfolk. Taking a moment to breathe, the vibrant town hums with lively energy around him. Continuing their steady walk, the peaceful atmosphere of the bustling streets gently washes over the young hero. Approaching Peter's grand residence, they immediately notice a lively commotion echoing from within the walls. Spotted by the eager crowd, Yuki is cheerfully heralded as the returning star of the spectacular show. Grabbing him without warning, the excited townsfolk enthusiastically drag a bewildered Yuki forward into the house. Pushed firmly into the main room, he steps across the threshold into a massive hidden surprise. Erupting in joyous cheers, the entire room loudly congratulates Lord Yuki on his prestigious enrollment into the Royal Academy. Utterly stunned by the sudden ambush, Yuki stares wide-eyed at the massive festive gathering. Stepping forward with a warm smile, a friend explains that the entire town organized this modest party to properly celebrate his grand new beginning. Swarming him with endless affection, the diverse townsfolk lovingly call out his name in enthusiastic unison. Showering him with heartfelt praises, the roaring crowd passionately urges the young hero to give the academy his absolute all. Overflowing with boundless gratitude, Yuki beams brightly and loudly promises to do his very best. Swept up in the joyous atmosphere, the young hero fully embraces the lively and chaotic festivities. Unrestrained laughter and massive celebrations echo through the grand hall as the tight-knit community revels together. Shattering the joyful mood, a frantic and desperate cry for help suddenly pierces the lively party. Rushing toward the chaotic commotion, Yuki desperately demands to know what is happening as panicked guests scatter. Pointing indignantly, a frustrated woman explains that a disguised man rudely shoved money at her and fled after she simply invited him for a friendly drink. Deeply offended by the dismissive gesture, the off-duty workers angrily question who the arrogant stranger thinks he is. Sweating profusely, Yuki silently panics because he cannot possibly reveal the terribly rude man is actually the nation's royal prince. Stepping in to expertly mediate, Yuki confronts Kristoff directly and firmly states that his defensive actions were completely unacceptable. Lecturing the disguised royal, he carefully explains that the women were simply offering a friendly drink completely outside of their usual working hours. Properly chastised by the surprisingly mature boy, the flustered prince timidly apologizes for his massive social misunderstanding. Nodding in utter satisfaction, the women gracefully accept the apology and declare that his genuine understanding is more than enough. Inviting them warmly back into the fold, the ladies offer to share a festive drink while Yuki safely opts for a cup of tea. Teasing the boy with deep affection, they promise to share a real alcoholic drink with him once he finally finishes school and becomes a fine adult. Laughing cheerfully at the future promise, Yuki firmly reaffirms his unbreakable vow to work incredibly hard. Eventually winding down from the massive hype, the raucous party begins to slowly fade. Drifting peacefully away, the vibrant town finally settles into a quiet and well-deserved slumber. Dawning bright and incredibly early, the very next day brings the official start of a massive new journey. Groaning in sheer unadulterated agony, A severely hungover Kristoff weakly praises Lord Yuki's endless energy the morning after the wild party. Acting as the ultimate responsible caretaker, Yuki quickly forces the suffering prince to drink a soothing cup of water. Observing the incredibly pathetic display, a bystander dryly remarks that it is utterly impossible to tell who is actually the guardian between the two. Worrying deeply for his pale and groaning companion, Yuki seriously wonders if the heavily intoxicated man can even survive a bumpy carriage ride. Analyzing the biological problem like a true scholar, Yuki deduces that a deadly hangover is essentially a toxic poison produced naturally by the liver. Struck by a sudden brilliant inspiration, he theorizes that transferring healing mana could potentially cure the debilitating toxins just like clearing evil miasma. Reaching out with expertly glowing hands, Yuki politely excuses himself as he attempts to miraculously cure the royal hangover. Pondering the mechanics of his magic, Yuki hypothesizes that dispelling miasma and detoxifying poison might share the exact same magical foundation. Focusing his pure energy, the young hero channels a powerful wave of healing mana directly into the prince's ailing body. Jolting upright in sheer shock, Kristoff marvels at how incredibly light and refreshed his body suddenly feels. Relieved that his intense nausea has completely vanished, the grateful royal warmly praises Yuki's splendid healing abilities. Fully recovered and bursting with renewed energy, the prince excitedly announces that it is finally time to depart. Stepping up onto the waiting carriage, Yuki prepares to leave his comforting home for a completely unknown future. Waving a fond goodbye, Lucy urges Yuki to take care and warmly asks him to pass her regards to Lady Rilke. Swarming the departing carriage, the beloved townsfolk passionately cheer for their little hero to do his absolute best. Leaning out the carriage window, Yuki cheerfully thanks everyone as his grand new adventure officially begins. Rolling forward with steady momentum, the wooden carriage carries the boy away from the bustling town center. Shouting a heartfelt farewell over the distance, Yuki promises the vibrant town of Toeno Light that he will return again someday. Traversing rolling hills and sweeping landscapes, the carriage leaves the familiar mountain terrain far behind. Journeying steadily across the vast kingdom, the travelers make remarkable progress toward the royal capital. Arriving at their prestigious destination, the massive stone spires of the Alberthia Royal Academy loom majestically overhead. Staring up in absolute awe, Yuki marvels loudly at the school because it looks exactly like a giant castle. Barking enthusiastically beside his master, Pochi excitedly echoes the boy's total amazement at the towering fortress. Taking the lead with royal confidence, the prince gently motions for Lord Yuki to follow him inside the prestigious grounds. Spotting the impressive arrival, gossiping students instantly recognize His Royal Highness Crown Prince Kristoff. Murmuring curiously among themselves, the elite scholars wonder why the prince is bringing such a tiny new student into the academy. Sweating nervously under the intense public scrutiny, Yuki shrinks back while onlookers openly question if his dog is a magical familiar. Approaching a stern administrative figure, the prince formally announces that he has brought Lord Yuki Kanzaki precisely as Lady Rilke decreed. Echoing from within the imposing office, a commanding voice immediately orders the royal party to enter. Stepping cautiously into the grand room, the young boy nervously takes in the intimidating atmosphere of the headmaster's sanctuary. Confronting them instantly, Headmaster Lorenheim skeptically asks if Yuki is the supposed prodigy that Rilke is trying to shove into his academy. Apologizing for the magic department head's notorious rampage, Lorenheim watches a flustered Yuki timidly deny being a prodigy. Staring coldly at the small boy, the strict headmaster insists that anyone passing through their venerable gates must strictly follow proper procedure. Stunned by the unexpected administrative roadblock, the prince realizes Lorenheim has received absolutely no messages from Lady Rilke regarding the boy. Frustrated by the sudden demand for favoritism, Lorenheim angrily argues that allowing unverified exceptions will only encourage rich nobles to force their way in. Sweating profusely under the heated confrontation, Yuki nervously realizes his simple enrollment is rapidly escalating into a massive political ordeal. Clearing his throat to loudly regain control of the room, the stern headmaster firmly prepares to state his ultimate conditions. Glaring down at the terrified applicant, Lorenheim explicitly demands that Yuki must go through the proper official enrollment procedures. Realizing the brutal implication, the prince notes that Yuki will be forced to take an incredibly difficult transfer test due to the late time of year. Dismissing the royal concern with a casual wave, the headmaster coldly remarks that if the boy is truly capable, he will survive the trial. Panicking internally in sheer terror, Yuki mentally screams that he hasn't studied for a single test and has absolutely no idea what to do. Preparing his immense magical power, Lorenheim dramatically proclaims that they will first observe the boy's heaven-granted talent and body-engraved ability. Stepping forward with an intense and terrifying aura, the headmaster prepares to unleash his full investigative magical might. Summoning a massive glowing construct of pure arcane energy, Lorenheim channels his incredible power directly toward the trembling boy. Staring intensely with absolute authority, the headmaster declares that judgment will be passed using the Royal Academy's legendary appraisal eye. Declaring his ultimate judgment, Headmaster Lorenheim loudly proclaims that the appraisal eye will measure the boy's heaven-granted talent and training-forged ability. Silencing Rilke's protests about seeing it herself, Lorenheim stubbornly refuses to trust the word of someone like her. Ordering the confused boy to step forward and leave his dog behind, the stern headmaster initiates the mysterious entrance exam. Stepping up nervously, Yuki cautiously approaches the towering authority figure. Reaching out suddenly, Lorenheim forcefully squishes the startled boy's face between his hands. Marveling at the wonderfully soft cheeks, the headmaster thoroughly pats Yuki down to ensure there is no hidden cheating. Stepping back in satisfaction, the official confirms no physical abnormalities were found on the utterly bewildered boy. Wasting no time, Lorenheim immediately calls for the next phase of the exam to begin. Opening the grand doors, a mysterious new figure formally announces his arrival. Stepping into the room, the blindfolded appraiser confirms that it is finally time for his specialized appraisal ritual. Striding purposefully forward, the blindfolded man approaches the small candidate. Speaking in a quiet tone, the appraiser reveals he was not born with eyes capable of seeing reality. Ripping away his blindfold with dramatic flair, he proudly declares that his unique eyes see only pure talent. Glowing with terrifying magical energy, the legendary appraisal eye is finally unleashed upon the room. Realizing the man is completely blind, Yuki stands perfectly still but privately wonders where he has seen those strange eyes before. Leaning in incredibly close, the appraiser silently peers deep into the boy's hidden potential. Suddenly reeling backward with a painful groan, the appraiser clutches his head as if struck by a massive physical force. Screaming that the results are absolutely outrageous, the panicked appraiser completely loses his composure while the headmaster urges him to stay strong. Scrambling desperately across the floor, the overwhelmed examiner frantically demands paper to record his findings. Scrawling furiously, he produces a certificate detailing Yuki's impossible EX rank skills like universal translation, sturdy body, and tame. Staring at the outrageous document, the room's adults fall into a stunned and heavy silence. Gazing at his own results, Yuki happily realizes his universal translation skill is the exact reason he can finally understand Pochi. Defending his vision against any doubts of a mistake, the appraiser stands firm while Yuki internally thinks his other skills seem somewhat plain. Recalling his past decisions, Yuki silently notes that he did explicitly refuse a flashy reincarnation cheat upon entering this world. Plunged back into shock, the assembled examiners stare blankly as the sheer magnitude of the boy's power sinks in. Chuckling with immense pride, Christoph praises the overwhelming results expected from a favored child raised by great hero Gratinaz and great spirit Olympia. Frozen in place, the academy officials remain completely utterly speechless. Tilting his head in sheer confusion, Yuki wonders why everyone is suddenly acting so quiet and weird. Fast-forwarding a few hours later, the chaotic situation eventually settles down. Sighing heavily, an exhausted official formally announces that Yuki's admission has been approved by the Emergency Council of Department Heads. Bowing his head in deep relief, the young hero politely thanks them for their official approval. Congratulating the boy with a warm smile, Christoph happily notes they can now officially spend their academy life together. Shocked to learn the mature prince is actually a student, Yuki listens as Christoph explains he graduates next year. Transitioning smoothly, the royal offers to give his new underclassmen a quick explanation of the academy's overall structure. Outlining the curriculum, he explains that younger students start in the general department before a select few advance to specialized branches like magic. Concluding his brief orientation, the prince confirms that Yuki will naturally begin his studies in the junior general class. Answering Yuki's curious question, Christoph admits he is also in the general department but receives special private lessons from Rilke. Preparing to smoothly guide Yuki to his new dormitories, the prince is suddenly interrupted by a furious command to halt. Bursting onto the scene with terrifying magical pressure, Rilke glares fiercely at the calm duo. Furious at their leisurely nonsense, the Archmage violently declares that the young prodigy belongs entirely within her magic department. Protesting her unilateral decision, the headmaster loudly argues that Rilke cannot simply make academy rulings on her own. Ignoring the desperate administrative protests, the eccentric archmage confidently prepares to take full control of the chaotic situation. Staring intensely down at the boy, she questions his true purpose for coming while the administration stammers about proper customs. Leaning in with immense magical pressure, Rilke promises that studying summoning magic under her direct tutelage will yield unparalleled results. Tapping into his deepest motivations, she reminds the young hero that learning her ways might finally help him achieve his dream of dispelling the deadly miasma of Athos. Refusing to back down, the furious headmaster insists they must still set a proper academic example for the other enrolled students. Countering with absolute confidence, Rilke firmly states that all administrative problems will vanish entirely if the boy officially passes the magic department selection exam. Bypassing all standard protocols, she boldly declares they will hold the notoriously difficult selection exam right then and there. Standing tall under the immense sudden pressure, Yuki braces himself for the completely unexpected academic trial. Sweating nervously at the high stakes, he realizes that failing this impromptu test will severely delay his long-awaited magical education. Steeling his burning resolve, the determined boy clenches his fists and visibly vows to give the incoming challenge his absolute all. Shifting the intense scene, a large group of curious students begins to rapidly gather within the Grand Academy courtyard. Whispering among themselves, the confused scholars wonder why the prestigious election is happening at such an unusual time just for a tiny transfer student. Doubting his meager chances of success, veteran students like Cecilia and Basil quietly observe the spectacle and attribute it entirely to the chaotic whims of the magic head. Standing triumphantly before the massive crowd, Rilke flashes a wildly confident grin as she prepares to orchestrate the brutal exam. Raising her magical staff with absolute authority, the great archmage commands the total silent attention of every gathered student. Addressing the anxious crowd directly, she excitedly announces that this perfectly timed trial will be a highly dangerous special edition. Groaning in sheer unadulterated dread, the terrified upperclassmen panic because the normal version of the exam already forces them to stay awake for 3 straight days. Tapping her wooden staff against the solid stone, Rilke smirks as a powerful wave of magical energy visibly ripples through the courtyard. Smiling wickedly at her trapped victims, the eccentric instructor cheerfully declares that the official rules for this test are incredibly simple. Pointing forward with absolute certainty, she reveals that anyone still standing after exactly 1 minute will immediately pass regardless of the defensive methods used. Gasping in collective shock, a massive wave of sheer terror washes over the students as the brutal reality of the ticking time limit sets in. Analyzing the incredibly cryptic rule, Yuki quickly deduces that they are about to face an overwhelming assault designed specifically to violently knock them off their feet. Raising her glowing hand high into the air, Rilke prepares to unleash absolute elemental chaos upon the confined courtyard. Slamming her immense magic down, she officially begins the brutal exam with a terrifying, earth-shattering surge of arcane power. Bracing for immediate impact, Yuki yells out a desperate warning just as the solid ground violently erupts beneath the screaming students. Exploding upward with devastating kinetic force, massive pillars of jagged earth shatter the courtyard floor and launch helpless victims into the air. Scrambling desperately for raw survival, the terrified applicants dive wildly out of the way of the lethal magical spikes. Leaping with superhuman physical agility, Yuki effortlessly launches himself safely away from the very first massive earthly eruption. Staring in absolute visual disbelief, the observing upperclassmen loudly gasp as the agile boy seamlessly runs horizontally along the vertical stone walls. Screaming in sheer unbridled terror, multiple unlucky students are violently thrown into the sky by completely unpredictable secondary rock eruptions. Sneering with absolute veteran confidence, Basil effortlessly blocks the jagged spikes while arrogantly boasting that basic earth magic is nothing to fear. Glowing with a deeply menacing aura, a massive and highly complex magical circle suddenly materializes directly beneath the surviving students. Marveling at the flawless magical display, the crowd points in genuine awe as Cecilia gracefully floats high above the chaotic destruction. Landing perfectly amidst the crumbling rubble, Yuki flawlessly maintains his solid footing despite the violent and continuous tremors. Watching his impossible physical feats, the amazed upperclassmen cannot believe the incredibly capable boy is not even in the magic department yet. Overflowing with pure battle excitement, the young hero marvels aloud at the astonishing destructive power housed within the Royal Academy. Hyped up by the relentless challenge, Yuki grins wildly and loudly dares the magical exam to throw absolutely everything it has at him. Analyzing the shifting battlefield with tactical precision, he wisely predicts that the next deadly attack will definitely not originate from the ground. Staring straight up in absolute frozen horror, the remaining students scream endlessly as a massive magical bombardment rains directly down from the sky. A fierce storm of raging magical energy violently swirls through the testing courtyard, catching the applicants completely off guard. Looking up in sheer panic, the surviving students realize a secondary, lethal assault is rapidly raining down from directly above them. Massive, razor-sharp icicles plummet from the sky like deadly, frozen artillery. Leaping desperately out of harm's way, Yuki nimbly dodges the freezing projectiles just as they violently shatter the stone ground. Screaming a fierce battle cry, the young hero launches himself high into the air to expertly evade another devastating icy blast. Before he can land safely, a massive icicle hurtles directly toward his completely unprotected back. Barking fiercely, Pochi bounds into action and effortlessly intercepts the lethal projectile for his vulnerable master. Landing safely in the rubble, Yuki shouts a grateful thanks to his loyal companion, who smugly barks that it was absolutely nothing. Staring in total disbelief, the stunned upperclassmen point at the magical beast and wonder if the tiny boy possesses a remarkably rare taming skill. Feeling the intense weight of their stares, Yuki internally admits that everyone else's magic looks way cooler than his simple survival tactics. Observing the boy's blatant reliance on his powerful familiar, Rilke chuckles that he is taking her no-restrictions rule completely literally. Suddenly shifting the chaotic elemental assault, the eccentric archmage happily prepares to unleash a completely different magical nightmare. Yelling an urgent and desperate warning, Yuki violently alerts the remaining students that the next massive attack is already incoming. Slamming her staff down with absolute authority, Rilke grins wildly and loudly challenges the trapped applicants to survive an explosive wall of pure flames. Engulfed in a raging inferno, the panicked students scream in absolute agony as the unbearable heat instantly scorches the massive courtyard. Wincing in intense physical pain, Yuki quickly realizes that even his incredibly durable body cannot fully withstand the sheer, flesh-melting temperature of the magical flames. Realizing fire isn't Pochi's specialty, Yuki explicitly forbids his beast from using his full power lest he accidentally vaporize all the humans in the immediate vicinity. Stealing his burning resolve, the young hero loudly declares he will survive the blazing inferno using only his own inherent magical power. Mentally reviewing his unique skills, he quickly catalogues his durable body, the Great Spirit's blessing, and his incredibly potent healer abilities. Channeling his deeply stored magic, he seamlessly combines his mother's loving blessing with his natural physical durability to form a desperate defensive strategy. Drawing pure inspiration from the times he miraculously cured Sakura and Kristoff, Yuki violently pushes his magical limits to the absolute brink. Glowing with a brilliant, soothing aura, a powerful wave of pure healing energy violently erupts outward from his incredibly small body. Pointing in absolute, unadulterated awe, the surviving upperclassmen stare blankly at the incredible magical phenomenon unfolding directly before them. Realizing the sheer magnitude of the boy's bizarre ability, the astounded students note that he is actively healing his burns faster than the fire can even inflict them. Marveling at the boy's incredible tactical genius, the headmaster warmly praises Yuki for brilliantly creating a powerful self-strengthening spell entirely on the spot. With a sharp, commanding snap of her fingers, Rilke abruptly cancels the raging inferno and plunges the destroyed courtyard back into a sudden, eerie silence. Wiping the heavy sweat from his brow, Yuki breathes a massive sigh of relief and happily notes that he somehow managed to survive the brutal onslaught. Looking completely exhausted and thoroughly beaten, he stands completely alone amidst the smoking, ruined rubble of the exam grounds. Glancing nervously around the heavily devastated courtyard, the tired boy wonders if he and the few straggling survivors are the only ones left standing. Congratulating the transfer student on his impressive survival, Basil smoothly declares that the grueling temporary selection was entirely fair. Lowering his magical guard, the elite upperclassman arrogantly prepares to formally accept his prestigious victory alongside his elite peers. Catching a subtle, highly dangerous shift in the air, Yuki's sharp instincts suddenly flare with an incredibly intense warning. Tensing his sore muscles, the young hero desperately screams at the celebrating upperclassmen that the deadly exam is absolutely not over yet. Realizing their terrifying tactical error, Yuki loudly points out that the explicitly promised 1-minute time limit hasn't fully elapsed. Recalling his master's incredibly strict teachings about never letting his guard down, the boy firmly warns that another lethal attack is definitely coming. Smiling wickedly from the sidelines, Rilke mentally notes that the boy's sleep anywhere skill is actually a massive vulnerability in this specific trap. Snapping her glowing fingers once more, the great archmage seamlessly unleashes the final and most insidious phase of the brutal selection exam. Recognizing the familiar, haunting arcane chant, the panicking upperclassmen frantically scream that a wide-area sleep spell has just been perfectly cast. Falling instantly under the spell's incredibly heavy influence, Yuki violently groans as an overwhelming wave of magical drowsiness forcibly shuts his eyes. Swaying unsteadily on his feet, the young hero fights a desperate, completely losing battle against his own magically enforced exhaustion. Just as his consciousness begins to completely fade into darkness, a sudden and brilliant tactical realization violently jolts the boy awake. Watching the chaotic scene unfold, the headmaster heavily criticizes Rilke's nasty personality, though she simply retorts that magic is fundamentally meant to cause trouble. Smiling highly triumphantly, the Archmage proudly explains that being able to sleep anytime makes the boy exceptionally vulnerable to her induced slumber. Suddenly pointing back to the dense, smoke-filled courtyard, a stunned spectator desperately urges everyone to look at the completely impossible sight. Peering straight through the dense magical fog, Rilke violently narrows her eyes in sheer astonishment at the boy's completely unexpected countermeasure. Connecting his pure healing mana directly into his body, the boy miraculously channels a powerful surge of restorative energy to violently burn away the magical fatigue. Expanding his glowing healing aura to its absolute, breaking limit, Yuki forcibly blasts the heavy sleep debuff away from himself and the remaining upperclassmen. Gasping for desperate air, Cecilia and Basil are violently jolted completely awake by the boy's sudden, massive burst of pure supportive magic. Realizing the boy fully foresaw the sleep trap, the highly veteran students are deeply amazed that he prioritized keeping them all awake over his own total safety. Highly impressed by his incredibly quick thinking, Rilke openly praises his brilliant use of massive mana transfer to instantly cure complex magical status conditions. Sighing incredibly fondly, the headmaster dryly notes the boy is a hopeless do-gooder for saving his rivals when he easily could have just held his breath to simply survive. Lowering her glowing staff in absolute, begrudging defeat, the eccentric Archmage officially announces that the grueling 1-minute time limit has finally passed. Pointing directly at the completely exhausted young hero, Rilke loudly and proudly declares that Yuki Kanzaki, alongside Cecilia and Basil, has officially passed the magic selection exam. The scene opens on a quiet, seemingly peaceful moment as the morning light begins to filter in. Yuki lets out a long, dramatic yawn as he finally begins to stir from his deep slumber. Greeting his loyal companion, he wakes up to Pochi's cheerful bark confirming the boy is fully conscious. Suddenly, a wave of profound confusion washes over him as he pauses to assess his surroundings. Looking around the completely unfamiliar room, he wonders aloud where he could possibly be. Recalling the grueling selection exam, he pieces together that he was subjected to a powerful sleep spell. He remembers trying desperately to shake off the heavy drowsiness alongside his two companions but draws a total blank on what happened next. Gnawing anxiety quickly creeps in as he worries about the final results of the crucial test. Interrupting his racing thoughts, Christoph formally greets the newly awakened boy with a gentle smile. When Yuki asks for his location, Christoph explains they are currently in their shared room within the academy dormitory. The older student reveals he took the liberty of assigning them together to ease any lingering unease, momentarily surprising Yuki. Christoph briefly worries he overstepped his bounds, but Yuki quickly assures him he is genuinely thrilled by the arrangement. Absolute shock hits Yuki when Christoph admits his deep worry over the boy sleeping for 3 entire days following the exam. Panicking at the massive loss of time, Yuki immediately demands to know the outcome of his test. Brushing off Yuki's panicked doubts about sleeping through the evaluation, Christoph smoothly confirms his passing grade. Utterly stunned by the unexpected revelation, Yuki gasps in sheer, wide-eyed disbelief. Christoph warmly praises the boy's noble spirit, heavily commending his admirable refusal to abandon others during the dangerous trial. When Yuki anxiously inquires about his two companions, he breathes a sigh of relief hearing they both passed as well. With a massive weight finally lifted off his shoulders, Yuki eagerly prepares to get ready for the academy. Slipping into his crisp new attire, he meticulously adjusts the collar of his prestigious academy uniform. Observing the final fitting, Christoph nods approvingly and notes that the sleek uniform suits him perfectly. Marveling at his sharp appearance, Yuki excitedly realizes he is officially a brand new first-year student. Grateful for the continued help, Yuki gladly accepts Christoph's offer for a quick campus tour since his enrollment paperwork is already complete. Stepping outside into the bright, cheerful sunlight, the duo begins their stroll across the sprawling campus grounds. The magnificent, imposing architecture of the Alberthia Royal Academy towers impressively over the awestruck new student. Navigating the bustling, grand hallways, they weave expertly through throngs of chattering students. Christoph gestures toward a large, heavy door, introducing it as the official classroom for the General Studies Department. Taking in the massive scale of the room, Yuki steels his resolve to work exceptionally hard at mastering magic. Hoping for continued guidance, Yuki nervously asks if his roommate will show him around outside of class times too. Hesitating awkwardly, Kristoff suggests it might actually be quicker to just show him something rather than explain it. Suddenly, a deafening chorus of high-pitched squeals and excited screams erupts from down the nearby corridor. Fleeing the incoming chaotic commotion, Kristoff hastily promises to explain everything behind the cafeteria staircase at lunchtime. Left completely baffled by the abrupt and cowardly departure, Yuki wonders what just happened. A massive swarm of excited students instantly surrounds Yuki and Pochi, loudly gossiping about his magic exam and fawning over the fluffy dog. Later in the classroom, the instructor formally introduces the heavily rumored new student to the highly attentive class. Stepping up to introduce himself as Yuki Kanzaki, the incredibly nervous boy accidentally bites down hard on his own tongue. Flushing bright red with deep embarrassment, he mentally curses his clumsy, painful mistake. Brushing past the awkward introduction, the teacher assigns a female student to assist him until he fully settles in. Puzzled by the specific pronoun used, Yuki curiously glances over to see exactly who his new guide will be. A familiar, stoic girl steps forward into the light, bowing slightly as she politely welcomes him to the academy. Yuki marvels at the girl's beauty as she formally introduces herself as Rosalia. The teacher notes that interacting with her should be a good fit since she is the closest to Yuki's age, marking his first time speaking with a peer. Growing incredibly nervous, Yuki stiffly blurts out a hurried greeting. Smiling softly, Rosalia mentions she has already heard about him from her brother. The teacher casually reveals that the girl is Kristoff's younger sister, effectively making her the princess of the country. Panicking at her royal status, Yuki stammers out a highly formal introduction, but the teacher quickly reminds them that class distinctions do not exist within the academy. The instructor elaborates that even students with noble titles are explicitly taught not to introduce themselves by their family names. He firmly declares his absolute expectation for his students to respect each other's unique traits above all else. Nodding in understanding, Yuki regains his composure and turns his attention back to the princess. Stepping forward, he confidently extends his hand toward her in a welcoming gesture. Dropping the rigid formalities, he greets Rosalia warmly and casually. Bewildered by the action, the sheltered princess stares blankly at his outstretched hand and asks what it means. Blushing slightly, Yuki explains that a simple handshake is a universal sign of friendship. Rosalia gazes at his hand, her eyes widening as she slowly processes the unfamiliar concept of casual camaraderie. She quietly murmurs the word to herself, clearly moved by the prospect of genuine friendship. Reaching out timidly, she gently grasps his hand to complete the handshake. The instructor watches the heartwarming interaction unfold with quiet, satisfied approval. Later during class, the teacher calls on Yuki to solve a mathematical equation written on the chalkboard. The boy swiftly and effortlessly writes out the correct answer to the basic multiplication problem. Impressed by his speed, the teacher highly praises his accurate response. A loud school bell suddenly chimes, signaling the end of the instructional period. Approaching his desk, Rosalia warmly commends Yuki for his splendid academic performance. Yuki nervously laughs off the compliment, but she insists he shouldn't be modest after solving such a difficult question so smoothly. Expressing her deep amazement, she notes that he possesses outstanding academic intellect alongside his formidable physical and magical talents. Mentally reflecting on his past life, Yuki amusingly credits his college degree and Japan's compulsory education system as his true cheat powers. A sudden noise interrupts his inner thoughts, immediately drawing his attention outward. Pointing toward a distant commotion, Rosalia observes that a large, screaming crowd is gathering near the cafeteria area. Hearing the location instantly triggers Yuki's memory of Kristoff promising to wait behind the cafeteria staircase at lunchtime. Realizing he is late, Yuki jumps up in a panic as he remembers his promise to the older student. Meanwhile, a massive mob of swooning girls aggressively swarms Prince Kristoff, eagerly begging for his advice on their assignments. Arriving at the scene, Yuki is absolutely stunned by the deafening crowd of admirers surrounding his friend. Unfazed by the utter chaos, Rosalia dryly comments that it is always easy to find her brother due to his persistent fan club. Spotting the overwhelmed prince waving desperately for help, Yuki finally understands why Kristoff needed a favor and decides to mount a rescue. Bolting straight into the thick crowd, Yuki loudly shouts Kristoff's name to cut through the endless chatter. Grabbing the prince's arm, he dramatically declares that he is starving in order to create a distraction. Seizing the perfect excuse, Kristoff politely pardons himself from the disappointed girls by claiming he has prior lunch plans with his roommate. Dragging the prince to safety, Yuki brushes off Kristoff's immense gratitude and urges him to hurry up so they can eat. Suddenly spotting his sister nearby, Kristoff halts in genuine surprise as Rosalia formally greets him. She calmly explains she is acting as Yuki's caretaker and notes how incredibly rare it is to see the prince visiting the cafeteria. Acknowledging that royals typically dine separately, she humbly requests to join them for lunch, earning a quick and happy approval from her relieved brother. Flustered, Rosalia vehemently denies any hidden meaning, stammering that she is just glad since she usually sticks strictly to protocol. Clasping her hands together, she brightly declares her excitement over finally becoming Yuki's friend. Hearing this, Yuki tilts his head in mild confusion, utterly bewildered by her intense emotional reaction. While Pochi impatiently barks for them to just eat already, Yuki silently wonders if offering a handshake was actually considered rude in her culture. Meanwhile, Rosalia stares at her own hand with a soft, radiant smile, clearly cherishing the newfound connection. Startled by her brother's amused gaze, her face instantly flushes bright red as she realizes he is watching her. Coughing to clear the awkward air, Kristoff pivots the conversation, asking Yuki if he is heading to Lady Lilka's place this afternoon to study magic. Confirming the plan, Yuki agrees when Kristoff suggests they leave early since the magic department's building is quite far away. Eager to help, Rosalia immediately volunteers to guide Yuki there herself. Gently shutting down her offer, Kristoff reminds his sister that she has a general studies class and promises to take Yuki there instead. Relenting gracefully, Rosalia bows slightly and asks her brother to take good care of her new friend. Turning to Yuki, she thanks him for the day and cheerfully wishes to see him tomorrow. Stunned by her sudden brightness, Yuki watches her depart with wide-eyed surprise. Recovering quickly, he returns her warm farewell, confirming he will indeed see her tomorrow. As she walks away, Rosalia clutches her chest and softly murmurs about finally making her very first friend. Walking alongside his roommate, Kristoff notes with an amused smile that his sister has taken quite a liking to Yuki. Explaining that she is often tense both in and outside of school, the prince earnestly requests Yuki to continue being kind to her. Without a moment of hesitation, Yuki warmly agrees to the request with a bright, reassuring grin. Arriving at their destination, Kristoff points out the magic department director's office and bids his friend farewell. Hearing a sharp command to enter, Yuki cautiously opens the door and politely introduces himself. Inside the dimly lit office, Lilka sits behind her massive desk, her piercing gaze locked onto the boy. Smirking haughtily, Lilka greets the young man and notes his arrival with clear satisfaction. Leaning forward, she dramatically declares that from this moment forth, he shall be her official disciple. Waving his hands in sheer panic, Yuki immediately rejects the title, desperately begging her to wait a moment. Baffled and deeply offended, Lilka screeches in outrage, demanding to know why he would refuse such an honor. Sweating nervously, Yuki explains that while he genuinely wants to learn magic, his true master is Lucy Granada's. Standing firm in his loyalty, he firmly states that he simply cannot call anyone else his master. Throwing a childish tantrum, Lilka whines about having countless people begging to be her disciple, prompting Yuki to politely suggest calling her sensei instead. Grumbling under her breath with a reluctant pout, Lilka begrudgingly allows the new title of sensei. Getting straight to business, Yuki admits there is a specific spell he wishes to learn involving summoning materials from another world. Deeming a verbal explanation too much of a pain, Lilka decides to assist him by doing it directly. Utterly confused by her abruptness, Yuki tentatively holds out his hand as commanded. Grasping his hand firmly, Lilka channels her energy and imprints a glowing, complex magical crest directly onto his skin. Pulling his hand back, Yuki gasps in sheer amazement as he inspects the radiant mark now etched onto his flesh. Lilka smugly explains that the crest allows him to completely skip all the complex chants and formulas typically related to summoning. When Yuki asks how to actually perform the spell, Lilka vaguely replies that it is all about feeling it. Blanking completely at her unhelpful instruction, Yuki stares at her in absolute disbelief. Sticking her chest out proudly, Lilka admits she has never actually taught anyone magic before, boldly claiming that students simply grow on their own. Slumping over in utter defeat, Yuki realizes his new magical instructor is completely incompetent at teaching. Attempting to clarify, Lilka reminds him to just use his imagination, pointing out that he successfully created his own defensive spell during the exam. Gazing intently at his marked hand, Yuki mutters the word imagination as he tries to process the vague advice. Elaborating slightly, Lilka instructs him to clearly envision the phenomenon or result he wishes to draw in, noting that a vivid imagination strengthens the magic. Scratching his head, Yuki awkwardly admits that he kind of understands her point, but also really does not. Brushing off his confusion, Lilka casually declares that actual practice is what matters most anyway. Suddenly, a polite knock interrupts their lesson, and a girl named Cecilia formally announces her presence before Lilka grants her entry. Deep in concentration, Yuki ignores the distraction, muttering to himself as he tries to recall the mental image he used to heal a previous burn. Bursting into the room with alarming speed, Cecilia accidentally collides hard with Yuki, sending them both tumbling. Scrambling frantically, Cecilia profusely apologizes for the collision, wildly claiming she completely failed to see him standing there. Recognizing her immediately, Yuki excitedly points out that they took the entrance exam together. Ignoring his cheerful greeting, Cecilia turns entirely serious and requests a private discussion with him. Pointing directly at Yuki, her intense gaze leaves the boy utterly bewildered by the sudden demand. Without warning, Pochi lunges forward with a vicious bark, startling Cecilia into a terrified scream. Snarling aggressively, the hound bares his teeth, loudly warning his master about the foul scent of miasma clinging to the girl. Startled by Pochi's violent reaction, Yuki frantically yells at his loyal dog to back down. Recovering her composure, Cecilia slowly unbuttons her collar, grimly stating that she came specifically about this issue. Staring in pure horror at her exposed chest, Yuki screams in terror at the grotesque, spreading affliction blighting her skin. Staring at a bizarre, human-like plant, the characters recoil in shock at the sight of its tiny face and limbs. Shrinking back in fear, someone nervously asks Cecilia what the strange entity could possibly be. Peering closely at the motionless creature, they wonder aloud if it has already died. Cecilia calmly identifies the creature as a mandragora, prompting a stuttering gasp of absolute disbelief. Explaining its immense value as a rare ingredient for magic recovery potions, she pivots to ask a serious question. She brings up his past working under Lord Peter, specifically noting his cooperative efforts with the Musean Order to handle severe miasma pollution. Feeling overwhelmed by the sudden scale of the conversation, Yuki nervously confirms that the rumors are completely true. Panicking that he might have said something wrong, he watches her chuckle with an ominous, knowing smirk. Suddenly snatching Yuki away, she boldly declares she is borrowing him from Lady Riruka, who casually grants her permission. Dragging the bewildered boy along, she proudly announces her arrival to Emma, who slowly looks up from her work. Blinking in quiet confusion, Emma tilts her head and wonders what is going on. Throwing her arms out, the girl dramatically introduces Yuki as the miasma pollution response specialist they had been searching for. Startled by the sudden, energetic introduction, Emma squeaks in surprise and fumbles to find her words. Gathering her courage, she politely introduces herself as Emma, the dedicated president of the Academy's gardening club. Nodding politely in return, Yuki introduces himself to the nervous club president. Stumbling through her nerves, Emma suddenly bows and desperately begs him to join her gardening club. Caught completely off guard, Yuki freezes with a blank expression of utter shock. Recovering his senses, he demands to know the reason behind the sudden recruitment and asks what the club actually does. Cecilia explains that the club conducts serious academic research and desperately needs his specific expertise to solve a major problem. When Yuki asks for details, Emma eagerly jumps in and requests his direct assistance in safely cultivating mandragoras. Pointing at the strange, fleshy root, Yuki questions the task while Emma proudly praises her bizarre, homegrown creature as adorable. Noticing his highly skeptical look, Emma fiercely defends the mandragora's cuteness with unwavering conviction. Staring at the wrinkled, humanoid plant, Yuki completely fails to see anything resembling traditional cuteness. Forcing a stiff smile, he awkwardly agrees that it is cute before trying to steer the conversation back on track. Emma passionately explains that mastering the artificial cultivation of these rare monsters could provide a stable supply of life-saving medicine. Her expression darkens as she reveals the deadly hurdle of the mandragora's lethal scream, emphasizing the severe cost and time required for safe harvesting. Citing ancient literature, Emma theorizes that mandragoras used to be docile plants before the Demon King's miasma twisted them into violent monsters. Connecting the dots, she formally asks to borrow Yuki's expertise in handling miasma-corrupted beasts to solve their agricultural crisis. Processing the information, Yuki notes that while harvesting kills the mutated plants, they remain fundamentally botanical at their core. He accurately summarizes her overarching goal of neutralizing the dangerous miasma effects to allow for perfectly safe, mass cultivation. Clenching his fist, Yuki finds a sudden surge of inspiration and makes a firm decision. Realizing this research could help cure Athos, he eagerly agrees to assist the gardening club with their dangerous project. Lighting up with absolute joy, Emma thanks him profusely while Cecilia warmly congratulates her. Raising a single finger, Yuki halts the celebration to establish one important condition for his help. Pointing directly at the two girls, he boldly asks them to tutor him in the ways of magic. Flustered, Cecilia points out the irony of tutoring the very boy who saved her, to which Yuki desperately admits his complete lack of magical talent. Emma shyly confesses her own magical shortcomings, leaving the trio in a slightly awkward, stumped silence. Leaning in with pleading eyes, Yuki promises not to take up too much of their time and begs them to reconsider. Desperate to secure his help for her mandragoras, Emma joins forces with Yuki and begs Cecilia to accept the tutoring job. Sighing in defeat, Cecilia agrees to the terms on the condition of full cooperation, instantly sparking cheerful gratitude from the other two. Thinking about safe mandragora cultivation, Emma gently pats her potted plants. Pondering his next move, Yuki realizes his only current ability is energizing people. Suddenly, Pochi barks playfully from the sidelines. Staring at the creepy carrot-like plant, the little dog eagerly wonders if he should defeat it. Scolding the pup, Emma firmly insists he stop messing with such important research materials. Admitting he has never tried his power on monsters before, Yuki decides to experiment just a little. Channeling his energy into the mandragora, he anxiously waits to see the result. The strange root sits completely motionless in the dirt. Suddenly, the tiny creature begins to twitch and emits soft squeaks. Eyes widening in shock, Yuki breathes out in disbelief as the plant actually moves. Without warning, the energized mandragora leaps directly toward an unsuspecting Emma. Panicking, Yuki desperately shouts her name. Completely ignoring the danger, Emma gushes over the creature's cuteness even as it ruthlessly bites her face. A frantic struggle ensues as they desperately try to pry the feral plant off her. Exhausted and battered, Emma groans while holding the newly contained creature. While Cecilia notes its vicious nature, Emma stubbornly believes love will tame it, though Yuki fears it might kill her first. Agreeing it needs containment for now, they carefully secure the mandragora inside a sturdy cage. Blushing with pure joy, Emma expresses her deep gratitude for finally seeing a living mandragora. Turning to Yuki with a bright smile, she sincerely thanks him for his help. Scratching his head with a sheepish grin, he happily accepts her thanks. Shifting focus to magic training, Cecilia struggles to explain a spell using confusing sound effects. Exhausted by the poor instruction, Yuki suggests they take a quick break. Cheerfully approaching the cage, Emma offers liquid fertilizer to the newly named Drafoy. The hostile little plant violently slaps the bottle away. Surprised by the sudden aggression, Emma lets out a soft sigh. Rushing over, Yuki notices the caged creature acting up again. Reaching through the bars, he channels his calming energy directly into the frantic mandragora. Emma notes that while Yuki's magic temporarily soothes the beast, it continues to chatter restlessly. Her face darkens as she realizes the calming effect is wearing off faster every single day. Seeing her distress, Cecilia urgently calls out to her friend. Trying to lift her spirits, Cecilia promises they will find a permanent solution. Reviewing the situation, Yuki realizes his initial magic burst is the only thing keeping Drafoy alive and active. Glancing over Emma's detailed observation diary, he notes the creature's increasing dependency on his daily magic transfers. Hearing the plant emit a faint scream, Yuki grimly concludes that it remains a fundamentally dangerous monster. Staring thoughtfully at the caged beast, he wrestles with the harsh reality of their failed taming experiment. Suddenly, the little mandragora stops its thrashing and looks up with wide, innocent eyes. Reaching out through the bars, Drafoy gently offers a tiny leaf to the bewildered boy. Bathed in a soft, ethereal glow, the creature finally appears completely docile and harmless. Completely taken aback by the sweet gesture, Yuki's eyes widen in silent awe. Sensing his sudden stillness, Emma softly asks if everything is all right. Struck by a sudden realization, Yuki's eyes widen as a brilliant idea forms in his mind. He recalls the ice core of the pseudo-frost dragon that was soaked in the spring's holy water, noting it still shows absolutely no signs of regenerating. Connecting the dots, he excitedly theorizes that completely purging the miasma from a mandragora might revert it into a completely harmless plant. Turning to his friends, Yuki confidently tells Emma and Cecilia that they might actually be able to pull this off. Caught off guard by his sudden outburst, the two girls stare at him in utter disbelief. Staring ahead with unwavering confidence, Yuki prepares to reveal his master plan. Throwing his arms wide, he cheerfully announces that he has an amazing friend who can help them solve their problem. Several days later, a loud, piercing screech echoes through the room as the contained mandragora violently thrashes around. Watching the frantic creature, Emma desperately begs Drafoy to calm down before it severely injures itself. Suddenly, a sharp, familiar bark interrupts the chaotic scene. Pochi the dog proudly struts in and urges his companion to hurry, while a young girl's voice desperately calls for him to wait. Bursting into the room, Sakura apologizes for the delay and happily greets Lord Yuki. Flooded with relief, Yuki warmly welcomes Sakura and thanks her for making the long journey. Petting the smug little dog, Yuki expresses his gratitude while Pochi telepathically declares this a one-time special favor. Yuki explains to the group that he had Pochi deliver a letter to Peter and bring Sakura back carrying precious holy water. While Pochi demands a luxurious dinner as payment, Sakura curiously asks what the holy water is actually meant for. Before Yuki can explain, Emma screams in absolute horror as her precious mandragora suddenly collapses. Rushing over to the cage, Emma desperately cries out to the motionless Drafoy. Peering closely at the shriveled creature, Sakura notes it is a mandragora, prompting Yuki to explain it is a special, moving variant. Startled by the revelation that it can move, Sakura is caught off guard when Yuki urgently demands the holy water. Blinking in confusion, the young girl hesitates and asks if he genuinely intends to use it on the bizarre plant. Panicking, Sakura warns that holy water instantly kills corrupted plants like zombie grass, fearing it will destroy Emma's precious mandragora. Horrified by the implication, Emma tearfully accuses Yuki of trying to exterminate Drafoy, forcing him to frantically deny the charge. Calmly de-escalating the situation, Yuki explains that holy water doesn't kill corrupted plants, but simply purges the miasma to revert them to their natural state. Recalling Emma's earlier research, he hypothesizes that since mandragoras existed peacefully before the Demon King's era, the holy water will simply cure it. Pointing confidently at the cage, Yuki declares that Drafoy will finally become a completely harmless plant. Just as he prepares to act, Emma suddenly shouts for him to wait. Stepping forward with absolute determination, she firmly insists that anything involving plants must be left entirely to her. Staring fiercely at her withered companion, Emma vows that she will be the one to save its life. Impressed by her unwavering resolve, Yuki smiles and grants her the floor. Carefully taking the holy water, Emma gently pours the purifying liquid directly over the corrupted mandragora. Instantly reviving with a healthy glow, a refreshed Drafoy looks up happily as Emma eagerly shows off the results to Yuki. Smiling warmly, Yuki notes how energetic the creature has become, while Emma laughs that water is naturally essential for all plants. Blushing with embarrassment, Emma admits she completely forgot Drafoy was a plant once it started moving, sincerely thanking Yuki for his brilliant deduction. Mentally calculating their resources, Yuki figures Sakura's holy water will be enough to sustain Drafoy and cultivate the other mandragoras for now. However, he quickly realizes they cannot continuously force a reluctant Pochi and Sakura to make the arduous journey from Toano Light. Sighing over this new logistical nightmare, Yuki groans that solving one problem only created another, especially with his own magic training stalling out. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of inspiration strikes him like a bolt of lightning. He excitedly realizes he can use a localized summoning magic to pull the holy spring water directly from Mount Athos. Clenching his fists in absolute triumph, Yuki declares that mastering this single spell will permanently solve their entire mandragora cultivation crisis. Clenching his fists in excitement, Yuki realizes that summoning spring water from Mount Athos could completely solve the mandragora cultivation crisis. Knowing that practice is the only way to master the complex spell, he is suddenly interrupted by Kristoff calling out his name. Approaching with a warm smile, Kristoff casually asks if Yuki's magic training and mandragora farming are progressing smoothly. Yuki cheerfully replies that while his magic still needs work, the cultivation is succeeding thanks to his friend Sakura, the holy maiden of Toano Light. Nodding in recognition, Kristoff recalls seeing the young holy maiden accompanying Yuki during a previous encounter. Yuki enthusiastically explains that he had Pochi carry Sakura and the purifying holy water all the way to the academy. He adds that because he rushed her arrival, he now has to figure out a way to safely escort her back home. Glancing down at a heavily snoring Pochi, Yuki sighs that the exhausted dog absolutely refuses to move another inch. Stepping up to solve the problem, Kristoff volunteers to escort Sakura himself, expressing a keen interest in speaking with the holy maiden. Surprised by the generous offer, Yuki asks if the noble is too busy, but Kristoff calmly assures him that he already had plans near Toano Light. Beaming with immense relief, Yuki eagerly thanks his friend for saving them from a logistical nightmare. Brushing off the gratitude, Kristoff smoothly pivots the conversation back to Yuki's struggling magic studies. He reveals that an individual from the recent selection exam took a strong interest in Yuki and might be the perfect tutor to help him. Eyes lighting up with hope, Yuki immediately guesses that they are talking about Basil. Cecilia steps in and confirms the suspicion, promising to personally ask Basil to take Yuki under his wing. Smiling warmly at Yuki's thanks, she humbly admits that Basil would make a far superior magic instructor than herself. Meanwhile, a beautifully dressed girl elegantly approaches the group with a confident aura. Flashing a radiant smile, the mysterious girl directly addresses a highly confused Sakura by name. Flustered by the sudden attention, Sakura stammers to ask how the stranger knows her, prompting the girl to mention Yuki's constant praise. Bowing gracefully, Princess Rosalia formally introduces herself as both the royal heir to the kingdom and a very close friend of Yuki. Leaning in with an intimidating smile, Rosalia subtly warns Sakura not to worry about Yuki, as she will be keeping a very close eye on him. Completely overwhelmed by the royal pressure, Sakura shrinks back and nervously agrees with the terrifying princess. Suddenly, Kristoff casually greets Rosalia as his little sister, sending Sakura into an absolute panic. Realizing she is surrounded by high royalty, Sakura trembles while Kristoff calmly asks his sister what she is doing there. Feigning complete innocence, Rosalia smoothly claims she was simply greeting Yuki's adorable friend. Jogging back to the group, Yuki obliviously introduces the two royals to a terrified Sakura. Addressing Sakura with deep respect, Kristoff steps forward, causing the poor girl to stutter uncontrollably in his presence. Bowing slightly, the prince formally requests the honor of escorting her back to Toano Light to hear her fascinating stories. Freezing like a deer in headlights, Sakura stares at the prince in utter disbelief. Trembling at the overwhelming prospect, Sakura desperately tries to decline the terrifying honor, but Kristoff gently insists it is a rare opportunity. Yielding to the polite royal pressure, Sakura helplessly accepts the offer before Yuki warmly thanks her for all her hard work today. Flashing a bright smile, Yuki promises to visit her soon, instantly melting away her lingering anxiety. Waving cheerfully, they exchange final goodbyes as Sakura departs with her royal escort. Turning her attention back to the boy, Rosalia softly calls out Yuki's name. Blushing slightly, she nervously asks about his schedule for the rest of the afternoon. Fidgeting with shy anticipation, she suggests a private study session in his room, but Yuki completely misses the hint and announces he is going to see Basil for magic lessons. Oblivious to her romantic intentions, Yuki casually invites her to tag along, leaving Rosalia completely stumped and defeated. With a cheerful wave, Yuki bids her farewell until tomorrow, leaving the disappointed princess to quietly accept her tragic loss. Arriving outside his destination, Yuki double-checks the room number before politely knocking and announcing himself. A calm voice from inside welcomes him in, thanking him for taking the time to visit. Bowing respectfully, Yuki officially begins his highly anticipated tutoring session. Looking down at the polite boy, Basil notes how surprisingly well-mannered he is despite his young age. The older student mentions hearing from Kristoff and Cecilia about Yuki's ongoing struggles with learning magic. Nodding in agreement, Yuki confirms the rumors while Basil wonders what kind of spell could stump someone who passed the selection exam so easily. Looking up with determination, Yuki explains his desperate desire to learn specialized retrieval magic. He clarifies that he wants the ability to summon absolutely anything he imagines directly to his hands. Stroking his chin in deep thought, Basil mutters that he has never heard of such a spell, comparing it to spatial connection magic. Fidgeting slightly, Yuki admits that Professor Riruka tried to teach it to him once but it completely failed. Anxiously looking up at his new tutor, the young boy nervously asks if the spell is simply too difficult to master. Flashing a confident smile, Basil firmly assures him that they will completely conquer the spell by the end of the day. Analyzing the mechanics, the genius student realizes there is no established formula for this specific type of spatial manipulation. Suddenly, Yuki strikes a bizarre pose and shouts out a completely nonsensical phrase. Spinning in weird circles, the boy completely baffles his new instructor. Staring in utter confusion, Basil asks what he is doing, only for Yuki to explain it is the magic practice Cecilia taught him. Sighing in realization, Basil notes that Cecilia learns entirely through instinct, rendering her bizarre teaching methods utterly useless to him as well. Muttering to himself, Basil begins drafting a proper training method by figuring out which body parts require the most intense mental focus. Turning back to his student, he asks if Yuki has already decided exactly what object he wants to summon. Beaming with excitement, the boy eagerly declares that he wants to retrieve water from his distant hometown. Caught slightly off guard, Basil blinks in surprise and asks for confirmation. Recovering quickly, the older student realizes that despite being unexpected, water might actually be the perfect practice target. Peering at Basil's notes, Yuki casually reads aloud advanced instructions about focusing the dominant hand and utilizing a mind palace. Absolutely stunned, Basil demands to know how the young boy can perfectly read ancient, forgotten languages. Scratching his head, Yuki nonchalantly attributes the incredible feat to his universal translation skill. Trembling with excitement, Basil realizes the massive potential of bringing Yuki to the library tower to translate lost texts. Forcing himself to calm down, the dedicated tutor suppresses his academic excitement to focus on the immediate magic lesson. Instructing the boy on the fundamentals of imagery, Basil tells him to gather the exact mental picture of the water into his right hand. Gently grasping Yuki's hand, Basil tells him to channel his raw senses into the physical touch. Closing his eyes, the young boy silently focuses his entire being on the sensation. Guiding the meditation, Basil instructs Yuki to mentally travel to the exact location of the target. He clarifies that only Yuki's consciousness should move, telling him to vividly imagine walking out of the academy. Sinking deeper into the trance, Yuki visualizes riding a bumpy carriage all the way to Toano Light. The mental journey pushes past the perilous plains swarming with black wolves toward the dark, demonic mountains. Peering through the gloomy skies of his imagination, the familiar peaks of Mount Athos finally come into view. The misty atmosphere of his distant home fully materializes within his mind's eye. Suddenly, the comforting voice of his beloved master echoes through the vivid memory. Familiar sights of the village slowly form around his wandering consciousness. He envisions Lucy greeting him with a warm, welcoming smile. The loving image of his mother briefly surfaces, anchoring his heart to the location. Finally arriving at his mental destination, Yuki stands before the breathtakingly beautiful, crystal-clear spring. Reaching his hand into the pristine water, he physically shivers at the phantom sensation of its freezing temperature. Concentrating intensely on his mental image, Yuki stretches his hand forward and commands the water to appear. A tiny droplet trickles into existence, causing the young boy to blink in slight confusion. Suddenly, a massive torrent of water violently blasts into the room, prompting Basil to praise the spectacular success. Panicking as the flood continues, Yuki frantically realizes he has absolutely no idea how to stop the magical flow. He desperately struggles against the rushing tide, screaming for the magical geyser to plug itself. As the water finally ceases its rampage, Basil calmly congratulates the exhausted boy on mastering the spell. Turning toward his instructor, Yuki softly calls out Basil's name, breaking the older student's train of thought. Flashing a massive, genuine smile, Yuki sincerely thanks him and admits he could never have done it alone. Looking away with a flustered expression, Basil tries to brush it off by claiming he was just repaying his debt from the selection exam. Yuki fiercely shakes his head, warmly insisting that Basil's guidance was an absolute lifesaver. He excitedly explains that this success will save Emma, Cecilia, and all the corrupted mandragoras. Beaming with pure joy, Yuki credits Basil for bringing happiness to everyone and thanks him once again. Glancing around the completely flooded room, Yuki sheepishly apologizes for the mess and quickly offers to clean it up. Watching the cheerful boy, Basil silently reflects on the comforting warmth of Yuki's gratitude. Staring intensely at his young student, Basil outright asks why Yuki goes out of his way to help so many people. He points out that a talented kid like Yuki should be selfishly focusing on his own magical training instead of running errands for others. Pausing his cleanup efforts, Yuki softly explains that he is driven by a very specific dream. Looking forward with unshakable resolve, he declares his ultimate goal is to completely eradicate the miasma plaguing Mount Athos. Flashing another radiant smile, he adds that he simply wants to create a world where everyone can live together happily. Stunned by the sheer purity of the boy's ambition, Basil chuckles softly and admits that Yuki is truly incredible. He notes that Yuki is definitely a bit strange, but quickly adds that it is not a bad trait to have. Smiling genuinely, Basil declares that sticking by Yuki's side will likely lead him to discover some truly fascinating magic. Yuki happily agrees, and Basil tells the boy to rely on him for any future magical problems. Time marches forward, transitioning to the peaceful aftermath of the water summoning training. Emma excitedly rushes up to Yuki to proudly announce the official founding of the Walking Mandragora Club. She eagerly reports that their safe cultivation method was a massive success, and the harmless creatures are already charming the entire academy. Yuki notes that the little plants have become a massive pet boom among the female students, though their numbers are strictly limited by his holy water supply. Due to her groundbreaking work in safely cultivating the rare medicinal plants, Emma has officially been accepted as a special auditing student in the magic department. Smiling warmly at the news, Cecilia notes that their agricultural breakthrough will save the lives of countless sick people. Overhearing the success, Professor Riruka proudly boasts about the incredible achievements of her brilliant students. With the massive popularity of the Walking Mandragoras sweeping through the campus, a brand new academic trend begins to take shape. The narrative enthusiastically declares that herbalism is destined to become the hottest, most exciting subject at the entire academy. Pointing aggressively, Professor Riruka enthusiastically declares that herbalism is the hottest new trend in magic. Staring at her with a blank expression, Yuki wonders aloud what this sudden fad has to do with their actual studies. Slamming her hand down, the professor passionately argues that magic is more than just flashy explosions and that herbalism was once a respected magical discipline. When Yuki groans about learning ancient history, the eccentric teacher snaps back that a century feels like just yesterday to her. Shifting gears completely, Riruka dramatically announces that today's lesson will be a special outdoor field training exercise. Striking a commanding pose, she orders the students to venture out and find the legendary phantom magic grass known as Moryu. Arriving at the breathtakingly vast Cardano Canyon, the group gazes out over the lush landscape in sheer awe. Kristoff assumes Yuki is used to the scenery from growing up in the mountains, but the boy gently corrects him that his home was a barren, snowy peak. Gazing at the vibrant greenery, Yuki silently vows to restore his home mountain for his mother before asking Emma what the Moryu actually looks like. Emma enthusiastically explains that the elusive herb is the mythical, possibly extinct original ancestor of the mandragora. Clasping her hands together in pure joy, she admits she has never seen one and is absolutely thrilled to be searching for it alongside her friends. Scanning the dense foliage, Kristoff warns the group to stay sharp since dangerous magical beasts still roam the area despite the low miasma levels. Realizing their energetic teacher is nowhere to be seen, Yuki asks about her whereabouts, prompting Kristoff to silently hold up a mysterious piece of cloth. The prince explains that he is forced to carry the strange fabric because it contains Professor Riruka's personal teleportation magic circle. Stepping forward, Basil deduces that Riruka's spatial magic requires a physical connection, making Kristoff the perfect anchor due to their past contact. Realizing the mechanics behind the spell, Yuki notes that Kristoff is essentially acting as a walking base station for the professor's magical projections. Kristoff sincerely thanks Basil for the brilliant breakdown, openly praising the young student's deep magical knowledge. Humbly bowing his head, Basil apologizes for speaking out of turn while Kristoff warmly assures the boy that his expertise is highly valued. Holding up the enchanted cloth, the prince decides to test the connection and formally calls out to their absent teacher. A magical projection of Professor Riruka instantly bursts from the fabric, eagerly demanding to know if they have already found the rare herb. When Kristoff admits they haven't even started their search, the annoyed professor bluntly asks why he bothered summoning her. Kristoff points out that she should be supervising their field trip, but Riruka lazily insists she can watch from afar and demands a summary report at the end of the day. Waving off their loud complaints, the irresponsible teacher cheerfully tells them to do their best before abruptly cutting the magical connection. Staring at the empty space, Yuki mutters about their tyrannical teacher while Kristoff sighs and suggests they just get on with the search. Agreeing to move forward, the group resolves to handle the exploration themselves and only call for help in an absolute emergency. Reaching a fork in the rugged canyon path, the girls decide to split off and thoroughly explore the alternate route. Venturing deeper into the rocky valley, Pochi happily leads the boys through the dense, untamed wilderness. The trio carefully wades across a shallow, crystal-clear stream cutting straight through the canyon floor. Squatting down near the damp riverbank, they closely inspect the local flora for any signs of the mythical herb. Distracted by the vibrant wildlife, the fluffy little dog stops to playfully watch a flock of birds soar overhead. Wiping the sweat from his brow, Kristoff suggests they take a quick break in a quiet clearing. Sitting down to rest, Yuki sighs in frustration over their complete lack of progress in finding the elusive Moryu. Consulting his vast knowledge, Basil notes that ancient legends specifically place the magical herb deep within the valley's inner reaches. Realizing they need to push further, Yuki points upstream and suggests they head deeper into the treacherous canyon. Basil firmly objects, arguing that venturing into the dangerous inner depths poses far too great a risk to the prince's safety. Staring down solemnly, Kristoff quietly acknowledges the heavy burden of his royal status holding them back. Yuki silently sympathizes with Kristoff's restrictive position before suddenly sensing several hidden presences lurking in the shadows. Scanning the dense foliage, the sharp-eyed boy discreetly counts at least 3 hidden bodyguards silently watching over the prince. Unaware of the hidden guards, Basil remarks on the dangerous location and suggests they properly hydrate before moving on. Eager to show off his newly mastered spell, Yuki cheerfully volunteers to conjure some fresh drinking water for the exhausted group. Raising his hand, Basil flawlessly conjures a fresh stream of water from thin air. When Yuki asks if it is retrieval magic, the older student clarifies that it is simply standard water creation magic. Handing over the fresh water, Basil receives warm thanks from his grateful companions. Changing the subject, Kristoff asks about the magic department, and Basil praises it as an excellent environment to study theory. The prince gently suggests that Basil could stay at the academy even longer to continue his research if he wishes. Shaking his head, the dedicated student firmly declines the offer because it would defy logic and his sense of duty. He explains that he must serve the Albertia royal family after graduation to repay the massive debt he owes them for granting him his sight. Intrigued, Yuki listens as Basil reveals that his unique eyes allow him to see the underlying logic of the world with incredible clarity. However, he admits his natural vision is so poor he cannot read without the special glasses Kristoff commissioned for him. Smiling warmly, the prince insists he simply wanted to reward the young scholar's relentless hard work. Touching his frames, Basil proudly declares the glasses to be his most precious treasure in the world. Taking in the surrounding wilderness, the group enjoys a brief moment of quiet camaraderie. Turning his attention back to their mission, Kristoff suggests they establish a campsite before the sun goes down. Suddenly rushing forward, Yuki excitedly tells the older boys to wait right there. Watching him run off, the remaining duo discusses how nocturnal magic beasts become highly active after dark. They agree to set up defensive wards but note they need a location with clear visibility to stay safe. Ignoring the danger, Yuki recklessly scales the jagged rocks along the cliffside. Leaping across the treacherous gaps, he searches for the perfect vantage point. Panicking at the reckless display, Kristoff desperately shouts for the young boy to be careful. Warning him to watch his step, the prince watches helplessly as Yuki effortlessly bounds across the uneven terrain. Landing gracefully, Yuki declares he has found the perfect camping spot with a great view and close river access. Out of the corner of his eye, a faint glimmer catches the boy's attention. Plucking the shiny object from the ground, he examines it and wonders if it is a piece of ivanium. Rolling the ore in his hand, he notices it feels slightly different from the metal he is familiar with. Shrugging off the mystery, he casually pockets the strange stone for later inspection. Back at the campsite, Basil finishes gathering a large pile of firewood for the night. Bursting back onto the scene, Yuki proudly shows off a massive haul of freshly caught river fish. Amazed by the huge catch, Kristoff watches as Yuki eagerly volunteers to cook the entire feast. Digging into his supplies, Yuki enthusiastically announces that he brought a secret ingredient for tonight's dinner. Holding up a bottle of soy sauce, he reveals he used his retrieval magic to import the authentic seasoning directly from Japan. Eager to start cooking, Kristoff suggests they finally get the campfire going. With a simple snap of his fingers, Basil instantly ignites the gathered wood into a roaring flame. Suddenly, the enchanted cloth begins to flutter and glow with magical energy. Professor Riruka's projection materializes to check on their progress, prompting Kristoff to formally assure her that they are currently drafting their daily report. Brushing off the academic update, she asks if they have any questions, but Yuki simply boasts about grilling fresh fish. Smiling brightly, the innocent boy cheerfully invites their strict teacher to join them for dinner. Sweating nervously, the professor stammers out a weak excuse that her magical projection cannot actually consume physical food. Trying to maintain her authority, she reminds them that wilderness survival is part of the curriculum before feigning disappointment over missing the meal. Leaning closer to the projection, Yuki narrows his eyes as he notices something incredibly suspicious. Caught completely off guard, the hungry professor lets out a pathetic shriek as her bluff is instantly exposed. A surprised voice cries out in pain as someone suddenly tumbles into view. The dust clears to reveal a very confused person groaning on the ground. Looking around in sheer bewilderment, the professor realizes she is actually outside and wonders how this happened. The students stare in absolute shock, realizing they have somehow pulled the real Professor Riruka directly to their campsite. Yuki explains his logic, deducing that if she could send physical soy sauce through the connection, she could definitely transport herself. Stepping closer to the flustered professor, Yuki gently calls out her name. He warmly insists that eating a meal together with everyone is far more delicious and fun than dining all alone. Clasping his hands together, he earnestly begs his teacher to stay and join their campfire dinner. Blushing slightly, Riruka breaks eye contact and reluctantly caves to his heartfelt plea. Trying to maintain her authority, she pompously declares that as a teacher, she simply must fulfill the cute requests of her students. Hearing her acceptance, Yuki beams with pure joy. Cheerfully presenting the freshly cooked meal, he hands out the hot grilled fish to the eager group. Sitting around the fire, everyone takes their first bite of the steaming food. Their eyes widen simultaneously as the incredible flavor hits them. Riruka practically shouts in amazement, marveling that the river fish lacks any muddy taste and is absolutely delicious. Yuki happily explains his secret, revealing he used imported outdoor spices, a pinch of salt, and a dash of soy sauce to elevate the dish. Kristoff casually teases Riruka to eat more so she can grow taller, prompting her to angrily snap back that she is much older than all of them. Ignoring the bickering, Yuki cheerfully encourages everyone to eat as much as they want since he cooked plenty. Suddenly noticing something on the ground, Riruka points out that Yuki dropped an item and bends to pick it up. Yuki casually mentions he found it up on the cliff, prompting Riruka to closely examine the strange ore and question if it is truly Ivanium. She explains that Ivanium is typically only mined from lands where powerful spirits have resided for countless ages. Processing this information, the group wonders if that means ancient spirits actually dwell within Cardano Canyon. Riruka admits it is a strong possibility, noting that most spirits were tragically lost during the era of the Demon King. Though she wishes she had her library tower to properly research the mystery, she concedes that pondering the unknown out in the wild is somewhat refreshing. A gentle breeze drifts through the peaceful campsite as the fire crackles. Breaking the comfortable silence, Kristoff gently suggests that it is finally time for them to prepare for bed. Staring into the dancing flames, Riruka softly murmurs about the nostalgic scent of burning wood and wild grass. Despite living for a very long time, the ancient professor solemnly admits she had completely forgotten such simple, natural experiences. She reflects on how people often urged her to leave her isolated library tower, but none of them ever seemed truly sincere in their efforts. Looking up from the fire, a soft, genuine smile finally graces her face. Acknowledging the warm calls of her students, she openly admits that spending time like this is actually quite wonderful. For the first time, she looks directly at Yuki and sincerely thanks him for dragging her out into the world. Struck by her heartfelt gratitude, Yuki stares back in quiet awe. Recovering quickly, the young boy flashes a brilliant, bright smile in return. Emma suddenly sniffs the air, happily noting a fragrant smell, while Riruka casually observes the canyon's eerie stillness. The professor points out the complete lack of wind, right before a low, rumbling growl suddenly echoes through the darkness. An ominous silhouette looms in the shadows, threatening to shatter their peaceful night. Greeting the new day, Kristoff softly wakes a sleepy Yuki from his slumber. Flashing a bright smile, the prince asks if he slept well, to which Yuki cheerfully agrees. Thanks to his special skill that allows deep sleep anywhere, the young boy wakes up feeling completely refreshed and energized. Meanwhile, Basil groans in agony as he wakes up with a terrible crick in his neck. Rubbing his stiff joints, the scholarly boy laments how much he took his comfortable bed for granted. Watching him suffer, Kristoff gently suggests they leave the aching boy alone for a moment. Glancing around the empty campsite, Yuki suddenly notices that Professor Riruka is completely missing. Kristoff explains that she already returned to the academy and left a written message behind for them. The magical cloth displays her messy handwriting, urging them to do their best on day 2 and to call her if anything interesting happens. The prince adds that since she stayed up guarding their fire all night, she likely went back to get some much-needed sleep. Sighing in disappointment, Yuki wishes she had stayed so they could all share a perfect morning drink together. Intrigued by the idea, Kristoff asks what kind of magical beverage could possibly wake someone up instantly. Digging into his supplies, Yuki proudly reveals a packet of drip coffee he specially imported from Japan. Moving efficiently, he scoops fresh river water into a kettle and tosses some kindling onto the glowing embers of last night's fire. Just as Yuki pulls out a match, a groggy Basil interrupts his manual labor. Staring in confusion, the older student bluntly asks why Yuki doesn't just use magic to start the fire. Freezing in place, the young boy awkwardly realizes he completely forgot about his magical abilities. Sheepishly watching the kettle boil, Yuki weakly defends his manual method as being more romantic. Marveling at the rich aroma, Kristoff eagerly accepts a steaming cup from the young barista. Taking a cautious sip, Basil pleasantly notes that the strange, bitter taste is actually quite good. Yuki closely watches his friends' reactions as they experience the foreign beverage. He quickly deduces that while Basil enjoys it, the bitter drink is definitely not suited for Kristoff's refined palate. Inhaling the deeply nostalgic scent, Yuki remembers relying on coffee every single day in his past life. Taking a massive gulp, the reincarnated boy recoils in absolute horror at the overwhelming bitterness. Trying to play off his violent reaction, he forces a laugh and pretends the drink was just a little too hot. Internally panicking, Yuki realizes his new childlike taste buds are incredibly sensitive and deeply regrets forgetting the sugar. Defeated by the intense flavor, he decides to heavily dilute his cup with more water just to make it drinkable. Pivoting the conversation, Yuki asks the older boys how they want to handle today's exploration. Kristoff suggests that Yuki and Pochi scout the terrain while he and Basil investigate a different path. Suddenly, the prince screams in terror and orders both of them to get down immediately. Without warning, a flock of aggressive avian monsters swoops down from the canyon cliffs. One of the massive birds snatches Basil's precious glasses, prompting the desperate boy to launch a water spell in retaliation. The magical attack splashes harmlessly against the agile beast as it takes to the sky with its stolen prize. Reaching out helplessly, Basil screams for the monster to stop and return his most important treasure. Ignoring his desperate cries, the thieving bird flies higher into the treacherous canyon. Yuki hesitates to throw a rock for fear of shattering the glasses, but Pochi suddenly barks to grab his attention. The loyal dog signals that he will track the airborne thieves, and Yuki frantically urges him to go. Dropping to his knees, Basil apologizes profusely to Kristoff for losing the irreplaceable gift. Kristoff gently reassures the devastated boy, promising they can simply craft another pair. Trembling with grief, Basil insists it is not that simple because those specific glasses were incredibly special to him. Kristoff gently checks on Basil, noticing the older student is struggling without his missing glasses. Yuki brightly reassures Basil that Pochi is already tracking the bird and promises they will definitely get his treasure back. Massaging his temples, Basil laments that his incredibly blurry vision makes navigating the terrain a massive inconvenience. He explains that his unique eyes constantly gather overwhelming amounts of information, becoming a severe hindrance outside of academic research. Smiling softly, Basil recalls how Kristoff's precious gift finally solved his lifelong visual struggle. Clenching his fists with renewed determination, he fiercely vows to reclaim his glasses no matter the cost. Suddenly stumbling over the rocky path, Basil loses his footing and tumbles forward. Yuki urgently shouts his name and rushes over to check if he is injured. Catching his breath, Basil suddenly freezes as a strange object on the ground catches his sharp attention. He immediately asks Yuki to hand over the mysterious stone he picked up the day before. Closely inspecting the Evanium, or Basil identifies it as a powerful wind attribute spirit stone. Connecting the clues, he links the windless canyon to the overwhelming presence of these magical rocks. Basil theorizes that the abundant Evanium scattered across the valley is actually absorbing the air currents, perfectly explaining Professor Ruruka's earlier observation. Kristoff chimes in, noting that the local magical beasts were also behaving erratically due to the environmental anomaly. The group stares in silent awe as the massive ecological puzzle finally begins to make sense. Basil awkwardly apologizes for getting sidetracked, but Kristoff excitedly points out that this could be a monumental geological discovery. A sharp howl echoes from above as Pochi signals that he has finally located their winged target. Following the dog's gaze, the trio stares up the imposing, vertical canyon wall. High atop a precarious cliff edge, they spot the harpy crow's massive, messy nest. Squinting through the distance, Basil spots the familiar gleam of his glasses, but his blurry vision also detects something far more alarming. Staring at the bizarre, glowing mass sitting next to the glasses, Yuki nervously wonders what the creature could be. Brushing off the looming danger, Basil focuses entirely on retrieving his stolen property. Thrusting his hand upward, the desperate student channels his magic to summon a powerful water spell. Cursing his terrible eyesight, Basil struggles to aim while Kristoff laments not bringing a crossbow for long-range support. Searching for a better vantage point, Kristoff considers scaling a nearby boulder to close the vertical distance. Without warning, the solid ground beneath their feet begins to violently tremble and crack. A massive, rocky beast erupts from the earth, violently launching Kristoff and Basil into the air. Watching his friends plummet toward the jagged canyon floor, Yuki screams out their names in sheer terror. The terrifying rock monster fully emerges from the dust, roaring aggressively at the intruders. Realizing he is too far away to catch them, Yuki freezes in helpless panic as the boys fall. Just as disaster seems inevitable, a sudden blur of motion streaks across the cliff face. A mysterious, cloaked warrior flawlessly snatches the falling boys out of midair. Gripping the sheer stone wall with incredible strength, the rescuer lands gracefully without a single scratch. Setting them down safely, the stern man immediately scolds Prince Kristoff for his reckless behavior. Kristoff gratefully thanks his hidden royal bodyguard, Lorenheim, who exasperatedly begs the prince to stay out of dangerous, unmapped territory. The strict guard advises Kristoff to simply abandon the stolen glasses, prompting immediate protests from the royal. Kristoff fiercely defends the glasses as Basil's most treasured possession, while Yuki passionately adds that they are irreplaceable memories. Glaring up at the nest with absolute determination, Yuki vows that they will retrieve the glasses no matter what. Sighing in total defeat, Lorenheim reluctantly agrees to help the stubborn children with their perilous mission. Turning his steely gaze back to the towering cliff, the elite bodyguard prepares to scale the dangerous canyon wall. Hearing the mysterious voice again, Yuki pauses and wonders what the strange phenomenon could possibly be. The ethereal voice echoes brokenly, speaking of a traveler who will eventually arrive. The cryptic chant continues, declaring that the traveler will awaken the sleeping winds. The scattered words suddenly merge into a clear, ancient prophecy promising the revival of the wind upon the traveler's arrival. Staring in absolute confusion, Basil asks what completely unknown language Yuki just spoke out loud. Panicking internally, Yuki realizes his universal translation skill automatically translated the cryptic words. Basil intensely analyzes the situation, wondering if the boy just spoke an ancient, mystical dialect. A sudden, violent blast of wind erupts from the ground, sending everyone screaming as they are blown backward. Amidst the chaotic gale, Professor Riruka's magical projection violently flickers and stabilizes. Riruka grins wildly, cheerfully declaring that the situation has just become incredibly interesting. Pointing into the swirling vortex, someone frantically shouts that a massive entity has appeared. Sensing the immense magical pressure, Riruka proudly realizes her students have awakened an ancient spirit slumbering in the earth. Lorenheim fiercely accuses Riruka of orchestrating this disaster without warning, though she insists it was pure coincidence. The exasperated bodyguard yells that he can never trust the reckless professor's excuses. Struggling against the storm, Kristoff begs them to stop arguing as the enchanted cloth violently whips around his hands. The cloth violently slips from Kristoff's grip, prompting him to shout a panicked apology as Riruka is swept away. Spiraling helplessly into the sky, the professor screams for them to watch out for the cliff edge. Squinting through the raging storm, Basil deduces the entity's identity based on its physical manifestation and Riruka's clues. He identifies the colossal, swirling figure as Sylph, the high spirit of wind. Staring at the majestic spirit, Yuki realizes its magical aura feels incredibly similar to his mother's. He quickly notices the spirit's erratic behavior, questioning why it would attack them without any logical reason. Watching the chaotic gales, Yuki theorizes that the ancient entity has completely lost control of its own immense power. Resolving to save both his friends and the distressed spirit, Yuki knows he must stop the destructive storm before it tears the canyon apart. Bracing himself against the overwhelming wind pressure, the brave boy slowly steps forward into the eye of the storm. His companions stare in absolute shock as he willingly approaches the raging tempest. Kristoff desperately screams for Yuki to stop, warning him of the lethal danger. Ignoring the warnings, Yuki pushes relentlessly through the slicing winds toward the towering spirit. Reaching the center of the vortex, Yuki gently calls out to the massive, glowing entity. Looking up with a calm, friendly expression, he politely asks the spirit if it could please stop the violent storm. Reaching his hand forward, he softly asks if the majestic creature can understand his words. A faint, heartbreaking whisper suddenly echoes from the towering spirit. The voice trembles with ancient sorrow, confessing how incredibly lonely it has been while sleeping in total isolation. The spirit reveals it has been trapped alone within this desolate canyon for countless ages. It explains it was desperately waiting for the promised traveler to finally arrive and awaken it. Yuki's heart aches as he realizes the spirit endured centuries of crushing solitude while waiting specifically for him. Taking a deep breath, Yuki warmly calls out the spirit's true name to establish a genuine connection. Smiling brightly, he promises that Sylph will never be alone again and asks the entity to be his friend. The colossal wind spirit leans in close, recognizing a deeply familiar, comforting scent within the young boy. A brilliant flash of pure magical light engulfs the chaotic vortex as the massive spirit rapidly shrinks. Transforming into a tiny, adorable girl, Sylph joyfully tackles Yuki in a tight embrace and calls him her big brother. Caught completely off guard, the bewildered boy repeats her words in stunned disbelief. Snuggling into his chest, the little spirit proudly boasts about being a good girl while patiently waiting for his arrival. Recovering from his shock, Yuki gently asks his new little sister to disperse the dangerous storm. Flashing a bright, innocent smile, Sylph cheerfully agrees to his request. Seeking praise, the tiny spirit asks if she did a good job, and Yuki warmly pats her head in confirmation. The roaring gales instantly vanish, leaving the stunned onlookers to marvel at the sudden calm. Feeling a gentle breeze sweep through the valley, they realize the canyon's natural wind currents have finally been restored. The peaceful moment is interrupted by a series of sharp, triumphant barks from above. Looking up, Basil gasps in sheer joy as he spots Pochi proudly descending with the stolen glasses clamped in his jaws. Yuki enthusiastically thanks the dog, while Pochi smugly demands absolute gratitude from the humans. Meanwhile, Lorenheim dangles precariously from a high branch, firmly clutching Professor Riruka's enchanted cloth. Struggling to maintain his grip, the desperate bodyguard screams for someone to quickly pull him up. Riruka's projection laughs sadistically from the fabric, teasing the poor guard before mockingly thanking him for the rescue. Safely back on the ground, Kristoff wipes his brow and casually asks if the professor enjoyed the extremely exciting experience. The older boys suddenly turn their attention back to Yuki, their eyes widening in utter shock at the sight of the little girl. Staring intently at the tiny, floating spirit clinging to the boy, Basil stammers out a frantic question. The genius student connects the dots, recognizing the true identity of the adorable child. Pointing a trembling finger, Basil screams in absolute disbelief, demanding to know if Yuki actually forged a contract with a high spirit. The adorable, newly transformed wind spirit clings tightly to Yuki, happily calling him her big brother. The surrounding students gush over how ridiculously cute the little toddler is, noting her presence is a massive bonus to Yuki and Pochi's already overwhelming charm. Reaching down, Yuki gently asks Sylph to be a good girl and wait quietly with him. Meanwhile, the Academy's faculty holds a tense, emergency meeting over the unprecedented magical anomaly. The instructors murmur in absolute disbelief, acknowledging that in the entire history of the Academy, no student has ever forged a contract with a spirit, let alone a high spirit. Pushing back against the rumors, an older teacher argues that the child is only 6 years old and such a feat is impossible, until another instructor urges him to review the boy's updated appraisal report. Staring at the document in shock, the faculty realizes Yuki's magical skills have skyrocketed in a terrifyingly short amount of time. The appraisal sheet confirms that Yuki's unique skills, including his ability to tame beasts, allowed him to successfully form a direct contract with the high spirit Sylph. Back in the hallway, Yuki sighs exhaustedly, realizing his new spiritual companion has caused a massive uproar throughout the entire school. Feeling sleepy, Sylph rubs her eyes, and Yuki warmly tells her she can take a nap while he handles the situation. Watching her peacefully doze off, he softly speculates that being surrounded by so many noisy people must have drained her energy. Reviewing the recent findings, Yuki notes that Cardano Canyon, where Sylph was sealed, was actually teeming with raw Vanium spirit stones. He adds that following their discovery, several other minor wind spirits were found in the valley, proving that Vanium deposits are a strong indicator of spiritual presence. Before Yuki can ponder why Sylph was sealed away in the first place, Emma suddenly bursts into the room. Flustered by the intrusion, Professor Riruka tries to dismiss her, claiming they are too busy to talk. Ignoring the brush-off, Emma eagerly shouts that she finally found it. The professor freezes in disbelief as Emma proudly announces the discovery of the mythical Moryu herb. Riruka and the other students stare in utter shock, demanding to know if she is actually serious. Emma excitedly explains that Drafoy the mandragora actively sniffed out the ancient herb, while the little creature chirps proudly. She adds that she was about to give up on the search, but once the canyon's natural winds returned, the local flora completely revived, revealing the hidden treasure. Clapping enthusiastically, Yuki and Basil congratulate Emma and Drafoy on the monumental botanical discovery. Recovering her composure, Professor Riruka announces she will grant full academic credits to the specific group that found the Moryu. Catching the specific wording, Yuki blinks in confusion, realizing their group might not qualify. Kristoff sighs deeply, noting that since they had to return early due to the spirit incident, they technically failed the field exercise. Riruka strictly confirms that because they did not meet the required participation hours, they must completely redo the entire assignment at a later date. Despite her lazy demeanor, Yuki begrudgingly respects that the professor actually upholds strict academic standards. Looking on the bright side, Kristoff notes that a second trip will give them the perfect opportunity to thoroughly investigate the canyon's remaining mysteries. Basil nods in agreement but quickly adds a crucial caveat to their future plans. He argues that they desperately need a more experienced appraiser to join them, as his own observational skills are insufficient and the Academy's official appraiser is too elderly for a rugged expedition. To solve the problem, Basil reveals he plans to travel to the royal capital to track down a specific individual based on a local rumor. When Yuki asks about the rumor, Basil describes a famous trio from Toano Light who acted as noble thieves, stealing from the corrupt and giving to the poor. He explains that the group recently disbanded, but their short leader possesses a miraculous eye capable of perfectly identifying people's hidden abilities, leading Basil to believe it is the legendary appraisal eye. Furthermore, the rumors claim this leader has been operating an employment agency in the capital while actively spreading heroic tales of a warrior who commands Fenrir. Unaware of the true identity, Yuki excitedly praises the noble thief's cool reputation, admitting he would love to meet someone with such an incredible appraising eye. Suddenly, Professor Riruka chimes in, mentioning she read the exact same heroic tales in the library tower and found the descriptions suspiciously similar to Yuki himself. Staring directly at the boy, the professor bluntly asks if he personally knows the mysterious leader spreading the rumors. Struck by a sudden realization, Yuki freezes as the puzzle pieces finally click together. Wide-eyed, he pictures his old friend back in Toano Light. Pointing eagerly, Yuki shouts out that he might actually know exactly who they are looking for. Time skips forward as the group prepares for their upcoming journey to the royal capital. Declaring his absolute determination, Basil promises to track down the rumored individual regardless of what disguise they might be wearing. Waving him off with a bright smile, Yuki cheerfully tells his friend to do his best. Suddenly, a tiny, soft voice calls out for its big brother. Startled by the sweet sound, Yuki pauses and glances over his shoulder. After bringing Sylph back to the academy from Cardano Canyon, he notices the little spirit seems to have exhausted her magical power and can no longer float like his mother. Toddling faithfully right behind him, the tiny wind spirit looks absolutely adorable. However, Yuki's anxiety grows as he realizes her sleeping periods are getting longer, fearing she might be weakening just like Drafoy did. Staring down at the sleepy toddler, the young boy feels a heavy wave of concern wash over him. Scooping her up into his arms, Yuki realizes his spirit mother would know exactly how to care for another spirit's body. Gently holding the tired child, he promises to take her to see the great spirit Olympia. Clarifying that Olympia is his mother, Yuki earns a sleepy nod of agreement from the tiny girl. Turning to his loyal canine companion, Yuki asks Pochi for a ride, prompting the dog to eagerly prepare for a full-speed mountain sprint. Determined to find answers, the duo races up the familiar trails toward his childhood home. Arriving in a flash, Olympia gasps in sheer surprise at her son's sudden, unannounced return. Flashing a massive grin, Yuki happily announces his arrival to his bewildered mother. Blinking in confusion, Olympia's gaze drops to the tiny child resting in his arms. Her eyes widen with absolute shock as she instantly recognizes the little girl as Sylph. Despite her drastically shrunken size, Olympia confirms without a doubt that the familiar magical presence belongs to the high spirit of wind. Yuki quickly explains that they stumbled upon the ancient spirit during their expedition in Cardano Canyon. Olympia solemnly recounts how many of her brethren were hunted down or weakened by the toxic miasma during the Demon King's dark reign. She explains that some high spirits intentionally sealed themselves away in deep slumber to avoid total annihilation. Deducing that Sylph did exactly that, Olympia is overjoyed to finally reunite with another spirit after countless years of isolation. Digging into his pocket, Yuki presents the strange, glowing stone he found in the canyon. Inspecting the ore closely, Olympia identifies it as a powerful spirit stone brimming with wind elemental energy. She explains that these stones are the crystallized form of spiritual power, noting that the ones mined in Toano light are specifically known as Evanium. Casually gesturing outside, she mentions that similar stones are actually buried all around their own mountain home. Stunned by this revelation, Yuki excitedly asks if that means spirits are also hiding within Toano light. Humming thoughtfully, Olympia admits that while there might not be high spirits like Sylph, other lesser spirits could definitely be lurking nearby. Connecting the dots, Yuki realizes there is a genuine possibility of discovering even more of them. Smiling warmly, Olympia expresses her heartfelt hope that Yuki might be the one to track down all her long-lost brethren. Suddenly, the tiny spirit shifts in Yuki's arms and begins to stir from her nap. Rubbing her tired eyes, Sylph asks her big brother who the strange woman is, prompting Yuki to introduce his mother. Hearing the title of Big Brother, Olympia tilts her head in utter confusion before Yuki sheepishly admits the little girl simply started calling him that. Lighting up with pure delight, Olympia playfully declares that if Yuki is her brother, then she must be Sylph's mother. Laughing at the flawless logic, Yuki agrees as Olympia opens her arms wide to the toddler. Without a second of hesitation, Sylph excitedly leaps forward and calls her Mama. Olympia cheerfully responds, catching the tiny wind spirit in a warm, loving embrace. Snuggling deeply into her new mother's chest, Sylph closes her eyes with absolute contentment. Holding the precious child tightly, Olympia radiates pure, overwhelming maternal joy. Watching the beautiful family reunion unfold, Yuki and Pochi share a soft, heartwarming smile. Watching in awe, Yuki marvels as the protective magical barrier rapidly expands outward. He notices that the wind blowing from inside acts as an impenetrable wall, actively blocking the invading miasma. Connecting the mechanics, he realizes this highlights the fundamental opposition between spirit energy and toxic miasma. Yuki silently observes the powerful magical interaction shaping the purified environment. He theorizes that by combining his own magic with the strengthened spirit energy, he can recreate the miracle that birthed the walking mandragoras. Channeling his power, the young boy reaches out to cast his transformative spell. A fierce, glowing magical beast suddenly materializes from the swirling energy. Yuki deduces that animals and plants raised in miasma-free zones remain uncorrupted, proving that spirit power is the ultimate key to purifying the land. When Olympia asks about the creature, Yuki explains that it is normally a highly dangerous magic beast from outside the barrier. Staring at the tiny, innocent creature, Olympia marvels at how incredibly adorable it looks despite its fearsome reputation. The tiny beast tilts its head innocently, completely devoid of any malicious intent. It lets out a soft, high-pitched cry that instantly melts their hearts. Bursting with excitement, little Sylph gleefully declares she is going to catch the new arrival. Calling the beast cute, the tiny spirit happily announces to her big brother that she wants to play with it. Yuki warmly encourages them to get along and releases his other small companions to join the fun. Cheerful laughter echoes through the air as the adorable group runs off to play together. Watching them thrive, Yuki notes that the lingering miasma inside the academy had definitely been harming Sylph's health. He formally asks his mother to take care of the little spirit for a while, and she warmly agrees without a second of hesitation. Olympia expresses her deep, maternal joy at having her mountain home become so lively with all the new companions. Though unable to directly observe his world, she smiles brightly and hopes her son is living a wonderfully fulfilling life. Yuki cheerfully confirms that his days are packed with fun and adventure, bringing a relieved smile to his mother's face. Suddenly, Sylph rushes back over and excitedly calls out for her big brother. She reaches up toward him with an eager, playful expression. Yuki asks if she wants to play, and the little spirit enthusiastically agrees. He playfully lifts her up, sharing a warm and joyful moment with his new little sister. He watches his diverse group of companions peacefully enjoying their purified, safe haven. Seeing their absolute happiness, Yuki tightens his resolve to completely eradicate the miasma plaguing Mount Athos for their sake. Realizing exactly what he needs to do to achieve this massive goal, he makes a firm and unshakable decision. Approaching Professor Riruka with absolute determination, he formally requests a serious consultation regarding his future. Looking her straight in the eye, Yuki boldly declares his intention to embark on a grand journey to find the remaining spirits.